Chapter 1. Old School Kens. Frankie Gibbs' sunken eyes burst open. His underweight, sweaty midriff springs upwards and leans against the bed frame, panting and gasping for air. He's safe this time, although it takes him the thick side of 60 seconds to realise. He stretches over to his stale bedside half-pint of water to soothe his parched throat, a desperate orange piss level of parched, amplified by shutting his stuffy room's windows to both keep spiders and next door's rotten month-old garden bin bag stench out. Dread seeps in, not helped by his first sight of the day, a plethora of grubby beer cans and pot noodle packets varying in age littering the dim room. To add insult to injury, a familiar warm sensation around his crotch area becomes increasingly apparent, a stinging itch on the thigh, an absolute disaster. The level of sting means only one thing. It happened early in the night, leaving more time for the piss to penetrate the plastic protection sheet and seep into the springy mattress. A peek under the covers at his drenched Primark pyjama bottoms confirms all suspicions. It's happened again. Undoubtedly, the chugging of 8 pint cans of Galric's lager to get through a Film 4 Steven Seagal marathon headlined by On Deadly Ground played its part. Frankie gazes over to the corner of the room and grimaces, his clean sheet piles as bare as his stomach. Barring a miraculous end to his father Guy Gibbs' 5-year housework hiatus, it'll be a sheetless night tonight. Frankie's unproductive, leisurely bedroom-bound night on the piss all but guarantees that no washing was done. He strips the sheet off the bed so roughly that it shreds down the seam. About time, one would say, given its ancient cult status within the family after being passed down through 2 generations. But with a 3-week wait until his next universal credit payment and left down to 1 currently dirty sheet, it couldn't have happened at a worse time. Frankie wraps the manky sheets forcefully into a ball and heads authoritatively for the bathroom. A door downstairs clatters and he freezes in the hallway, the location of a catalogue of septic foot wounds caused by the perilously high pointing nail sticking out of the uneven floorboards. Nobody comes up the stairs. All clear. He storms to the bathroom. Off come the damp pyjamas, but his trousers seemingly glued to his leg prove far from a breeze to rip off. Stuffed in head first with all of his might, the dirty laundry initially fits in the washing basket, but after Frankie collapses onto the shower cubicle floor without noticing, it slowly expands and ends up hanging out of the open lid, dripping with piss and sweat. He stuffs his head into his hands as tears trail between his fingers, an unnerving racket from the disastrously unsafe shower fitting that's at least 10 years overdue for replacing ensures his anonymity in the paper-thin walled terraced house where most is hid between rooms. Horizontal fresh razor wounds on his right shoulder partially open up and ooze out a touch of blood. Meters away, down in the living room, Frankie's longtime friend Alfie Fenner stands leaning his elbow on an enormous snooker cue case. Caked in Dax wax, with slicked back hair and wearing a grey suit jacket, he's way out of place in these most unglamorous of surroundings, the presentability of which isn't helped by the unofficial house servant's self-imposed night off on the piss. Guy's stain-ridden high-vis jacket, sported at last night's heavy pound-a-pint session down at the local, is of stark contrast and befitting to the house's disarray. His supervisor role on a building site, which he's casually 2 hours late for today, allows him the privilege of washing it as he feels. Guy's youngest son, Dazzler, makes the most of his teacher shortage enforced half-school day by gloomily pursuing Premier League and European glory with Liverpool on FIFA career mode, an epic challenge given his recent ascent in game difficulty up to legendary.
Space with us should you be up for some proper match practice?
Guy proposes.
Full squad, I thought.
Alfie mutters dismissively.
I'll sack any of the 10 gentlemen fucks on the squad off. Any of them.
Guy passionately declares in his desperation to sign Alfie, an elite player at local level, up for the pool team that he captains.
Tuck, all fucking night. All you past it never had it mugs do.
You haven't a Scooby of our impenetrable dominance in the Bangor League.
Maybe if the standard was in the slightest bit stimulating.
With respect to the Bangor Pool League, its standard proves a stimulating challenge to those outside of the sport's professional ranks. Boasting a plethora of international and county-level players, its one-frame shootout format ensures a challenge for any player to remain unbeaten over an entire 20-match season. Fearing his reputation as a budding professional snooker player will bring out the best in his opponents, Alfie finds it safer to pretend he's above that level.
Div 1 champions last year, fella boy, I'll have you know.
Not just on about the pool though, am I? Round full of janky munters, that club of yours.
No way. More student pussy down there on a Wednesday than you can fucking fathom.
Indeed, it is a hotspot for student pussy. Not that Guy stands even the slightest chance of pulling a single one of them, which consecutive calamitous failed attempts has proven. Despite the fortune of a relatively handsome face and strapping physique, Alfie's dearth of pulling power, subsequent inferiority complex, and anger towards women has lately developed into a baseline curiosity in the incel community.
Oh right, yeah. Let's say it is. Why then is it you skulk off to Vietnam fucking flower seeking?
Alfie jabs Guy in the crotch with his cue case.
That grubby little chode you're senseless for your entire month of paid holiday every bastard year.
Yeah, well, that's not all I do out there, is it?
Other than the hotel's 2-star hygiene-rated kitchen's all-you-can-eat buffet, where he stocks up on energy for the following day's conquests, it is.
Won't mind taking Dazzler with you then?
Guy shudders at the mere thought. Brothels that know him on first-name terms, narrowed down to his favourite 3 that he rotates for daily visits on his trips, wouldn't let the boy through the front door. Not like the unregulated good old days.
Fearful all the birds will have me instead.
Dazzler sarcastically chimes in, without taking his eyes off a crucial FIFA EFL Cup semi-final clash with Huddersfield that he holds a slender 1-0 lead in. Deep down, Guy knows his womanising peak was over at 19 after putting on 4 pounds of flab following a futile attempt to quit his half-gram-a-day cocaine habit.
Do you think the other reason I piss off for is?
Alfie fails miserably to restrain the urge to groan.
Frankie, stuck here babysitting again.
That puts any late-night best-of-19 frame slogs, an inevitable 10-0 win for Alfie more often than not, out of the question for an entire month. Not just any month, but the last month of practice before his first pop at Snooker's Q School, a gruelling tournament held once a year that's the only gateway into the professional ranks. It has been assumed that Frankie will serve as his semi-willing full-time practice partner should he pull Q School off against the odds, a decision in itself that puts Alfie's slim chances of sustained success into peril given Frankie's comparatively lacklustre ability.
If he fucking knows what's healthy for him.
Guy fiercely chugs down a grainy lukewarm cup of tea. His incessant partying means babysitting, along with unhealthy mental and physical consequences for the few times Frankie's dared defy or abandon these duties have been a recurring theme for his eldest son's free time.
Come on, Gibbo. You'd been all over that.
Alfie picks up and admires a square-framed hung-up picture of Guy's rough, pension-aged, simple-minded father holding out a 2-foot carp by an angling lake.
Grubby old Gibbo Senior and your pleasant self out there shagging in grotty little brothels when you're a squirm. Character building shit that Dazzler sets him us out on.
Frankie cuts Alfie off by bursting in. Alfie and Guy smirk at each other piercingly, both sensing that his sleep-deprived, agitated entrance leaves one of his vast array of trigger points wide open for exploitation.
Oi oi.
Guy nudges Alfie's shoulder with his elbow.
Only that sodding Mardy when he's pissed through the last of his bedding.
Dazzler turns back to his game. While perhaps prone until recently of joining in with the bullying, by now he's nearly broken out of seeing Guy's fatherly approval by blindly following his despicable treatment of those weaker than him. Even at the age of 12, he possesses enough empathy to sympathise with the never-ending barrage of unanswered grief that flows Frankie's way left, right and centre. Frankie heads for the cupboards, determined not to gift them the satisfaction of reacting. He deliberates between the cupboard's sole 2 choices of cereal, Asda Value Frosted Flakes or unsealed stale porridge oats, eventually settling for the former. While bracing to pour out a bowl's worth, Alfie glances over.
Oh mate, no time for any of that cardboard drivel.
He struts over and snatches the box out of Frankie's hand.
Old school Ken's opening up 3 hours early. Missed in Bethesda's cricket div 4 title decider. Just for me. Unprecedented, I'm told.
Be sure that it is. Never will a more ardent fan of Bethesda Cricket Club exist.
Heads all over the shop, Alf.
Frankie sheepishly claims while rolling a fag to avoid eye contact.
And what?
Alfie quivers, taken aback by the prospect of playing on his little lonesome once again, something he can't stand for longer than 45 minutes.
Not got what it takes today, I'm afraid.
Bailing on me? Just before fucking Q school?
Alfie gazes away into the distance with manipulative inauthenticity.
Oh, this languid little dollstar ain't bailing. Lie around my house all day. Telling you now.
Wouldn't be on the dole had you not tormented my fucking supervisor, calling him a packy and that, would I?
Fucking forgot my double meat. Thieving prick deserved more, ask me. Packy or not. You don't want to be working with people like that anyway.
What Guy crucially leaves out is that he did get more. In the tune of following the bloke down a mountain path and knocking him out cold from behind with a knuckle duster one dreary November evening, leaving him needing a metal plate jammed in his cheek. So off they wander for yet another snooker session. Electing for the scenic route on this occasion, Alfie tears through a sparsely populated, sleepy mountainous village 400 metres above sea level, ragging hard on the revs the whole way and letting the ever-suffering village know of his acquired, on-finance, brand-spanking-new Honda's recently installed hairdryer-sounding exhaust. This is a significant detour, and a doubly unusual choice for someone as stingy as Alfie, or energy efficient as he puts it when called out, taken in part with Alfie thinking the stimulation of the mountains pre-match depletes Frankie of energy. This couldn't be further from the truth, as he slumps in the passenger seat devouring a paper-thin fag, or as Alfie would call it, a jail rollie, taking no notice of the scenery he's desensitised to and takes for granted.
Be me and you on the road after I turn pro?
Alfie proudly winks at Frankie, who pays him no attention. Once Alfie's focus switches firmly back onto the road, Frankie rolls his eyes, subtly out of sight.
Professional ball racker, free tickets to my games. Just all over a stab at subway management.
Alfie gazes optimistically at Frankie, and is disappointed at failing to extract any of the expected titillation out of him.
Chance for you to finally provide for Dazzler? Not long now.
Got him. Frankie glares at Alfie momentarily without being spotted.
A life-changing opportunity for me, no doubt.
He goes in for a hefty toke on his skinny half-smoked roll-up, and it burns down to within millimetres of the filter.
Ain't just that rolly then or what?
Frankie checks his tobacco pouch's meagre remnants.
On pure dust here, man.
Come on, mate. Left mine at home again, didn't I? Only a fucking rolly.
What's Frankie's is to be shared in Alfie's eyes, and he feels thoroughly entitled to deliberately leave his tobacco at home and pinch Frankie's, partly as passive-aggressive punishment for Frankie having never learned to drive. Frankie flicks his fag stump out the window, tears open his cutter's choice pouch and pours the sandy dust remains into a Rizzler. After a pit stop insisted on by Frankie to the village corner shop, who still remarkably sell urban tobacco for £1.50 per 5 grams despite the new 30 gram minimum law, they arrive at the unassuming, unsigned mock Tudor-style snooker club. Alfie bursts out of the car, grabs his rigor mortis dog coffin-sized cue case, and looks the place up and down, lapping it all in as if arriving to play at the Crucible Theatre itself. He leads them in through the entrance as they scrape their scalps on the borderline illegally short door frame and into the unremarkable dull bar setting. Something old school Ken has no desire to improve upon, given the place's customer demographic of old men who couldn't care less about anything other than the 90s era pricing of pints remaining intact. A selection of them duly lap up this cherished opportunity for late morning pints in their fiercely protected, self-designated square foot spots their stools simply have to occupy. While the punters pay no attention to the lads as they enter, old school Ken nods half-heartedly their way as he softly mops the floor near the dartboard. A pint of Worthingtons and a double gin with ice sit on the bar awaiting them, as there customarily is at bang on Alfie's regimented 10 AM daily arrival. They trundle up the narrow windy stairs towards the dimmed out snooker room, Frankie in front, of course, to serve as a beta walker for the constant puddles that form from the crumbling roof's many leaks. Alfie beams gleefully at the sight of the empty room, and with pick of the tables available, he heads straight for the renowned match table with an eerie dark purple cover. This table was special to Alfie, having watched Ricky Walden play an exhibition on it when he was 10, saving 3 months of pocket money up for the privilege. Despite holding bitter regret for failing to get his autograph as hoped, this still remains the highlight of Alfie's childhood. He pirouettes unnecessarily around the coin meter controlling the table's light and theatrically drops a pound in it. A meagre 12 minutes is all that provides. Despite being the instigator of the sessions, it's Alfie's mission to contribute as minimally financially to them as possible. This is made possible without detection by Frankie's nonchalant habit of placing his entire session's budget on top of the machine. So being none the wiser, Alfie pretends to put his own money in while Frankie isn't looking. As per his unspoken duties, Frankie folds the thick, heavy table cover to the impeccably tidy standard demanded by the die-hard league regulars who use the table for league snooker. Alfie meanwhile stands down his Q-tip. Once it's primed for action, he whips out his elite-level gleaming box of snooker balls, all proudly polished the night before, and passes them to Frankie to set up. One of the main tasks Alfie believes Frankie needs all the practice possible in ahead of his inevitable future career as his assistant. Once the balls are set, Frankie lays 2 cue balls on the balk line for the lag, the single simultaneous shot that decides who breaks based on whoever's ball lands closest to the top end after hitting the bottom first. As usual, Alfie waits for Frankie to hit his shot first, which ends up being inch perfect, nestling tightly on the top end of the table. Defeated by Frankie's unexpected excellence, Alfie doesn't bother hitting his. Frankie gives Alfie the nod to break.
Fuck's sake.
Alfie mutters under his breath. Such is his vexation, Alfie forgets his customary chalking of the skin between his thumb and second finger, and slams the cue ball down between the brown and green ball. While still taking his usual care with the shot, racking the cue back and forth 10 or so times, he smacks it with excess topspin. This sends the cue ball smashing into the pack of reds, flying in and out of the bulk area and leaving it nestled next to the side of the blue with a smattering of loose reds open. This uncharacteristic error leaves Frankie with a few sitters for his opening red. Piss easy for someone of his ability. A sitter it is, yet Frankie makes a total meal of it, miscuing the shot rashly, yet still managing to pot an easy straight red. Excess topspin, however, sticks the cue ball tight on the bottom right side cushion, leaving him an acute angle to pot the black ball, the only colour readily available. His already gloomy face dours. While being a competent potter, his concentration often lets him down when trying to compile breaks over 30. Not on this occasion, in which the black ball flies dead into the middle of the pocket. Alfie's face enviously sinks as he swigs his gin and reluctantly respots the black ball, as is the etiquette with snooker. Buoyant from the excellent shot, probably a 1 in 10 usual chance of nailing both pot and position as he did, Frankie gets down for the next shot and smacks in the straight mid-range red without touching the pocket's jaws. Such is the stun on the cue ball, it leaves him perfectly on an easy ping that he duly sinks without thinking twice, barely adjusting his body position to do so. Alfie begrudgingly respots the ping, although ever so slightly off its spot as to try and gain any sort of advantage possible. Instead of sitting back down, Alfie lingers around the table, waits for the exact moment Frankie cues up his next shot, glides slowly past and fiddles with the pocket's net. Frankie scuffs his shot, as Alfie knew even the slightest of distractions were in sight.
Bucket my arse,
Frankie grunts, disputing Alfie's insistence that the tables here have gaping pocket sizes in comparison to an average table.
Frankie Gibbs, 15.
Frankie roughly shoves the shabby club cue into the corner, slumps into one of the 50s-style deep-seated armchairs littering the place and chugs the remaining half of his pint. Frankie's custom Riley's 3-piece snooker cue that had set him back a pretty £99.99 among his all-time priciest purchases was deliberately left by Alfie at the dodgy local boozer on a £1 Wednesday. He'd known full well that it would get nicked, and that Frankie's performances against him would suffer by using the wildly contrasting levelling quality of old-school Ken's shoddy club cues. Alfie gets down mischievously on his opening red and smashes in the mid-range pot with excessive topspin.
Get me a gin and rocks,
he says while remaining in his shooting position with his head turned back in Frankie's direction. Frankie painstakingly checks his wallet and pulls out the last £20 note of his monthly universal credit allowance. It's by no means beyond Alfie to get the drinks in, especially considering his full-time job selling sanitary products in the dingy local nightclub's bathroom. However, he takes pleasure in depleting Frankie of his funds, always keeping a mental note of the lad's precise current wealth. In spite of this coming out of his food shopping budget, Frankie gets the drinks in without question, fearing an earful of self-pitying, manipulative guilt trips otherwise. Something like how Alfie always pays for the petrol, and gets them discounted snooker sessions through the landlord's dream of possibly being able to claim a pro trains at his gaff. Or his favourite, that Frankie would have been bored shitless in the house without the opportunity of a snooker session, and that one round of drinks is nothing as a way of showing the requisite gratitude for that. On the frames go in their traditional 1-10 match. Unable to recover from the sheer agony of his first shot, Frankie performs poorly, miles off his usual standard. Alfie wins the first, with a break of 47 being enough to seal it. Frame 2 and 3 swiftly follow in similar domineering fashion, as Frankie necks pint after pint, relegated to slumping in his seat and respotting colours. A customary 10-0 win is soon upon them. Alfie's half-arsed day's work done, with far gnarlier tests awaiting him at Q School tomorrow. After leaving Old School Ken a 50p tip each on the bar, post-snooker excursion nosh is the only thing for it. There'll be no debate as to grubby old Mike's Bites serving as the location for this escapade, a diner on Upper Bangor's mid-motorway outskirts, caked in 80s-themed upholstery that beams out a semi-impressive neon shop sign. It's Alfie's all-time favourite establishment, hands down, and as such there's never a glint of compromise on the subject. With Alfie having made sure Frankie will be skimped by the time they get there, all the bargaining power lies with him given that he'll be picking up the tab, little does Frankie know, from an allowance his mother dishes out before snooker for the post-session grub, not, as he'll undoubtedly claim as a guilt trip in the future, from his hard-earned wages. They perch themselves down near the rusty, chipped paint back door leading out to the joint's dull concrete yard, with Frankie's back to the bustling traffic of people streaming in and out. It's Alfie's table choice for 2 reasons. Firstly, because those heading out for a smoke will see his chode of a cue case, thus in his eyes expanding his sporting profile. Secondly, because people brushing past non-stop makes Frankie somewhat uncomfortable. Alfie's already sipping his double gin and tonic, ordered free of charge by texting the place's doting young waitress, who's infatuated by him under the illusion he's already a pro snooker player.
Nothing like those Midlands academies to get match sharp, boy. You saw it firsthand today.
Alfie coolly claims, snugly lounged back on a cool cushioned seat.
So, did you give old Sean Murphy a lesson on the bays then, or what?
Frankie asks.
Bastard didn't give me the chance.
Alfie looks down at the tatty plastic table linen.
After all that jibby we're dishing you?
Basically, all the lads were there. You know, Dominic Dale, Kyron Wilson, even the Thunder from down under rocked up.
Money matches again, I assume?
Round robin, mate. Couple of grand each. The porcupine prick did just edge me out.
Alfie's eyes whirl around as he struggles to think of what to say next.
Oh, no shame in that, mate.
Frankie reassuringly says after an awkward pause.
Didn't matter. Basically, I slaughtered Dominic Dale, got a century, then annihilated the warrior. Dale was loving it, rolling over the table, the lot. Ended up calling me the warrior. Basically stole Wilson's name. It was quality.
Brama, that is, mate. Just wish I could have been there.
Frankie taps his beer bottle against Alfie's.
Best thing is, Sean Murphy didn't even turn up.
No show prick. After all that.
No show prick sticks to his own table whenever one visits in town, boy.
A gaunt, ragged-looking waiter, rocking an uneven, sideburn prominent stubble and a sideways fringe hairstyle, appears and hovers by the table holding 2 menus. Alfie eventually spots him, grimaces his way, snatches the menu, and vaguely flicks through.
Bacon cheeseburger, all the salad and chips.
Alfie says without looking the waiter's way.
Right, I'll...
I want to tune this pub while you're at it.
Alfie holds his menu out, impatiently inviting the slapped-ass-faced waiter to take it back, who turns to face Frankie with a shallow grin.
Fucking fry it, please, mate.
Frankie drops the menu on the table after his uncharacteristic decision not to copy Alfie's order. Our waiter darts to another table, disappointing many others glaring his way who are long awaiting the only waiter on shift service. Frankie's hand quivers delicately, Alfie's open-mouthed, despairing glare beaming his way as of the split second he placed his order spells trouble.
What on earth are you on? Fucking fry up?
Didn't have a chance to scram my bastard cereal, did I?
Frankie responds, hiding his paralysing fear of Alfie's disapproval.
What kind of freak has a beer with a fry-up?
Frankie shrugs and takes a decent chug of beer. Droplets fall from either side of his mouth due to his shaky hand.
Take another swig of that and I ain't paying for the order.
Frankie continues to swig his beer, finding a level of assertiveness ordinarily alien to him.
At least a 5-mile trek down to 55 from here, Bert.
Frankie slips back in his seat.
Not like you've got any dough on you, is it?
Alfie's focus quickly returns to the bottle of Hobgoblin.
I just can't hack this monstrosity.
Alfie grabs the bottle out of Frankie's outstretched hand and pours it out of the back door, much to the shock of the surrounding tables, other than a couple of fat, hairy bikers purely absorbed in the entertainment unfolding in front of them. As the Hobgoblin Gold slithers down the asphalt backyard, a brown Cane Corso dog tied up outside gratefully licks up the unexpected treat flowing their way. Chapter 2. 8 years earlier. A pungent stench, one Frankie had grown to loathe even by his tender age of 11. Be over though, once it's sent slithering down his sinkhole for now. Well worth being on the thick end of a slap for, but chances of that were likely anyway. Whether the wine, a stomach-churning 13% Pinot Grigio on this occasion, went down the sinkhole or his volatile mother's trap. At least this way his day, which had become a rough 2-day sleepless stint owing to balmy cocaine parties hosted downstairs by his parents, might stand a fighting chance. This 5 a.m. desperation-derived experiment is a true stab into the unknown. How would Josh Gibbs fare for 3 days without wine? An irresistible opportunity for Frankie to find out, especially given the painstaking last week of whining about being skint until payday. Even from Frankie's financially naive perspective, he struggles to buy it. Buy that a thoroughly respected mental health assessor, the county's senior decision-maker as to who's referred for mental health care and who is paid double the local average salary for the privilege, could ever find himself in such a financial state. It didn't cross his mind for long, as the blame surely lied with his idle, semi-retired at 35 construction site manager father for having 2 years off work. Phantom anxiety and depression diagnosis being his excuse. Complaints Frankie's heard him bragging left, right and centre about fooling multiple doctors into signing him off on. First bottle down, the stench being almost enough to make Frankie quit, but he couldn't give up that easily. He tossed the green tinted bottle aside and delicately opened the kitchen's outdated 70s style cupboard doors. It's difficult to say what troubled him most. 2 crusty slices of mouldy bread being the cupboard's solitary food content, or the sight of 3 further unopened bottles of wine, ensuring another daunting few minutes of that ghastly aroma before its mission accomplished. Not one to shake a challenge, he cracked on, despite the hunger pains growing by the second, and now knowing they wouldn't be cured any time soon. In the bin the bread went, first of all, with Frankie taking no chances. Despite it being what most would deem undoubtedly past its edible state, it was far from inconceivable that his father Guy would use it, as well as gone-off meat in similar condition on the sly for Frankie and Dazzler and chop around the mouldy bits. Especially when a steaming hangover stops him wobbling 300 metres down to the local bakery for something fresh. Bottle by bottle, Frankie tipped the wine down the sink, millimetres away from puking down his faded hand-me-down t-shirt by the time he's on the second. He only managed to avoid this through closing his eyes and thinking of every crucial upcoming West Ham game he'd now be able to watch live after finally figuring out the world of online streaming. Bang! Out of nowhere came a smack on the back of the head from Frankie's sleep-deprived mother Joss, snapping him out of jollier thoughts in an instant as he dropped the bottle in the sink. Joss desperately reached out to grab it, with her other hand throttling the back of Frankie's neck. Too late, all but empty. Her snarling glare descended into despair. Her eyes wailed in all directions, pondering a way out of this withdrawal-ridden 3-day nightmare now on the cards. Her small group of addiction-riddled friends would no doubt be too skint to bum a lend off. Pound a pint and a scattering of preying cocaine dealers waiting there to pounce on that 4-pint-deep loss of inhibition being why. Joss gazed back at Frankie, wishing he'd never been born.
Things I must have done in a past life to have an ungrateful fucking dimbat like you squeezed down me, eh?
Frankie hung his head in shame and gazed down at his abnormally large feet. Joss slapped him across the cheek with an open palm. His slaps never usually came in bunches, so a real threat was now present for Frankie. Up his hands went, mimicking an orthodox defensive boxing stance learnt from Fight Night Round 3. Her violent outburst of last month and the stint of consequent concussion and dizziness from his burst eardrum still lived vividly in his memory. While being a match for most men, and a solid puncher who usually aimed for the temple, Joss had loose accuracy and was still half asleep. One of her swingers could easily land square on the ear, and another week stripped bare of football training was not worth risking.
I don't like how you are on the wine.
She bent forward, patronisingly, with a wry smirk.
Should have taken you to fucking rotting care.
Nothing stopping you.
Bang. Barely having left Frankie time to finish his outburst, Joss walloped him flush on the jaw, her fist well and truly closed this time. Frankie stumbled back, open-mouthed, clenching his brutalised face.
Where despicable little shits like you belong, but I'd be looked down upon, even if they knew what unforgivable bother and bedlam you bring to this family. That is what's stopping me.
She slammed a pile of paper off a nearby table.
Now fuck off upstairs and get your telly.
No, please. I won't do it again. Ever.
And your PlayStation, no! Now!
Joss dragged Frankie away by his t-shirt, his knees painfully scraped on the thick, rough brown carpet.
We don't get enough to replace the wine! Then back for your second telly will come!
Which is no isolated threat. The difference being this time that Frankie is actually being told, albeit violently, rather than his precious gear being carted off while blissfully unaware at school. Without doubt, the charming young oik donning the sex checkout would throw a bit extra onto the trade in prices, mainly out of naive hope that Josh would finally accept one of his creepily persistent invitations for a night on the lash. Chapter 3. On the Supermans. Early evening winter darkness is upon them as Alfie slowly pulls up outside the Gibbs' family house with a brimming grin of content slapped on his face, fueled by the mounds of energy extracted from Frankie all day. A flickering lamppost illuminates their detached terrace house and the front garden's scattering of stray rusty car parts salvaged from construction sites sitting on the scabby lawn. Frankie sinks deep into the passenger seat as he picks up the blare of self-righteous sniggering, broken, drunk chatter and heavy generic house music bellowing out of the place.
Another grot-infested night for you in paradise, Squire.
Alfie peers towards the open window and grins.
Gibbo's got his number one munters round.
Wouldn't go near the caveman.
Sally and Stacey are anything but his munters, given Guy's 9-year sex drought bar paying for the privilege. Alfie's one of the only drips in the tiny city of Bangor to believe such fibs. Out steps Justin Wee-Wee, emerging gracefully through the stratosphere of duty-free fag smoke and style amphetamine-induced sweat. His ridiculed name dragged through a generation, bestowed upon him after his chronic house burglar of a father pissed in his pants before his inaugural court appearance. Being a local small bag drug dealer, there's no doubt why he's about. Despite not following in his father's footsteps categorically, the piss-poor purity of his drugs have routinely had him referred to as a bank robber by customers. His baggy, non-fitting, roughed-up dark blue tracksuit bottoms scrape on the soft, muddy grass.
Justin wee-wee the lot. Best mates you and him, ain't ya?
Alfie grimaces, thinking back to his primary school-aged rivalry shared with Justin over feeble old Frankie's attention and devotion, a battle Alfie eventually won after an inordinate amount of effort. Justin belatedly spots the car and squares over, his vacant gaze lighting up at the prospect of more swift potential business. He wiggles his hand in a rock and roll, Dio-inspired second and fifth finger pointed up gesture.
Get out!
What?
Get out of my fucking motor! I'm not having that fruity anywhere near me!
Frankie leisurely opens the door and looks around for any left belongings.
Get out!
Alfie shoves Frankie out and hurtles off, slamming the door shut from the inside as he speeds off, leaving Frankie sprawled out on the lawn to get up and dust himself off.
How are you, Square Tyre?
Justin offers his hand out for a shake. Frankie looks down and elects to fist bump him back.
I'm pro early then. Course I am. Your old man and his wreckhead buddies have afforded me quite the cushy existence since. Have they, yeah?
Justin continues rattling off barely impressive statistics and milestones of his post-release earnings, none of which Frankie takes any notice of, with his mind firmly on the sleepless nights and carnage that will entail the chugging of at least 4 pints to stand the slightest chances of sleeping through. They part ways after an awkward handshake turned fist bump, and Frankie skulks inside to face his fate. Guy's joined inside by his old mates Pedder Ogwen, Raza, and Pedder's long-term on and off partner Stacey, a fiery, promiscuous sort who's had countless affairs behind his back. Notwithstanding this, Pedder remains trusting of her, putting up with it partly out of inescapable fear that he's punching above his weight and couldn't dream of doing better than her. Completing the sweaty lineup is Stacey's unassuming best mate Sally, a reluctant member of the group who's only stuck around for access to cheap drugs, her ever-increasing cocaine habits slowly blinkering the reality of the sheer lack of similarity she holds with any of them. 3/4-ounce cling film wrapped bags of weed sit on the table being communally chain-smoked, one so carelessly placed on the edge of the table that a bud or two slides off every time it's picked at. A promising result for Frankie or Dazzler tomorrow, both standing to profit from the sloppiness of others in floor lemon kush. Pedder chomps half of a Superman MDMA pill and puts the other half back in a communal bag of 20 on the table. While weed and MDMA gets this lot tingling, it's not nearly enough to sustain the night. Their main squeeze is undoubtedly cocaine, of which plenty is flying around too. Guy crushes up a gram's worth on the same piece of granite he's owned since the age of 19. This stuff, however, is closer to the category of bash, which, as the name suggests, is bashed up with benzocaine, vitamin B, or some other cheap mixer.
Oh, and that Barry Hawkins. Bull cunt. Cost me a brickload earlier.
Guy ruefully alludes to a squandered 400 quid staked on his lunch break down at William Hill.
I've told you once.
Razza dabs a chunk of cocaine onto his gum with his thumb.
And I'll tell you again, mate. You are a fucking spastic for not getting on the cryptos with me.
Oh, fuck all that, Drossbert. Nah. At least I blow my dough down the bookies. Back into the British economy.
Razza scoffs and snatches the granite tray, boasting a tasty selection of slug lines. Razza winces and wrings his head out. A nasty rock in the line that not even his semi-functioning left nostril can handle eventually flows through his airway after a brief scare. Frankie sneaks in apprehensively, desperately attempting to remain undetected, which quickly proves unsuccessful. A mostly passive, welcoming, collective drunken roar erupts at the sight of his presence.
How are you, lad?
Pedder slurs, leaning back and holding his hand out for Frankie to slap.
Oh, I'm sound, me.
Wanting minimal exposure to the dishevelment unravelling in front of him, Frankie briskly heads into the kitchen.
Bollocked any of those Tinderbirds yet, or what? Who was that troll? Oh, what was her fucking name? Kez!
A discovery made after using Frankie's phone without permission to order a takeaway, owing to the lifetime ban slapped on him by the town's sole 2 kebab shops for racially abusing staff.
Tired little sort, if that's your thing.
What you on about, bollocked?
Stacey asks, her tone as sincere as her repulsion.
Gotta put something in her, ain't he? It's what blokes like him do. All in.
Guy bursts out in laughter that's met by cool silence among the room. Frankie scoffs at the joke commonly thrown out at his expense and reaches all the way to the back of the dingy undersink cupboard where a 4-pack of pint-sized Kronenberg cans is conveniently hidden in a hole behind a multi-pack of toilet brushes. A deliberate tactic to deter Guy from ever finding them. Vague, gloomy late morning winter sunlight pokes through the half-shut curtains and showers the sheer turmoil left in Guy's wake. Empty bottles dripping out runny ash after being used as makeshift ashtrays, and a dried bloodstain from Pedro's torrential nosebleed are noteworthy, with some of the blood having trickled onto Dazzler's beloved Xbox and FIFA case. Broken glass, flaccid balloons, and a scattering of NOS canisters add to the dreary checklist of chores Frankie's day will inevitably be dominated by. Most surprisingly of all, plates and makeshift DVD cases harbouring crumbs of cocaine lie everywhere. Uncharacteristic wastefulness, with it not being typical of the group to leave such valuable resources in their wake. Perhaps a signal of their newfound collective jackpot in Justin Wee and his cheap, accessible gear as a result for Guy, now having tasty treats galore to kickstart his faltering mind upon awakening. Split curry takeaway curiously occupies all corners of the room, a sure sign that the cocaine was weak, as a curry would ordinarily be unfathomable if they were as wired off the stuff as desired. Frankie stumbles in with a pounding headache, courtesy of yet another hangover, made worse by the paper-thin one-pop joint he's toking. His torn, baggy tracky bottoms flap around his ankles, stale sweat and alcohol fumes lumber up his airway, and the chore-ridden day ahead stares him square in the face. In preparation, he cracks open a window and tightly shuts the curtains carelessly left open. A shattered bottle of Jack Daniel's Fire, with a footprint blood trail leading out of the room, swipes his attention. Fearing the worst, he launches his fag into one of the array of ashtrays and is led by the blood trail to their dingy, outdated downstairs bathroom, a place littered with the most hideous fittings the 70s had to offer, and made uglier by the selection of varying coloured vomit interspersed around the toilet. To Frankie's horror, Dazzler's sitting upright in the bath, wincing with a steely determination in his eye, and his hands perilously close to a piece of glass lodged in his foot, sticking out half an inch.
Don't touch it, no?
Frankie yanks Dazzler's arm safely away from the glass.
Not keeping it in there for footy, am I?
Dazzler says, deadly serious about making it to a crucial school team practice, the last before their crunch tie with feisty rivals Diffin and Ogwen. Frankie carefully examines the damage and shakes his head.
Jammed right in there, that. Going A&E. Come on. Fucking way.
Dazzler squirms backwards at the thought.
State on that, Daz.
They share an intense stare-off before Frankie scowls and dials Klaus Cab's number.
I'm belling a taxi, and when he gets here, you're fucking getting in it. You heard what social services said last time. A&E will be all over that.
Frankie looks down at his feet apprehensively, coy over whether to hang up the call with it being Guy's last chance at holding custody of Dazzler. His grip on keeping this dire environment for a child under wraps, a skill taught in depth by his civil servant ex-wife, has waned of late. As such, neighbours have submitted a catalogue of complaints, expressing significant concern about Dazzler's safety. Enough's enough. Frankie storms out into the living room and whacks out the infamous miscellaneous medical box. Its dreary, murky colour, rough outer plastic interior, and creaky hinges, just some of the signs it wasn't a 21st century purchase. Inside is a healthy stock of 30mg Valium and Zapion mixed pills and a few strips of 10mg Valiums. Not what he's after, but a mental note worth making for next time Sir John Benzo's needed to help cure any insomnia. Instead, he grabs a roll of bandages and a rusty pair of tweezers, quickly dispelling any qualms and assuring himself there is no other way out of this predicament. After scrambling around for anything close to disinfectant without luck, his eyes clap onto a half bottle of cheap, nasty Lidl vodka. A king-size Frankie Lampard senior poster on the wall gives him the kick up the arse needed to get it done, and he trickles some of the vodka onto the tweezers while strutting out of the room. In the short walk to the bathroom, his nerves and inner voice wreak havoc on his newfound confidence. All the times of being told his coordination was dog shit, his lack of connection and trust in himself the lot. But it's time to step up. Frankie bumbles back into the bathroom, sheepishly, and places the equipment for the job down on the surface. Swiftly acknowledging the level of its filth, he takes the tools back off.
Oh, won't be on the shorts today, me.
Dazzler grimaces.
Should have seen Johnny on the Cavossier last night. Oh, aye.
Frankie says with dwindling focus on what's being said as he scrubs the filthy bathroom surface with disposable wipes.
How did you get all that? Some creep. Fucking... Damo. Damo's name was. He went in for us. Only asked for 3 bar.
Dazzler says, proud of him and the lad's success getting booze from the shop on their first crack.
Must be raking it in then. Johnny got at least half a bottle down him, man.
Dazzler burst out laughing.
Currents on the Menai Strait nearly took him clean down to Dublin. 4 of us had to grab him. Always said, fair play to him. Boys, my 13th eye is going to be fucking out of this world. And he didn't half deliver.
His smirk soon wiped, as Frankie slumps over the side of the bath with the vodka.
Be grim this for a sec.
Frankie dangles the vodka perilously, steadies his trembling hand, yanks hold of Dazzler's ankle before dripping barely a shot's worth over the shard. Dazzler instinctively kicks upwards with his other foot, avoiding the planting of a shiner on Frankie by a whisker, courtesy of slick head movement.
Not quite the madman you make out. Just do what you gotta do.
Dazzler shuts his eyes.
I'll keep still.
Frankie peeks closely at the glass, sticking his head into the danger zone of Dazzler's leg space.
Shard's barely poking out.
Frankie peers up full of dread and shuffles out into the kitchen, facilitating an eerie silence for Dazzler to ponder what was to come. Following a 24-hour pre-drinking session at the family house, prior to their parents inconspicuously darting off to watch Primal Scream headline Gotwood Festival, Dazzler suffered a similar fate at the hands of stray sesh glass at age 4. With no one about and having been strongly advised to never phone ambulance or police without permission, a bit of Google research taught Frankie to heat a glass bottle to get it out. That time, the shard was half the size. Unfortunately on this occasion, there isn't a 330ml bottle in sight, the ideal size for the job, as it leaves less air to fill. Forced to settle for a 660ml Heineken guzzler, he dabs the bottle tip on a preheated electric hob. About a minute usually does it. He taps his index finger on the thing to make sure it's up to task, which a service bank confirms. Without hesitation, he storms back over to Dazzler and places the sizzling bottle tip over the shard.
Hurts, you fucking prick.
Frankie yanks the bottle away.
Daily ring sting from Bryn and Neuadd grub. Worst care home in the country is going to sting a hell of a lot more.
Dazzler holds his head back, resigned to his fate, and within seconds comes the sweet clanging of the shard shooting out of his foot. Frankie swivels the bottle around, exhibiting the fruits of his heroics.
No brother of mine rots away in Bryn and Neuadd.
Without giving the soppiness of his declaration time to set in, he dollops a chunk of the vodka on the open wound, inflicting pain piercing beyond belief, worse than the extraction itself, and then laps it up in shaky, borderline vintage bandaging.
Not exactly what you want before school, eh?
Dazzler struggles to reach the door without limping.
Out of all the days you actually want to go in. Got Sir Hugh down their place. Captain today, but I'll get the sack if I don't go in every day this week. From the team. And possibly the school. Lard-ass social worker cunt won't think twice about doing Gibbo.
Dazzler looks down shamefully at his bloody socks. Frankie nods and heads for his sock drawer, concealing the disappointment of knowing his sock collection of 3 pairs bears one measly pair of worn-down grey socks threatening to burst out in holes at their next challenge of durability. But there's no choice, and he lobs them at Dazzler. Frankie can't help but giggle as Dazzler slips on the ill-fitting socks as they droop over his feet like a baggy condom. This stops, as Dazzler struggles desperately to stick his shoe on, a feat the progressive swelling was making harder by the minute.
Can't even do you a taxi.
Frankie mutters, his face blushing red raw.
10-minute shit on the bog, and train's free. And if they catch me, I'll just pretend I'm a mong.
Dazzler drags his foot on the floor as he walks out of the door. Frankie stares vacantly into space, bracing himself for the hours of laborious housework ahead of him. To help, on goes King Tubby, an all-time dub favourite of his. After an eternity perched down on his stiff hip, sweeping every last shard from under the sofa with a dustpan and brush, it's onto the bathroom. An explosion of varied coloured dried vomit, some of which spewed up with no effort made of getting it down the toilet, awaits him. After a quick splash with the shower head to finish off the scrubbing, the room's spick and span. After unsuccessfully mopping the latest permanent spilt ashtray stain on the linen and making 5 trips out to the bins with stacked bin bags of bottles, Frankie spots a bud of weed on the floor. A result, he puts it aside safely for a tasty late morning leveller. Last but not least is the cocaine plates and cases. Any thought of Dazzler snooping a pop at the free drug remnants lying about as he occasionally doesn't bear thinking. Frankie scrubs them thoroughly and leaves the glistening plates drying on the era. Finally, he can flop out for this long-awaited joint. This time, a tasty bit of skunk dropped by Razza, stuff pined over so desperately that he hides it to avoid being heckled and guilt-tripped all night for not sharing. Understandable enough, with his mates left languishing in the dull high of Justin Wee Wee's shabby mass-produced county line farm weed. 1/2 gram at least, Frankie reckons, maybe closer to 1 gram given its density. He grinds the lot up, and his renowned rolling speed puts the joint together in no time, albeit regrettably with flimsy tobacco dust from the end of a BHS pouch also salvaged during the clear-up. Guy stumbles through the door in his classic grubby white vest and black Adidas joggers, spewing out sweat with a manic jig to his step.
Bed's too big without ya.
All seemingly well as he wanders into the kitchen in his own world. Still pissed as a fart and shaky, he fills the kettle up in the kitchen, but fumbles it into the sink as the wind's thumped out of him by the sight of the gleaming row of chaotically stacked plates airing out.
Shit, a brick. Ain't sterilised all the plates, have you, boy?
Panic stations set in. An amateur mistake. The worst thing Frankie could have done, leaving Guy unable to guzzle the collective crumbs to soothe his grittier than average come-downs. Frankie gets up to leave, not up for hacking the inevitable grief coming his way. A penetrating slam from the room next door stops him dead in his tracks. 3 vintage Japanese plates shatter on the floor, collapsing the awkwardly stacked pile. Frankie swiftly pockets his phone and tobacco pouch and stumps out his long-awaited joint.
Get here a minute, will you, Squire? Fucking rinse to be clearing this up.
Going dole.
It's dicey for the Dazzler like this. Wait there, will ya?
Guy deviously scuttles over, holding a quarter-full bottle of vodka by its neck, smirking insincerely.
Just wanted to say how splendid it is to see ya session. Getting on it. Having a right mad one.
Guy chugs some of the vodka before holding up the bottle and frowning at its dwindled remains.
Used a bit.
Guy's ferocious glare knocks the stuffing out of him.
Had to disinfect Dazzler's sliced up foot.
Guy lightly nods. His bloodshot eyes remain fixated on Frankie.
Swear down. Believe me, I wouldn't go near that utter garbage for a laugh.
Liar! Just like your cheap slag of a mother was.
Guy sticks the bottle into Frankie's cheek.
Come near anything I bought that I earned, you idle cunt, and I'll shatter this or something just as sharp right in your fucking mug.
Guy says, with Cockney pronunciation learnt from his adolescent days spent trying to be a hard nut in Farnland, Kent. He turns Frankie around and boots him hard on the ass. Frankie clatters forwards into the door, catching the side of his head on the corner of the letterbox.
I'm the only one who works in this house.
Frankie only just manages to slide past the stiff door as the bottle shatters all over it. Some of the glass escapes outside through the diminishing gap as the door's shut.
Fuck do you think you are?
As Guy struts into the living room, he turns back to the door.
Tell the dole office you're an horrible selfish rotter while you're out there, boy.
Suddenly overcome by a destabilising dizziness, he collapses onto the sofa. Right in his eyesight is Frankie's bonus spliff, which he sparks with his trusty pink clipper. Taking in an ambitious first drag given his declining lung capacity knocks him for 6. He retches out in a desperate coughing fit before a dreaded reflux gag sends shockwaves through his senses. Anticipating his fate, he sprints to the bathroom, dry heaving the whole way. Chapter 4. 8 years earlier. Frankie's eyes abruptly burst open. No doubt the odds-on favourite at 5 to 6 had to be the criminally unstable hand-me-down IKEA drawer set and 3-day-old crusty Cocoa Pops balls shaking vigorously on top. But one could not rule out the screeching drunken roar that echoed through the floorboards from downstairs. What had woken Frankie up this time? On this occasion, at least, it wasn't romping in the room next door. All were issues usually reserved for the minds of most undergraduate students living in halls in the mornings, not 11-year-old boys like Frankie. If he ever got there himself, he'd be well versed in that life. A hybrid of 80s techno and hardstyle mercilessly shrieked through the speaker downstairs, having been turned up, muffled arguing adding to the chorus. Frankie's clammy head jolted up as he chucked his West Ham-covered duvet on the floor and sprinted into the bedroom next door, solely focused on the safety of his 3-year-old brother Dazzler. When it was evident that Dazzler was fast asleep and seemingly safe, he gasped a hefty sigh of relief. What had caught Frankie's attention more was the sheer mess of his poor brother's room. A modest number of toys and teddies sat scattered around on the floor, and among them, a blue and grey Beyblade that laid shattered to bits. To make matters worse, however, Left carelessly in the corner of the room was a used condom, a smashed bottle of rosé wine, and 4 cigarette butts, a clear indicator that the room had been made good use of during one of Frankie and Dazzler's commonly enforced sleepovers with ill-fitting babysitter families. Within the civilised world, never would that have been considered an acceptable space for a young child to sleep. As was becoming the norm, Frankie made a mental note to clear the tip in the rapidly approaching morning, one of the many domestic pressures unfairly bestowed upon him. After trudging back into his own room, Frankie sank into his scabby office chair. Its cheap plastic cover intact, but torn to shreds, foam poked out in parts, which made it rough on your ass or sleeveless arm. Frankie didn't mind whatsoever, with it being his first proper chair. Despite its condition, there wasn't a shred of doubt in his mind that the time and energy spent carrying it half a mile down the street was worth it, even with his parents' utmost efforts to convince him otherwise. No longer did he have to lie on a springy mattress with pathetically thin pillows propped up against the wilted bedboard to watch telly, nor play his beloved PlayStation 2 from a strenuous distance for his undiagnosed long-distance vision issues. Frankie sarcastically tilted his head back, bobbed along and swiveled left to right in his chair. He checked the clock on his left, which read 4:58 am, 4:45 if you accounted for the clock being set forward. Frankie's lingering fear of being late ensured that the clocks were always ahead. 4:45 am would usually be Frankie's ideal wake-up time, leaving a cushy 4 hours before dreaded school to get right into some PlayStation. This time was usually split 2 hours each between FIFA Career Mode and his beloved Tekken 3, before throwing his creased uniform on and bolting it out for the 8:50 am school bus that conveniently stopped right outside their house. This also acted as a distraction from hunger, since neither of his parents ate breakfast and, as per their single-minded parenting style, didn't expect anyone else would need to either. A blockage to the downstairs toilet meant today was different, with his usual dawn vibrancy scuppered by the casual flow of party guests inconsiderately stumbling for the upstairs toilet, tarnishing Frankie's chances of deep sleep. But with no choice in the matter, and slim chances of getting back to sleep for a rare 6 am lie-in, Frankie wheeled the chair over to his bright cream-coloured desk. From the desk, he grabbed a filthy miniature round glass ashtray with 6 spliff ends inside. To Frankie's delight, one of them was chunky and only a third smoked, as fat a joint as Frankie would have smoked in his brief smoking career. Must have had his room shagged in and all, but any invasion of privacy Frankie felt was entirely cancelled out by the thrill of being guaranteed to be nice and wrecked before school. That's if he decided to go in at all, which, on party nights like this, was generally left down to him, as Guy and Joss tended to pass out until 2 p.m. Out came the trusty stale stench scissors to chop the ends off the tasty spliffs, a trick learned by spying on his father when he ran out of fags. Any harshness from smoking this way had long stopped bothering him. 5 of the smaller spliff ends combined remnants, when chopped open, provided what could only be described as a dusting to supplement the contents of the chunkier joint. With the king's skin bulging full, it proved a rolling challenge and a half for Frankie, and took fierce concentration to successfully tuck the Rizzler. Although a hand-me-down, Frankie couldn't have been happier. His very own fat spliff, all to himself. He took the time stroking over its baggy, unrefined exterior, examining every angle of it. He took out a jet lighter and a standard, safetyless disposable with a broken flint and used the spark to genie the other. A bulging 4-inch flame burst up, startling him and annihilating the tip of the joint, side-burning a quarter of the thing. Nevertheless, Frankie basked in his cheddar, haze and skunk combination head high. So much so that it was 15 minutes and 3 heavy tokes spread out by eyebrow-threatening excursions with the dangerous lighter until Tekken 3 was summoned. Having recently obliterated his all-time record of staying unbeaten on Tekken Ball for 3 days straight, Frankie relished the chance to extend this as soon as possible. Just 2 more days to beat the school bully Mo Spud's highly disputed claim of having lasted a remarkable 6 days over daily 5-hour sessions unbeaten. With this being the same dude who claimed to have shagged 3 teachers, one of them twice, the Tekken Ball school record most likely belonged to Frankie already, but the competitive animal in him was keen to avoid any doubt. Little did Frankie know, until thrusting open the empty case, that this wouldn't be possible. To his horror, he peeked up at a gap where the console would ordinarily be. What a disaster. He easily pictured its precise location down on the high street's grubby little game branch on display, waiting for some lucky little bastard to have bought it for them as third choice console of their soft touch parents for Christmas. Despite the family's supposed detrimental lack of finance that Frankie had been made more than aware of by his parents, there happened to be a roaring party downstairs, all surely bankrolled by pawning out his prized possession for the third time this year. With his head firmly pressed into his hands, and his whole body shaking in disgust, he lit the joint back up, singeing his eyebrows with the genied lighter yet again. There was only one thing for it. A sweet spot existed on the farthest side of the landing that, if jumped up and down on, would be heard by all, no matter where they were. A spot far enough away from all rooms that Frankie would have time to leg it away and escape a clouting. With the Tekken case in hand, Frankie stomped up and down, shrieking with every bit of melodrama his malnourished body could muster. Pedder and Raza were sprawled out at the bottom of the stairs on a grotty, springy double mattress. Being without sheets or bedding and subject to the unavoidable blaring of tunes from the next room, it was difficult to fathom how Pedder managed to even half doze off, something Raza, despite being initially optimistic, realised was increasingly unrealistic for himself when adding Frankie's tantrum into the equation. Wearing a tight pink Fred Perry short-sleeve polo shirt and camo pattern shorts was not his wisest decision. Previous Gibbs house parties ending with damp sleeping conditions should have taught him that. Not that he had much choice, having promised his wife Linda that his cocaine days were over. A short stint in prison during the early days of their relationship for dealing cocaine, and the subsequent heartache suffered in his absence, meant they would be finished should she find out. Pedder, alongside him, was having the nicer time of the two, despite barely passing as conscious. His round, bald head bobbed from side to side with the music as he laid with a fat grin on his chops. Arguably, his comfort under the circumstances could have been attributed to his far wiser clothing choice of trusty Adidas black and white joggers and a 3XL sized tucked-in Hawaiian geometric shirt. However, it was hard to ignore the avalanche of drugs and alcohol in his system. Pints with Raza from 1 PM down the social club after a half day were inevitable. Pedder despised his plastering job with a passion, but spent too much money getting wrecked, namely on Valium and Hobgoblin Ale, to risk jeopardising it. It all became too much for Raza as he groaned and, with all the energy that remained in his body, turned over to Pedder.
Oh, Pedder lad.
Raza muttered. Pedder's eyes opened, but words failed to flow naturally out of his mouth.
Gonna have to ask you to part with a generous chunk of them valleys, I'm afraid.
Raza stretched out his hand. Pedder tried, and failed, to sit up, crumbling pathetically into the wall, his neck nestled jaggedly, facing Raza with a disorganised smirk. His pupils had retreated so far into the back of his head, you'd have to question if their return was a given.
I'm Brama, me.
Pedder says.
Well, I'm pretty far from fucking Brama in every measurable regard here, mate.
His back arched forward as he rubbed his face, somewhat gathering his disoriented senses. His teeth ground together, both due to his low body temperature and the speed-cut cocaine still parading through his veins.
Not all of us had a year-long tea break and get as wrecked as you.
Pedder's year off the drugs following a rehab trip funded by his wealthy parents had indeed crushed his tolerance, especially when it came to Valium and weed. Frankie's attention-seeking rang through Raza's ears. Although he had always had some guilty empathy towards him and Dazzler, he heavily enabled and indirectly encouraged a lot of the children's neglect at the hands of their wreck-head parents. They'd partied as a group together since the 90s. 4-day-long hardstyle raves were their bread and butter, and these sort of house parties were as good as it got for them these days.
Ah, Pedder or Gwen, man. Don't be a prick for once. Gibbo's kid is on one now, the lot.
With his flickering eyes barely opened, Pedder attempted to swipe the Valium packet over with his hand, but only moved them a matter of inches.
Get him down you then.
Pedder slithered further down the wall, wedging himself awkwardly. Although having no issue subtracting the first 2 pills from it, the tricky third proved troublesome, especially for a supposedly seasoned sesher like Raza. Anticipation for the soothing relief he'd soon hoped to be overcome by hit hard, and without hesitation, he shoved all 3 Valium down his trap. It soon dawned on him that he had nothing to chug them down with, crucial with these dark web-acquired Valiums Pedder sought out in bulk. No one in Pesta knew what hit them, Pedder had boasted upon their first spell of circulation 18 months prior. Problem being, their above-average width made them tougher to swallow. 3 simultaneously was pushing your luck. Using a stale, half-drunk can of Cronenberg next to Pedder, Raza chugged the whole lot. Something he wouldn't have dared consider before turning 25, and would have berated anyone in his presence for doing. An old mucker from his school days perished on his 16th, having mixed one 10mg tramadol and a couple of cans of beer. But this principle had become obsolete before long, graduating to him eventually peer pressuring others into doing so. Out of nowhere, Frankie stampeded around the corner, leaped onto the top step and ran down, clearing 2 steps at a time, not initially noticing Raza and Pedro's corpse-like existence at the bottom. Raza choking up his pills in shock scuppered their anonymity. A scramble on the mattress ensued, with Raza paranoid about Frankie clapping his eyes on the pills and losing the sensible role model uncle image he naively thought he held, a key source of his narcissistic supply. Given the Valium tolerance Raza had, the 2 remaining in Pedro's strip wouldn't even touch the size of his cravings, adding to the importance of finding these.
Frankie, yawn washi.
Pedro muffled with barely open eyes. With the Tekken game case in hand and token his makeshift joint, Frankie glared suspiciously at the pair before strutting into the living room. Multiple marginally full bottles of spirits and split cans of beer contributed to a ghastly stale odour Frankie's nose was privy to. 5 lines of cocaine remained on a piece of granite next to a rolled up £50 note, a new discovery for the boy. As neglectful as his parents were, they'd always done a top job hiding the sight of hard drugs other than weed away up until that point. Lying with his legs bent inwards on the sofa, Guy snored dangerously hoarsely. 7 cigars inhaled like normal cigarettes that night were to blame. Frankie trod his bare foot in a puddle of beer and ash and shook it, grossed out by the cold tingle that shot through his body. Quickly, his attention flickered over to Joss lying vertically by the foot of the sofa, vomit down her top and a trickle of dry blood on her nose. He shook her by the shoulders but to no avail.
Dad. Dad.
Guy grunted. His legs jolted slightly and his eyes flickered.
Scuttle off, you right.
Dad, she's not moving.
Guy snapped his legs out, still half asleep and energy sapped by his dopamine deficit. Frankie slapped Guy across the face with the Tekken 3 games case and copped a punch back from Guy's lying position, sending Frankie flying backwards a few metres. Guy jumped up and scowled.
What have I fucking told you about coming in here while our mates are over, boy?
Guy reached for a lighter, only then noticing Joss on the floor to his horror. He checked Joss's non-beating pulse and let out a deep and eerie yelp. Raza burst in and spotted Frankie on the floor crying. Raza collapsed to his knees, while Frankie stopped crying, got up and stared blankly at Guy standing over Joss's body. Raza picked Frankie up, covered his eyes and carried him out.
Get up there and look after your brother. Do not come down until you're told.
Raza slammed the door behind him, but it bounced back open, affording Frankie a cheeky view into the room, which he duly gazed into and watched Raza pacing around.
Help us stash all the gear before we call it in, will ya?
Fucking right. I ain't getting sent down again.
Raza cleared incriminating evidence into a carrier bag. Guy spotted Frankie staring in, yet glared back, which freaked Frankie out as much as anything in the whole sequence of events. Frankie dashed up the stairs, tripping on the middle step. Chapter 5. Getting fit for Black Mirror. Dazzler perches mischievously by the dull, outdated train station waiting room's vending machine, while Johnny scopes the place out for any sniff of a weakness. His rough upbringing in the care system having dished him out quite the entrepreneurial outlook on life, a prominent factor as to him and Dazzler's lifelong compatibility. His thick glasses and gawky appearance act as the perfect foil for an otherwise unassuming schemer. Wilder is far less enthusiastic and sits on his arse, leaving the graft to those two. His oversized thrasher jacket and blonde curly mop of hair epitomise the dishevelled developing punk rocker look he's yet to fully master. Johnny spots his chance in Cowley, an overweight, ginger-haired, grey-suited company man throwing abuse at the vending machine. From extensive analysis of the machine over time, he knows the top right-hand corner cog is liable to malfunction. In the very cog, a bottle of Lucasade Orange dangles, having not left the machine following payment. Cowley slaps the machine with nowhere near the requisite power to get what's rightfully his. Another £2 and a button press later, he erupts after accidentally selecting an empty cog, clenches his fists and storms off.
Train station fucking scam again!
Without thinking twice, Dazzler skips the hysterical belly laughter immobilising the others and bashes his shoulders into the vending machine's side.
Go on, Daz. Pretend it's Gibbo, lad.
Johnny chants. After a few unsuccessful bashes, Johnny and Dazzler turn to the nonchalant Wilder, grab an arm of his each, and with no objection from Wilder, hurtle him into the vending machine from a few feet away. 4 bottles clatter out. They celebrate their haul for the ages wildly and sprint onto the train, with Wilder taking 2 of the bottles, an unspoken rule for whoever puts their neck on the line.
All that for an original, man.
Johnny bitterly remarks. With all possessing a glorious view from their train table, Cowley reappears alongside a quivering train station attendant half his size. Realising his beloved dangling Lucasade has vanished, he slams a chair into the vending machine. Johnny shakes up his bottle and lobs it through the closing train doors, nailing Cowley square on the head.
Great! Wobble off, ginger prick.
Johnny gives Cowley the middle finger. Following a pit stop in the toilet conveniently timed as the conductor checks tickets, the boys strut off the train. All pleasantly proud of their free train ride and drink to start their morning, that now vacates them the capital to chip in on a 30-gram pouch of sterling. Dazzler's heart sinks, having never seen a soul manning the Bangor train station barriers until this moment.
Oh, shit, boys.
Dazzler scampers out of his view.
Barrier dick.
Johnny and Wilder head forward with little sympathy, safe in the knowledge their caregivers leave just about enough of their benefits aside for them to avoid such situations.
Do us that rolly then. Fucking scarf, man.
Fearing the unbearable tit for tat should he not oblige, Wilder reluctantly hands over his pouch as they tap their tickets on the barrier. Dazzler stumbles towards the barrier alone, exaggerating his limp.
Hello, sir. Had a little bit of a fall en route. Has caused quite the torrid episode of immobility.
He says.
Tickets must have...
Dazzler rustles through his pockets. Without so much as a peek his way, the brute impassive guard scans Dazzler through the barriers. Wasting no time, Dazzler struts through, fucking off his exaggerated limp. Frankie sits back lethargically in the deliberately soulless job centre waiting room for his weekly appointment, surrounded by a wall full of job notices printed in tacky old word art as exciting as the menial jobs advertised on them. With a bent posture befitting of his reluctance to be there, he scours through the Sun newspaper's football pullout. A rare treat, given that no reading material other than that local job-seeking related is usually provided. A shock that the trusty staff who are devoted to authoritarian shepherding into work will have something to say about when they realise. Sully, a stocky lout, burst out of the appointment room door to Frankie's shock, red-faced and seething.
How can you even contemplate sanctioning me?
Sully says, pointing into the office.
You know how it goes.
Colin coldly shrugs his shoulders, well and truly living up to the nickname Sack Lunch Col, a name gifted to him based off an inexplicably high sanction rate in comparison to rival job coaches and the subsequent skipped meals of the many who faced cruel financial hardship at his hands.
Yeah, what, leave your old man for dead? Just to come fucking dole?
Sully shouts, his fists clenching ever tighter by the second, having witnessed his father suffer a near-fatal seizure days prior following an all-nighter on cocaine and Valium.
Nothing I can do. You literally would, wouldn't you? John Bach, conked out on your floor, 50 years of 10 a.m. jars down weathers with the boys, finally catches up with him, and you'd fucking leave him there to come here. I've bailed security. Nah, fuck that.
Sully says. 2 short and stubby security guards, both dwarfed by Sully, grab an arm of his each. Sully bats them both away.
Get your filthy hands off me.
Sully walks away unassisted and quickly turns back.
You know I didn't dodge that appointment. Rotten as they come. Fucking ratbags like you.
Security wrestle him out of the office.
Get off me, now.
Sully swats them both away and raises his fist.
I know where you live, you meatball cunt.
Both nervy guards linger behind him from a distance. Undeterred by the commotion, and in no mood to fall behind schedule, Colin sticks his head out of the office with an undeniably stern glare.
Frankie Gibbs?
He ushers Frankie in with his index finger.
You know why you're here, yeah?
Colin asks, barely giving Frankie a chance to sit down on the stiff blue chair opposite. Frankie shrugs as he perches himself down on the very edge of the seat.
Mackie D's have been belling me flat out, telling me that you star pupil don't want to know.
I thought I told them. And you?
Frankie fearfully answers while gazing down at his battered shoes.
You know what this means, eh?
Colin interrupts Frankie, who stays glued to his shoes, knowing fully well the type of form that Colin pulls out without having to look at it.
When we give you graft, and you sack it off because you can't be arsed, you got the clap, your ferret's got a blister, or whatever the fuck it is.
Oh, I couldn't do those hours.
Now, you tried that one on with the last cunt you saw here.
Colin passes over the sanction form.
91-day sanction. High level. Okay.
I have to look after my brother at night. Can't be leaving him there alone. While Gibbo's his legal guardian, and you're on the dole, having been so for over a fucking year, you'll do what we say. Or this is only the start for you.
Johnny, Dazzler and Wilder giddily form a circle in a part of the school field perfectly arched as to hide their passing round of Wilder's last cigarette for 2 pulls each. A fag that, based on usual playground rates of 30p a roll, has a market value of at least £1, one that could have been stretched out into a few. But as per Johnny's opportunism, he rolled it into a cigar-sized smoke, not knowing where and when his next nicotine hit may come from. A bustling 15-a-side football game takes place behind them, as 2 of the popular female students spot them and head over.
Oi, oi.
Johnny chants as he notices. His nerdy looks mean attention from females his way has been minimal so far, with smoking becoming somewhat of a gateway for him despite his overall pathetic flirtation game. He grabs the fag out of Wilder's mouth and passes it to one of the girls. Dazzler shoots off, acknowledging his chances of another drag have hit zilch. A ball is pelted his way, and he enters the game by pirouetting around a fully kitted kid and around another with a step over. Still somewhat pissed off at his last fag having been given away, Wilder sprints up to Dazzler and executes a robust but fair sliding tackle, one befitting of his status as the year's top centre-half. Dazzler classes to the ground, and a few sympathetic classmates gather around, but most quickly crack back on with the game.
Yes, go banal dad. Betsy di need trauma.
Shouts the suave deputy head teacher, Neuadd, fresh from a cigar break in the back seat of his brand new Mercedes. He jogs over, undoubtedly restricted by his tight-fitting light blue tuxedo jacket. He forces himself up and sprints away out of the school gates, heavily limping, yet still comfortably evading Neuadd. Now, the brisk few-minute walk to the train station with a now aggravated limp was bearable, and it was unlikely the school cared enough to chase after him. While he'd been threatened outright with expulsion, dwindling pupil numbers and Dazzler's average potential grades with the right application ensures this outdated joke of a school will again let this misdemeanour slide, at worst throwing a detention his way that neither pupil or teacher bothers to turn up for. Besides, even if they did make an example of him, the thought of being caught with that negligent parenting inflicted injury and the care home-sized consequences aren't worth considering. Disastrously, an older, sterner-looking chief was donning the barriers this time around, throwing a spanner in the works for Dazzler. After an unsuccessful sprightly scout around for possible loose tickets on the floor, he lumbers away defeated, with the day's events having diminished his never-say-die opportunism. Whether his father's vintage Volkswagen Scirocco had been written off in the months prior or not, the chances of a lift home are non-existent on the best of days, leaving a 4-mile trek down country lanes and main roads for Dazzler on this occasion. After climbing an excruciatingly steep and long hill, Dazzler faces a painful stretch of road swamped so heavily by wilting, barely living trees that the beaming sunlight struggles to poke through. A paper-thin road, wide enough for one car to squeeze through, separated by a shallow ditch with thorny wild blackberry bushes either side. 100 metres deep in, with no room to turn back, a green Lamborghini tractor bolts up. Rhys Jossocks behind the wheel, a careless, drink-driving inbred, an unsavoury character conceived by prominent local farmer Kev and his cousin. Dazzler buries himself into the spiky bushes as the tractor narrowly squeezes by. Rhys honks his horn and merrily raises his thumb at Dazzler, who doesn't acknowledge him back. A grisly, long stretch of pavementless dual carriageway awaits him after, leaving Dazzler to chance it down the grassy bank full of ankle-deep muddy bogs. He rolls up his now-torn school jumper sleeves and winces as they catch a fresh thin cut inflicted by one of the larger brambles. A police car hurtles down the empty road, slowing down as it passes Dazzler. Its snarling driver, Gavin, peers at him before it speeds off into the distance. Dazzler rips off his school jumper and pelts it into the bushes. Not that the lax coppers in this town are overly bothered by school truants, unless they're shagging one of the teachers, but best take no chances. Back round the cop car slithers, this time scampering at a walking pace alongside Dazzler.
How are you, Dazzler?
Gavin asks, with a seedy lack of authenticity that only contributes to negative police stereotypes. Dazzler marches forward, paying no attention to the coppers.
Trek from here, lad. Couple of hours at the very least.
Getting fit for Black Mirror, me. Only chance I'll ever get rich. On them bikes you'll be putting us on soon.
Dazzler claims having had his view on authority skewed beyond his family's natural anti-establishment culture even further by watching all of Black Mirror at a young age, a programme he genuinely believes was released in order to get us all ready for the crash of civilization. While Gavin's clueless to the reference, having sworn against ever getting a streaming service in favour of keeping faith with trusty old freeset box, his partner Gwyn cackles. His heavy weed habit having given him similar paranoid thoughts, especially after smoking skunk seized from Scouse County Line dealer kids flogging it around the pier.
Might as well jump in, Chief. We're off that way anyway. Natter with your old man.
Dazzler phlegms towards the car door, narrowly missing it.
Wouldn't want the birds seeing you up around like a mug.
Gwyn reminds him, an observation that stops Dazzler in his tracks, and after a brief dalliance of reluctant deliberation, he gets in the car and slumps himself sullenly on the back seat. He takes a first real look at Gwyn, a rookie policeman in his probationary period. In small areas like this, the personnel of Bobby's on the beat is a hot subject, and given Dazzler's early forays into shoplifting, it's only wise he gets to know what he's dealing with. Banger's newest slouches out on the passenger seat, sipping from a disposable Starbucks cup, sporting a flamboyant 80s-style copper moustache with no other facial hair and tinted sunglasses. A style proportionately out of place, down to his lack of believable conviction in the look and unimposing aura. Dazzler's hangover and dehydration from the tough walk causes him a moment of dizziness as he scopes Gwyn out.
Hanging out your arse, you lad.
Gavin says.
What?
Been on the jars with the old man, have you?
Dazzler peeks out the window, refusing to be drawn into any mind games. Gavin smirks at Gwyn, both relishing the opportunity of making the son of one of the local force's most loathed individuals uncomfortable.
Reckons he's too good to be around us, he does.
Yeah, all these crazy sessions we keep hearing about. Does an invite ever come our way? Does it? Fuck.
You haven't been near a fucking party since your mum sliced your caterpillar cake on your sweet 16th and let you lick the knife, Chief.
Dazzler boldly responds. Gwyn erupts in laughter mid-coffee sip, spitting it out over the dashboard. Gavin tensely grips the steering wheel and grits his teeth. His party drought has in fact spanned many years, all the way back to his older sister's 18th, where his invite was more out of sympathy. He rips the seal off a pack of 10 menthol Sterling cigarillos, sticks one in his mouth the wrong way around, and lights it, only realising after the first toke.
What are you doing?
Chuck us a few over and I'm grand. Won't hear no more of it.
Dazzler proposes.
Pull over, you fucking loony bin.
He said he's alright.
He slams Radio Cameroon on, slamming the volume up and down from 0 to 100 repeatedly. A Mark Drakeford speech about tackling the issue of second homeowners flooding the local first-time buyers out of the area's mortgage market screams out of the stereo. With Gavin continuing to toke on his harsh cigarello, Gwyn takes that drastic action of reaching over and flickering the car's sirens on and off. Gavin ultimately gives in, slams the brakes on, pulls into a lay-by and storms out of the car to the side of the road. Sensing an opportunity after a couple of long nicotineless hours, Dazzler gets out as well. Guy's treated himself royally during his few hours of solitude in the shape of a local prostitute, Lily, who sat up in his bed with her legs open. Her nickname, Lily Lick, derives from Guy's specific borderline obsession with licking her out, which he's indulging in right now, a privilege he pays handsomely for, £90 per half hour to be exact. While there isn't a whole lot to Lily, naturally somewhat of a looker without taking that much care of herself, she's the envy of rival local, more conveniently desirable prostitutes. This is on account of her practically nailed-on £180 worth of business a week, guaranteed from Guy for at least 2 of these sessions. It's easy money, easier than shagging the bloke anyway, and dirt cheap rent on a Maesgerchen second floor flat allows her to get by solely on his custom most weeks.
Give us a crumble, will ya? Making me think I've lost it.
Guy insecurely asks, using this opportunity to pop up his head for much needed air before getting back to work. Lily smirks snidely back once he's not looking at her. This is Guy's one and only special request, that she dishes out the odd bit of encouragement towards what he knows deep down are his faltering abilities, despite the catalogue of practice. Lily puts slightly more effort into the forced moaning. Fierce recurring OCD symptoms as of late shift her focus towards the state of the stale stenching room and the sight of a condom used by Guy on her an entire month prior, a rare splurge on intercourse he decided to treat himself with for his 49th birthday. Slam goes the front door, bringing an abrupt end to proceedings, Gavin being the culprit as he stands with Dazzler and Gwyn. After barely a few seconds, the doorbell starts going as well.
Wakey, wakey, Gibbo lad.
Guy bounces up and hastily throws on his vintage dark blue Levi's.
Who does this barbaric disruption of my leisure think they are?
He squares over to the window, and any short-lived swagger evaporates after peeping out.
Fucking rozzers, the lot.
He throws a white button-up shirt on. Lily shrugs, safe in the knowledge an ancient fling with Gavin will safeguard her from any trouble.
I know we have 3 minutes left, but I need you to go.
Lily holds out her hand.
Paid for a 5-session bulk deal last Friday.
Guy insists. His memory of the double session he summoned her over for on Sunday eludes him following that night's heavy session on the Xanax with Peder. Guy hauls Lily out of sight by her shoulders and hands her £120, a 30 quid tip.
Just make sure you fuck off out the back.
Lily shrugs, slowly counts the money on the way out. Guy dashes into the bathroom and swirls green Listerine mouthwash around his gob, mainly out of fear. Fear of being taunted again for his vaginal-smelling breath many look out for given his local sexual reputation. He slicks his receding thin hair to the side with thick red Dax wax and, hurried by the constantly chirping doorbell, rushes to the door. By the front door lies the shattered bottle of vodka sprinkled in the corner. He sweeps it up with a dustpan and brush which Gavin sneakily peeks through the letterbox and catches. When he eventually opens the door, the sight of Dazzler standing with the police supersedes the arousing anxiety of his own wrongdoing. He glares daggers at Dazzler.
Wouldn't be happening if you gave me enough for train.
Guy clenches his fist and throws an imaginary punch Dazzler's way as he passes.
Your lad's been a massive help. Cooperated fully.
Gavin sadistically says.
Bugle kind of morning then?
Gwyn asks while wiping his nostril.
What's he told you about Bugle?
Gwyn and Gavin look at each other with a wry smile.
Well, we keep getting calls about your balmy little sessions.
Which we're absolutely torn up about not being invited to, may I add.
Bugle frothing out your router, Lily lick upstairs, glass shattered all over the shop. Who said we don't want a bit of that?
Guy rolls up his sleeves and tenses his chest.
What I do in my house is my shout.
Gwyn snaps. As he puffs out his chest and gets in Guy's face, Gavin wedges himself between them.
Whoa. Yes. Yes, it is. But when you're tormenting your neighbours, shitting on your little one's well-being...
Do you have a warrant?
Guy calmly asks after pulling away from the fracas and semi-composing himself.
Not this time, mate. But that pitch you keep, though, Gibbo.
Gavin shakes his head.
Dazzler will end up in care.
Deadbeat cunt deserves it, though. All the neighbours, lads down the pub, knowing he's fucked right up.
Fucking Talgont.
Guy's briefly found composure evaporates as he squares back up to Gwyn, while Gavin applies all his might and size advantage to pry them apart. Guy throws a left, then right hook combination at Gwyn that he bobs his head clear of, with the power having been deflected by Gavin's strong hand in his chest. Gavin judo flips Guy over his back, sending him crashing into the squalid garden's turf, flat on his back. Gavin whips out his police baton.
Don't start, Gibbo. My night shift at cells tonight.
Working alone overnight offers a free pop at handing Guy the right jail cell hiding he's dreamed of serving him without repercussions, as per the local police force's unofficial stance on those who assault their officers. Guy wriggles backwards on the floor and stands up by the doorway, dusting his grass-stained top down as Gavin and Gwyn head back to their car. Gwyn pokes his head out of the window as Gavin roughly starts the engine.
Have a fucking cracker with the FC Army!
He shouts out, his face rasping red and sweaty. Guy swaggers over and hurls a small rock on the car roof as it pulls off. Dazzler slouched forward on the living room sofa. An L-built readily prepared from thick red Rizzlers awaits as he sprinkles chopped up ashtray remnants into it. Stig flying around the Top Gear track plays off their outdated widescreen telly with a chunky back. Guy bursts in, nearly knocking the door clean off his hinges and squares up to Dazzler.
Cooperated, did you, eh?
Guy bats Dazzler's joint off the table.
Did I? Fuck.
Dazzler says, deeply offended to have been accused of such a thing.
I've never been so ashamed.
They gave me a lift, you smack rat.
Guy yanks Dazzler up by the neck and pins him against the wall.
Nerve on you, talking to me like that, after you brought the fucking Rozzers here, telling them I don't give you any dough.
It was either a lift here or A&E, and how would that have gone for you?
Dazzler wipes the accidental spit pellets pelted into his face during Guy's outbursts. He lets go of the boy.
Full of fucking shit, aren't you? Full of shit.
Guy chucks on his light blue, shrunk in the wash Lee denim jacket.
And for what? Your mother would be proud. Proud of the little slime ball that's coming of you. Ungrateful little sods, the both of you.
He mumbles while gathering his phone, keys and dodgy duty-free Bulgarian tobacco.
You see what your life would be like without me. Disgrace, the pair of you. Ungrateful fucking sods.
He slams the door behind him, rattling the door frame. Dazzler scoops up what remains of his joint on the floor, seemingly unaffected by what is a semi-standard occurrence on his deranged father's come-downs. Chapter 6. Double Drop. Perched on a high street bench, Frankie miserably chats on the phone to Universal Credit after an aimless afternoon of pottering around town. A skinny spliff dangles in between his fingers, one saved for hours, with it being his last joint. Pissed up fresher students stumble around, loudly berating the lack of pubs in comparison to their respective hometowns. A crowd of rowdy Bangor 1876 fans chant "Oh Bangor, IOI" out the front of Skerries, their go-to pre-match boozer as they tank themselves up for a Friday evening clash under the floodlights against arch-rivals Hill. An elderly busker rocking yellow-tinted glasses and an all-black outfit hammers out guitar riffs and ripples out doom-styled poems with his deep voice. A pile of high-value coins lie in front of him in a cotton pouch, consistently being added to by pedestrians.
But as it should say on the records, I let Colin know. And that miserable fuck at McDonald's.
Frankie assertively says.
The system stipulates that you fulfill your work search commitments, which in this case was to work the nighttime McDonald's shifts. We simply have no record of this dubious claim of yours.
Carl, the job centre assistant, sternly asserts.
My brother could be in danger at night. How many times?
We simply have no record of this dubious claim of yours.
Yeah, it is a valid reason, isn't it? I agree. So why am I belting it out again and fucking again?
I won't tolerate aggression such as this. There's nowhere else to turn, so you have to put up with us, I'm afraid.
Alright. Just don't want to starve to death. A lot on the line here.
Justin Wee Wee prowls down the streets accompanied by Damien Hayward, his old cellmate from HMP Bedouin, or Damo as he prefers to be known. He has every bit the cunning, mysterious edge slapped on him you'd expect from someone convicted of filming two 15-year-old girls performing sex acts on one another, an act of deviance he served only 10 months inside for, in part down to his wealthy parents. With both being early investors in cryptocurrencies, they hired him a top-drawer barrister as their last charitable deed before disowning him entirely. Bright brown Doc Martens and a smart padded brown suede jacket on his back sticks out drastically compared to Justin's worn-out, unfashionable blue and white striped tracksuit jacket and trouser combination. Their connection mainly fueled by mutual sadism and both having been loners on the inside. Justin on account of his tendency to bail on paying drug debts and brazenly bragging about his free haul, while Damo revolted even the most hardened of criminals at HMP Bedouin due to the seedy nature of his crimes. Fearing his tarnished local reputation would make Wrexham a sketchy place to be following his release, Damo decided to give his period on licence a go in Bangor, partly out of hope that despite the damning Daily Post article detailing his crime, he'd be afforded some level of anonymity in the new area, which his flashy outfit won't help him achieve. Justin spots Frankie and outstretches his arm to halt Damo, who's distracted by a group of loud, dolled-up university students marching their way into Peep nightclub.
91 fucking days. You're not just grabbing food out of my mouth, though, are you?
Frankie desperately pleads, having calmed down minimally.
I wish there was anything I could do to help you, Frankie.
Now this is the issue we're having. You're choosing not to. You're fucking there to help.
At the end of the day, we're following a system. Doing what we're told, mate.
Just doing what you're told. Don't mean you're not going down with them one day. Those privileged, out of touch, fascist ringstings telling you what's what. When world order's gone to shit, and there's mayhem left, right and centre, they won't forget about you cunts on the phones doing what you're told. You'll get it as well, you know. And I'll be right fucking there, howling at the lot of you.
Still observing from a safe distance, Justin enthusiastically pitches his plans for Frankie to Damo.
They own the gaff, mate. Proper attic. And Gibbo rigs the lecky.
Decent, is it?
Damo deviously nods, encouraged by this potential development.
Fucking right. And not only that, pair of them get through bucket loads of gear.
What are your K and green levels like, though?
Enough.
I ain't dishing out tasters this time if he makes fatties.
An internal promise made after the last docile adolescent cocooing victim of theirs made half-gram joints all night. During the customary 2-day grooming period of getting them on side, it's a tried and tested tactic to dish them out drugs non-stop.
Won't be an issue, la. Few bongs each, odd spliff, few bumps of K. Get him all beholden on us.
Damo grins and nods. With the dishing out drugs duty delegated, he's ready for action.
Left wing my arse. Next time you slag off Boris or Nigel Farage, take a decent look at yourself, because you're living in the fucking spirit of their societal image. Rat!
He shouts down the mic and lobs the phone at a wall to end the call. A well-spoken Bangor University professor in marine biology named Hugh stood at least 10 metres away from the phone's flight, approaches Frankie.
And what would you have done if that had hit someone?
Frankie glares upwards his way. Before having the chance to respond, Damo and Justin dash over and Damo gets in Hugh's face.
How do you want your day to go?
Hugh cowers and turns around to run away. Damo shoves him in the back and boots him in the heel, sending hapless old Hugh's balance into disarray. He scurries off with a minor limp. Frankie gulps in stunned silence, a part of him feeling grateful, having never had anyone stick up for him in such a way. Justin picks up Frankie's cracked phone.
Nothing a bit of loving won't sort.
A mildly cracked screen, a chip on the volume up button, and the power still working as a result Frankie's content with. Not that a new screen's on the cards with his newfound dire financial predicament.
Pleasure to meet you, man. Damo.
Damo holds his hand out with an eerie smile on him, oozing creepiness and inauthenticity. Not clear enough for Frankie, however, as it pierces through his impressionable guard, despite a lingering suspicion that this could be the Damo buying his 12-year-old brother beers.
Frank.
Frankie flatly says, cautiously shaking Damo's hand with transient vigour. Damo and Justin take a seat either side of Frankie simultaneously.
That wild look in your eyes tells me you could do with getting fucking spangled, lad.
Justin playfully proposes.
Nah, can't, mate. Sanctioned I am. Sack lunch Cole. Up to his dirty old tricks. Good and proper.
Frankie resentfully holds up the remnants of his mostly smoked joint.
Last joint, the lot.
He takes a last look at it before flicking it into a bush. Damo turns away and rolls his eyes, agonised by the mere thought of both sharing some of the first half-ounce bag of weed bought in a year.
Wee-wee's got a load of green, ain't he, mate?
Damo turns around, full of smiles once again.
Yeah, fuck money, weed, it's all sorted. Let's get you out of this grotto and back to ours for a few jars.
Justin leans over and whispers in Frankie's ear.
Bit of Kenny going if you want to get a bit of a wobble on.
Calling the stuff Kenny was a stretch, with it being more of a research-grade drug resembling vague aspects of ketamine. Frankie grins, itching to relieve the sensation of K-holing, an experience first endured at the age of 15 after nicking a few lines worth from Pedder's bag as he slept off a 48-hour session at the family house.
91 days of no dull meetings, if you look at the bright side of it.
Frankie ponders internally. Not at the invite to get wrecked. That's something he needs no second thoughts about. His dilemma lies more with the guilt of leaving Dazzler home alone, at the mercy of Guy and his cretin entourage while they party hard, and eventually nods. Justin and Damo cheer wildly.
Sweet as.
Justin cracks open 3 small bottles of Foster's Radler, using the wall ledge, and passes them out. He takes an almighty chug of his.
Foster's fucking Radler.
Damo shrugs. A 2% beverage won't even scratch Justin's sides, having survived purely on a few cans of the 3 times stronger Carlsberg Special Brew a night since his release. Justin shakes up an unopened bottle, cracks it on the wall, and sprays it around like a winning Formula 1 driver. It mostly lands on the busker, showering his sleeping bag and only set of clean clothing in sticky lemon lager. Undeterred, the busker carries on playing, albeit in a more sinister tone. A police siren wails briefly in the distance, and the boys power walk up a steep, grubby thin path, barely visible to the naked eye, littered in substandard patchy graffiti and used NOS canisters. With all out of breath at the top, especially Justin, they take a little breather before another steep incline en route back to Justin and Damo's halfway house building. Having chugged his Foster's Radler while cantering up the hill, Damo pings the bottle powerfully towards an open green wheelie bin in the distance, only it misses wildly, flies right through a terraced house's open window and shatters in their living room.
Oi,
Here, Mental, the house's owner, bellows out. This time, the boys do leg it. They approach the dull, run-down-looking halfway house, part of its surrounding dry stone wall having crumbled into the pavement and onto the edge of the road weeks prior, pathetically shielded by a few orange road fences. In the courtyard, a group of lads gather around for the customary Wednesday night halfway house piss-up, drinking either Jack Daniels or vodka. Bringing his usual alpha male and ADHD energy, Lee Hughes energetically raps Welsh grime lyrics, in part to channel the trauma stemming from their lack of boombox after an irritated neighbour smashed it with a baseball bat following 3 consecutive nights of outdoor residential progressive techno raves. While he doesn't live at the hostel, his institutionalisation means the place makes him feel at home. Having spent the majority of his teenage and adolescent years behind bars, he tends to know 3/4 of the recently released prisoners there are at any given time. As such, he is deemed the place's unofficial entertainment manager and a part of the furniture. Being at home with his passive, naive wife and 3 young children under 5 is unbearable for him, responsibilities he's long deemed his late 20s aren't worth losing over. Sully's sat sullenly in a deck chair sipping some JD honey, bought with money made by selling 4 old Xbox 360 games at CEX in order to drown his dull-sanctioned sorrows. Sat next to him is Greasy Steve, a true career criminal and generational hero to budding criminal sorts in the local area. A reputation only enhanced by having 2 years added onto his last prison sentence after being paid by a County Lines kingpin to bite a bloke's ear off in prison. What made it all the more barbaric was that Steve had 1 month left until release and did the deed for nothing more than a marginally improved cell, stronger TV signal on that side of the prison, and a window wider by a couple of inches being the only upgrades. On barbecue duties, flamboyantly grilling streaky bacon and flipping it around needlessly multiple times is the energetic, lanky Ali Box. A well-meaning lad in comparison to the creeps keeping his company, and a mice G boy through and through, who loves a secret acid techno rave in abandoned Llanberis quarries. After leading a relatively crime-free life until sinking into cocaine addiction, he served 3.5 years in prison, having been copped with 500 MDMA pills at Gotwood Festival.
I'll get a speaker, me. Don't care where it's from. Give us a decent line, yeah? Bit of a slug, and I'm fucking telling you now, I'll be out there flying until I get one. Diet? Fucked if I don't.
Lee frantically belts out while nobody truly listens.
It's absolutely Brama here, lad.
Justin giddily tells Frankie as they strut confidently through the original Victorian-style preserved gate into the courtyard.
Simai what?
He chants, with his thumb up sideways. All ignore him, other than Ali.
Wee lad. Are we at 15 minutes for 70 bar?
Ali jeeringly asks.
50 it was, you prick.
Justin angrily picks up one of the value white hot dog buns next to the barbecue.
It's alright, I. Got plenty of action behind bars, didn't you, lad?
Ali sneers.
More than you'd ever know.
Justin holds his bun out and Ali theatrically tips in a single rasher of bacon, a part close to falling out of the bun, but is saved by Ali's sharp reflex reactions. Without hesitation, he bites deep into the bap and nods.
Level 1 BTEC Hall of Fame, you carry on at this level. But I didn't want to say so myself.
Ali holds a bacon bap in each hand for Frankie and Damo. Frankie nervously accepts, and once in his hands, he ferociously bites into it, grateful for the chance to rid himself of the hunger pains plaguing him since wolfing down a barbecue rib Rustler's burger the previous night.
Vegan, mate.
Damo snarls after leaving Ali holding the sandwich for an awkward amount of time. Ali hollowly stares at Damo before turning away. Not only is he sensitive to rejection, but he's also deeply threatened by the slim possibility that vegan food could take over, leaving his days of eating real meat numbered. Having finished their baps and gained no inkling that their presence is welcome, Frankie, Damo and Justin head towards the building's front door. Lee suddenly appears and blocks their entrance.
With this being a fine 5-star establishment of the highest order, I can't be allowing you through without adhering to our strict but fair COVID testing rules.
Lee puts on a rough formal accent and points at Damo and Justin.
Now, you two almost definitely have AIDS, and science has proven it kills COVID off, so you're both exempt. But you, sir, not so lucky, I'm afraid.
Lee sternly passes Frankie a cotton bud and a plastic vial. He nervously sticks it up each nostril for a few seconds, twisting it when up there. His hand lightly trembles while placing them in the plastic vial as he passes them over. Lee sticks them on the small white COVID tester kit.
No doubt Greasy Steve will have a bit of something nice back if you give it him COVID.
Ali sniggers.
Be nothing fucking nice about it. Can see how tight he is from here. I'll just go, you know.
Frankie mumbles before briskly shooting off. After a few seconds, everyone bursts out laughing, with Damo and Justin joining in slightly after the rest. Frankie gazes back and, after being slow to realise, trudges back over and heads into the building with Justin and Damo.
Double drop, boys. Learnt this one in Bedouin.
Ali boasts. With a spatula in each hand and 2 bits of bacon on each, he simultaneously flips them over flamboyantly onto 2 baps. After misjudging his power, the bap closest to Steve splats on the floor, with Steve only narrowly avoiding the greasy bacon landing on his brand new light brown Timberland steel toe caps. Furious at the near miss, he leaps up in a fit of rage.
Double fucking drop. What are you doing? Oh, here we go. Battered a few spastics in Bedouin. Now he thinks he's fucking hardest cunt in my G.
Ali boldly responds to the far bulkier Steve.
Calm down, grease lad. I'll do you another one.
Lee says.
Last of the bastard bacon, innit? Gives it all to them weirdo crusties before he feeds his own mates. Go on, piss off to fucking Spar, now.
All the while, Ali squirts an excessive amount of mustard into a bun.
Get your shrapnel out, lad, before I fucking snap ya. Get us a few special brews and all while you're at it.
Ali lobs the mustard-covered bun into Steve's face, landing most of the stuff in his eyes and temporarily blinding him. With Steve bent down trying to clear his eyesight, Ali takes the opportunity and lands a sweeping head kick on him, owing to a brief dalliance in Muay Thai in preparation for his prison sentence. Despite his obscured vision, Steve lands a right hook clean on Ali's jaw, but Ali stands firm and a brutal brawl ensues. As they trade hammer blows, offering little head movement to avoid the other's punches, Lee eventually gets in the middle and throws them both aside by their collars. In the midst of the chaos, Sully calmly sneaks back inside. Justin presents his damp, dirty, self-contained studio room with a thin window placed up high on the wall, barely letting sunlight in. Deliberate-looking punch holes occupy the white wall's cracked, uneven plaster, as well as black damp mould patches. A crusty pile of dry, used tea bags take up the corner of the stain-ridden kitchen surface. Fruit flies happily hover and breed among the tea bag mound and sugar caked into the surface. Frankie and Damo wince at the unpleasantly stale stench. Damo covers his nose with the top of his jumper.
DMT bender with the lads or what?
Damo barely audibly muffles. He sweeps a pile of crumbs off Justin's duvet and takes a seat on the bed.
Spangled isn't the word, la. Just me it was,
All right then, man.
Damo rolls his eyes and tucks his smoke.
Conked out in that corner there. But in my head, I were in Dickie's boatyard, chilling on the pebs after a tidy spring evening hammering nos at Bangor Mountain, smashing down the most Brama double special burger, while at the same time...
Justin loses momentum, his crack cravings affecting the fluidity of his speech.
While at the same time, getting a fucking tit wank off an horrible scabby 4 out of 10 at best, my G mermaid, mate.
Damo and Frankie gaze at each other and howl in disbelief-derived laughter.
4 out of 10, yeah?
Oh, that's with whatever fucking 1080p goggles DMT puts on you, that is. Minging. I'm telling you now.
Off your head on a bit of classic spice again?
On my little boy's life.
My stew mermaid, man.
After a few unsatisfactory spliffs and bumps of ketamine, time simply stands still for Justin, who just can't get into the swing of things. By 5 PM he's had enough and bails on his self-imposed 8 PM deadline for a pipe crack. Having done so for 5 days straight in an effort to curb the amount of profits he smokes, an unrestrained evening of debauchery is in order. With his head stuck out of the window, blatantly visible from his street, he lights his overblowed glass pipe and takes a hefty hit double the size of his usual. He used to smoke it out in the communal yard, preferring the fresh air. However, having one of the many halfway house addicts spotting him out there, pestering to swap a couple of quids worth for a pinch of dirty, duty-free tobacco had become the bane of his life. Damo racks up 4 lines of ketamine, unconvincingly pretending to listen to Frankie, who's already tipsy after 2 Foster's Radler due to his near-empty stomach.
Don't get hazed like this much now, do you know?
Frankie says, his voice affected by the harshness of Justin's half-gram spliff of purple haze that he tokes on.
More of a southeast skunk fella, me.
He smoothly snorts the heftiest of the 4 lines with a rolled up orange train ticket and twitches after. Damo scrapes a third off the top of the 2 lines to make a chunkier one at the end and snorts it.
For you, sir.
Frankie shrugs and takes it.
Love a little encounter with our mate Kenny.
Only half of the line shoots up Frankie's hooter before he hastily places the case on the bottom half of his leg.
Careful, mate!
Damo anxiously snatches the tray off Frankie. Spotting the half-finished line, he scoffs, deciding there and then that this soft fool is ripe for the picking. Frankie leans his back on the wall, already feeling highly wavy, with his senses well and truly distorted. He slowly nods to the trap beat playing roughly off Justin's old-school Motorola.
Oh, nice one for that.
Damo subtly smirks.
Mate of Wee Wee's is a mate of mine.
Frankie nods. With his eyes squinted together beyond recognition, he holds out a clenched fist and fist bumps Damo. Damo turns away and cringes out of view. After half an hour of dissociative chatter full of broken sentences, Justin decides Frankie needs waking up and throws down a packet of lemon-flavoured rip-rolling skins.
Bit of graft will sort you out.
Frankie tears off a 10cm strip.
Give him here.
Justin tears off a foot-long rip and throws that down.
Pass him the dust, will you, Damo?
Having just sniffed 2 slug-sized lines of ketamine, Damo groans and, in his moderate incapacitation, manages to grab and pass a wooden tray with loose bits of small bud, crumbs and leaf over to Frankie.
All of it? Oh, what do you think?
Justin restlessly fires back, frustrated at the lack of impact from his hit of crack. Frankie lies on his chest and gets to work. Tucking the edges proves problematic for him after taking 20 minutes to get to that stage. Damo gets up and dances erratically behind him in short bursts to the rhythm of the trap beat. He picks up a pool cue, takes a few fake shots and theatrically spins it around his head. With Frankie unsighted, Damo pretends to stick the cue up Frankie's ass from a short distance away, much to the subtle amusement of Justin. With the spliff painstakingly rolled, Frankie lights it with a jet lighter.
I'll be sound, boys.
Frankie splutters, as snot droops out of his nose. Damo snatches the joint as Frankie runs over to the sink and buries his head in it, gagging ferociously. After getting a whiff of the stale cooking fat and dry piss covering the sink, he lifts his head out. With the central lock and door left wedged open due to a groove in the wooden lino, Sully bursts in and lobs a bag of bashed up cocaine at Justin's head. Frankie backs into the far corner and cowers out of sight.
Gave me flat out fucking laxative shite, you miserable little prick.
A schoolboy error on Justin's part. When packing bags of cocaine, he divides them into 2 categories, one stronger lot and one set of bags made deliberately weaker for those he doesn't fear. Sean Bach, a far scrawnier lad, had been given Sully's stronger bag.
Top drawer, that is, and you know it.
Justin unconvincingly responds, while rooted to his spot. Sully slams Justin into the wall by his throat and holds him there.
Can't fool a cunt with chronic IBS, man.
With his free hand, Sully opens a nearby drawer, grabs out £140 and counts it before waving the wad in Justin's face.
That'll do for now.
Sully stuffs the cash gratefully into his navy Adidas tracksuit bottoms pockets. Damo sneaks up behind Sully, but his heavy, anxious breathing gives Sully enough time just to spot and move his head away from the swinging pool cue flying his way. Sully throws a chopping kick upwards into Damo's liver, sending him crashing to the ground.
You can fuck off and all, you nonce.
He snatches the pool cue.
I'll have a bit of that.
Sully walks away, examining the power glide cue and thinking of all the league players likely to bung him up to a bullseye for it. He turns back and aims a kick at the still floored Damo's head that deliberately doesn't connect. Damo shrieks and collapses further into the corner with his hands up.
Just you wait.
Sully coldly warns, pointing the cue at Frankie.
Stay right there and your Brama.
He sticks the lock on the latch and closes it tightly, smashing it back open with a kick from the outside and bending the lock. He re-enters and tests the lock, which now doesn't work.
You're both marked. I'll be back for the rest of that, whenever I want, in whatever form it comes, day or fucking night.
Sully slams the door behind him, which bounces back open. Damo gets up, dusts off the various crumbs on his clothing from Justin's filthy floor, and lobs a lighter at the door that pops, well after Sully would have realised. With their immediate safety and privacy in doubt, the boys opt to head down to the social club's pound a pint 2 hours earlier than anticipated. They head out the back and take the scenic route over Bangor Mountain, far more awkward for the short trip to the pub, but neither Justin nor Damo can face Sully and his group. Damer ushers Justin and Frankie into an outside public toilet, gets his key out, then conveniently is unable to find his little pub bag of ketamine in his keg pocket. Justin reluctantly dishes them both out a couple of chunky keys worth. Posters sporting 2000s era Microsoft art stating midweek bar ajar, Foster Strongbow and Worthingtons, a foot apart, litter the windy corridor leading up to the social club. Outside in the beer garden, all 5 wooden benches are joined together. 40 young punk rockers scatter, most smoking weed and sniffing coke with all the paraphernalia on show, all taking full advantage of the pub's relaxed stance on drugs and sympathy for the pound-a-pint goers' average customer demographic of those only content if able to adhere to their addictions. 2 skaters with red flat caps on backwards land nose grinds off the edge of a bench seat, one after the other, met by wild cheers. A row of grisly, miserable older daytime drinkers on stools obstruct a collectively frustrated 20-person queue, all determined to make it as hard for those glory hunters to get served as possible, who are only at their otherwise peaceful drinking hall for pound-a-pint. One such individual not putting up with this attempted corruption of his pound-a-pint enjoyment is Mac, a wily punk rocker, one of the alpha males and leaders of the crew due to his fearless stuntman attitude, evidenced by his plethora of stunt and skateboarding inflicted chipped teeth. Using his rugged, thick, wax-rich mohawk, he rams first through the old farts by the bar, and then the crowd queuing for drinks, majestically, not spilling any of the 9 pints held on the tray. Most back away, no questions asked. Mac heads over to the freshly damp-stained pool table with £40 in notes dangling on the side, awaiting the winner of the next frame. A group of 6 similarly styled punks huddle around watching the game intently. Julian, more of a passive emo than the rest and 7 pints of cider down, chips the cue ball Mac's way and shatters one of the pints on the tray. Guy, Stacey, Sally, Raza and Pedder sit on the far end of a high-stool table. Guy rubs his hands together and gazes around the pub restlessly, phased out of the ongoing, quickly paced and erratic cocaine-fueled conversations taking place on his table. Not for the first time, this cliquey group are somewhat tolerating more than celebrating his presence. Itched by the nearly 12-hour drought since he ran out of cocaine, Guy dials Justin's number.
How are you, la?
Justin's voicemail says,
Wee, mate. You're taking a fucking piss here. We all need topping up pronto.
If you're after our gardening works summer special, please leave a message stating the quantity of your occupational needs after the tone.
Guy ferociously redials, but his phone battery dies instantly, leading him to hastily slam his Samsung on the table. Stacey glances over, weary of his outbursts and energy-sapping ways, but quickly continues chatting.
Do us a bump or 2 till he gets here, will ya?
Guy taps his shoulder repeatedly.
Oi!
Raza turns back, cutting Stacey's long-awaited chance to unload all the Ysbyty Gwynedd gossip, where she works as a porter.
Never is just a bump when you get your grubby little claws in there.
Come on, mate. I'll give it you back.
Guy pleads.
Nah, you'll guzzle it right up.
Guy sits back with his arms crossed. His face slowly turns red as he stews internally.
Prick. Wait until you haven't got any one day. I'll remember that, mate.
Hang on in there, Gibbo. Won't be long till he's here.
Do us a key, one of you?
Stacey, Sally and Pedder ignore him without even a brief glance, all being in the same boat of not trusting him alone with their hard-earned cocaine. Guy grunts and stroppily gets up, slams his chair into the table, picks up his pint and swaggers over to the pool table where Mac and Julian are engaged in an enthralling game. Flying from the joy of his 40 quid win, of which the winnings hang perilously on the edge of his skinny black jeans pocket, Julian is potting balls for fun and knocks his 5th in a row down to leave a tricky long-range shot on the black.
£5 and a key's worth of bugle says I'll work the fucking floor with ya.
Guy says, right in Mac's face.
Tenner'll just about get me out of bed.
Mac calmly responds. Guy slams a tenner down on the table. Mac does the same and looks menacingly over at Julian, who smashes the black ball in without looking.
Rack 'em up then, old school.
Mac flings the triangle over and Guy fumbles it pathetically. Taking the opportunity while Guy's focus lays elsewhere, Pedro stealthily gets the group's attention and they sneak off towards the bathroom. Having won the lag and deciding to break, Guy makes a meal of his break-off, slamming the cue ball dangerously low. After smashing the pack of colours, it pings off the table, out the open back door and into the sea of punk rockers outside. One of them uses their skateboard as a bat to hit it back in after having it bowled his way by his 14-year-old brother. Julian catches it with one hand and lays it down for Mac as he cues up his shot from above the balk line. After some minuscule adjustments, Mac smashes his first red in, barely giving Julian a chance to move his hand. 2 simple pots follow, and in full swing, he misses an inexcusable 4th shot and kicks the air.
Already feeling a tingle down my hooter.
Guy boldly claims, despite having all of his balls to pot. With Mac's break having spread the balls and being a league player, Guy makes slim pickings of them. Most being short to mid-ranged, bar one beautifully doubled into the middle pocket. He misses a straightforward cut on the black, but with a stroke of good fortune, it zips off the cushion and nestles into the top right-hand pocket. Guy struts over and presents his key. Mac shoves a bit of cocaine on the end, and Guy runs it into the corner to devour it up his bad nostril. With his theory being that should he have minuscule supply, the varying degree of pain that comes from sniffing up his deviated left nostril adds a bit more bite to the sensation. Now fueled up for at least the next 20 minutes, Guy storms back towards Mac.
Name your price, boy.
Glad someone's thinking big time.
This time Guy makes no mistakes, nailing his break-off shot, potting 3 red balls and 1 yellow. However, the white trickles in as well. With 2 shots at an open table, Mac clears up the colours with no issues, but rattles his black in the pocket's jaws, slamming the pub's Q-tip on the table in response. Guy gets down for his shot, but is distracted by the now empty table once occupied by Razza and Co.
Slimy little dicks.
Guy chucks the cue aside and storms off to the bathroom, needlessly barging through the door and in turn startling a feminine-looking emo meticulously waxing his goth-style hair in the mirror. Guy dips his finger in the blue Dax hair wax pot, puts it in his mouth and violently spits it out into the sink, narrowly avoiding the emo with his spit. After sticking his ear on all 5 closed toilet cubicles, Guy clocks subdued collective giggling from one on the far end and hammers on the door.
Fuck's sake.
Stacey mutters.
Saved any for me or what?
They let him into the dingy cubicle. Stacey rolls her eyes and reluctantly hands the nearly empty bag to Guy, sporting a measly few crumbs. Despite this, his grateful eyes light up as he scrambles to shovel a key out of his pocket. Everyone swiftly squeezes past and shuffles out of the cubicle without Guy as much as blinking an eyelid, leaving the door wide open. Guy ferociously rips the bag open, dabs his finger around the corners and rubs it on his gum. Guy stumbles back up to the pool table, pumped and ready to win enough to pay for his night's drinks. Julian and Mac race each other side by side to chug their pints of Worthingtons. A tray of 4 full and 4 empty pint glasses lies next to them. Guy barges past, knocking into Mac and causing a splutter in his chug, but without stopping him from beating Julian. Guy stiffly gets down for a shot with steely determination.
You chose the powder route in life, old school. Game's up.
Julian defiantly tells Guy.
Well, I'll have my dough back off you then, Squire.
15-minute rule. You're pissed off, and your game's up, along with anything else that comes with it.
As Julian gets down for a shot, Guy knees him in the ribs. Mac barges Guy up against the wall with his forearm and Julian quickly recovers, cornering Guy with Mac. Guy throws and misses a few wild punches that are easily evaded, leaving his midriff open for Julian to smash a bar stool into. This rocks but doesn't floor him as it's partly blocked. Razza pulls Mac and Julian away by their neck from behind with one hand each and drops them on the floor. Mac and Julian smirk, shrug and strut back over to their tray of pints.
Tar for the jars, Gibbo.
Mac sarcastically holds up a glass. Guy charges at Mac, but is easily held back by Razza.
Get over there until Wee gets here.
Which Guy duly does in an almighty strop. It's Guy's lucky day. He doesn't have to wait long. Out from the wilderness of the sketchy main road public toilet, having finally consumed their desired share of ketamine, Damo and Justin appear in the smoking area with Frankie lingering just behind. Among the 10 smokers at the front, no one is as cheery to see Justin as Richie Lloyd, a true Llanelli lad whose Bangers Rugby Club's long-serving first-choice tight head prop. Down to his local fame among rugby supporters, he's a well-known and consistent presence in the pub scene, having managed to shun drugs for most of his adult life. Preferring any kind of cheap cider, he's recently fallen deep into the trap of craving cocaine when he drinks, tempted into it over time by one of the vast array of dealers who swamp out both of his favourite drinking holes. He approaches Justin and tightly squeezes him in a hug, his towering frame doing well not to snap his ribs.
Osumawa?
Justin breathlessly asks after being released by Richie.
Hey, spot on there. All about that jet fuel of yours there, boy.
Richie joyfully declares. Having only been into cocaine for the last 4 months, his low tolerance ensures that even Justin's substandard drivel works like jet fuel for him. Guy gleefully spots Justin through the window and frantically takes £50 off Razza and £100 off Pedder, who as usual is paying for Stacey's on the false premise of getting it back on payday.
Plate in the microwave like I showed you.
Justin asks Richie.
Fucking lights, lad. Hey, don't mind doing this one on tick till next bar of jar, no?
Guy comes crashing through the door and stands in between Justin and Richie.
Good to see you, my mate.
Yeah.
Justin tries to shuffle past Guy.
Do us the usual, wee boy.
Fucking move for a sec first, mate.
8th in 2 separate bags in case you've forgotten.
Guy waves £300 in notes around. Justin forcefully shoves Guy's pre-wrapped order into his chest and quickly snatches the money off him while anxiously looking left and right, not helped by the added paranoia of his dwindling crack hit and the subsequent ketamine devoured before arriving. With that promising start to what Justin hopes will be a highly profitable night, he assuredly leads the boys inside. Freshly wobbly having gone in hard with their pre-pub ketamine bumps, they slowly head in through the Grade 2 listed building's original front door and down the windy corridor, but not before taking in some of the original unnerving dark Celtic art on a poster before eventually reaching the pub area. Frankie's taken aback by the swathes of drunken mayhem and destructively bright lights, the ketamine high overwhelming him in these chaotic surroundings.
Damo's got first round sorted, haven't you, lad?
Justin cheerily declares.
Oh yeah, of course.
He stands at the back of the hefty queue for a few seconds before impatiently sighing and manoeuvring around its outer edges, barging others out the way without being challenged. Justin leads Frankie to a table, spots Razza in the corner, and whacks his thumb up. Razza scowls with a forced half smile. He notices Frankie with him, and ponders, clearly worried about the identity of Frankie's company, as he chugs half a pint. Justin glares at the sticky, poorly wiped table and pulls out a chair. Frankie stumbles into it and nearly falls off the side.
Fucking hell, lad. Thought you were a proper kethead these days.
Justin pitifully remarks as he takes a seat opposite by the wall containing framed pictures of Puffin Island. A brief silence beholds them as Justin and Frankie scour their surroundings, with Justin's focus glued to a group of 8 loud, attractive, ordinarily dolled up women in their 20s.
Don't even feel the urge, you know. Fucked ragged inside I was. Need a break, if anything.
Well, it can't be hard to come by in Bedouin after lights out.
Frankie unconvincingly suggests.
Nah, Frank lad. I ain't a bender me.
Justin insists. Damo miserably approaches the table carrying 9 pints of Carlsberg on a tray. He cracks out an inauthentic smile as he gets closer and puts the tray down.
Oh, cheers, mate.
You are welcome.
Justin nods his head in the direction of the women. Damo sits down, slurping his pint, transfixed by what he sees. His legs dangle open suggestively, while his eyes dart around decidedly in all directions.
So, how did that work then, wee? Getting laid flat out on the inside? Daily conjugals with a second wife, or what?
Fuck that. Nah, lad. Warden herself, on the reg.
Justin boasts.
This drip of a screw. He'd never check my socks.
Damo gets up and assertively swaggers over to 2 of the group of women, best friends Glesny and Deleth. Glesny, the more confident of the 2, is happy to see him. Deleth, who's on her first night out, stands there anxiously. Justin veers off as he stares at Damo typing his phone number into Glesny's phone.
Get in there, Damo.
Justin ponders for a second.
Salam sanachti.
Frankie suggests, after recalling Justin's troubles with the English language upon first starting primary school due to Welsh being his first language.
Ah, Sanade. So, I'd rock up, Warden's office, 8:30 sharp, vibrator down the sock, side of the Achilles like that, and I'd be locked in till lunch, whether I wanted to be or not.
Justin's lower lip dropped.
Bit of tat she got. Her first con I was. Kept me right fucking busy, telling you now.
In reality, his sorrow derives from being clinically rebuffed by Sue, the nymphomaniac prison warden twice his age, an experience that made his prison sentence far trickier to endure.
She'd come and find you, would she? Oh, hello, wee. Can I have a shag, please?
Nah. The others would get proper jealous. Nah. Be a text. Different scandalous filth every day. Let me have a phone in there, just for that.
Justin boisterously winks and chugs half of a pint.
Munter by this point, though, I must admit. One of them.
Told me she was well into her erotica screenplays back in the day. Nearly flogged one of them. 5 figures. Decent chunk of change back then. First question of many. Why didn't you just keep the vibrator in the office?
Justin sighs impatiently, finding the task of wriggling out of his own lie unexpectedly daunting.
It was for her material. She can't write shit that hasn't happened.
Sensing his old mate floundering, Damo passes Frankie over another pint.
Sink that down in 20 and I'll get you 3 fucking more.
Frankie glares mockingly at Damo, almost insulted by the challenge, and sinks the full pint in 10 seconds. Terry and Richie continue to linger outside in the smoking area. 2 small keys of cocaine each in their chain-smoking desires diminish the possibility of heading inside, despite being underdressed in t-shirts on this chilly evening.
Mae'r hen foi de. Wsteg un wsos dwytha. A'r unig peth mae'n gorau ddeud os mae eisiau sex de, di Julia! Mae'n ddigon yn capel yn barod amdani os dwi'n gael off o chdi. So teid flaen neud di. Fyny grisio na.
Richie theatrically imitates his father's stern Anglesey accent. Everyone listening in giggles at Terry and Richie's hysterical laugh and excessive reaction more than the story itself. Fresh from his cruise down the A55 to Sheffield for Q School, Alfie pulls sharply into the car park, parking close by and needlessly dispersing the crowd when there are bundles of vacant parking spaces in less intrusive corners. He takes his 5-foot-long Q case out of the boot and balances it on the car while applying aftershave. His pink back blazer, inspired by Mark Davies' style, and his overwaxed hair glows under the beam of the streetlight as he lights up a pre-rolled fag. Marlboro Golds this time, a rare treat and break from rolling skinny gold leaf fags all day.
Why are you bringing that to pound a pint?
Richie judgmentally asks.
Ain't using that Joe Shop selection of rods in there.
Alfie declares, as if anyone who does is a waste of space. As he brushes past, Richie snatches the Q case and runs around the car park with it, pretending to queue up. Once Alfie gets closer, Richie lobs the case over his head towards Teddy. Teddy drops his pint glass, which shatters on the concrete, and catches the case. Its sheer might knocks him into the wall.
Better pray the damage is minimal. Fat fucking ring piece. No pinman double shifts will get you anywhere near the amount of financial ruin I'll bury you in.
Teddy gets up and eagerly hands Alfie the case as he stares him and Richie down.
You small-time village dicks. Need to better spot a local legend when you see one.
He flicks his fag into Teddy's face as he finishes his sentence. Richie squares up to Alfie while clearly scared at the same time. Richie's combat experience is few and far between. Alfie backs away with his fist raised and nobody follows him as he heads down the windy corridor to the pub. He swaggers in and looks around. Disappointingly for him, only a few brief judgmental glances come his way. Deflated by this, he slumps towards the now anemic queue for drinks. Jill Rowlands, a bar-side stool stalwart who only moves from his beloved right-hand corner for a piss or customary squandering of a fiver in the fruit machine, sips his double scotch. After catching a glimpse of Alfie in the corner of his eye, he stares him up and down, concluding his exhibition of disdain by fixating momentarily on his blazer. Jill mockingly scoffs and turns away. Guy creeps up behind Alfie and wraps his arms tightly around the back of his neck.
Balled it on the big stage, didn't you, Squire?
Alfie's eyes light up. He clenches a fist.
Fuck that! Beat Dale the lot. Total clearance to seal it.
Oi, oi!
Pro tour, baby.
Guy throws £4 worth of small change onto the bar, with all of it scattering, some falling off the side.
Had a score on you at 30-1, boy.
Guy proudly passes Alfie a pint of Strongbow.
Oh yeah!
Alfie slides his hand into his pocket, and with a beaming grin, whips out a betting slip, staking £30 on the same bet.
Zing!
Guy wraps his arms around Alfie's neck, leading him a couple of steps forward, gaining most of the room's attention.
After heroically joining the pro snooker ranks this evening, I present to you all Snowdonia's snooker sensation, Pound a Pint's very own bowler, Alfie One Visit Finner!
Most of the pub erupts raucously. Pedder and Razza whistle loudly and stand up out of respect. Mac and Julian look on enviously. Annoyed to have had his pool momentum interrupted, Mac smashes in a few pots with excessive power. Alfie raises his hand around the room, trembling under the boisterous response. He power walks over to Frankie's table, hesitating cautiously as he spots Damo and Justin.
Easy wee wee. Frankie?
He gazes at Damo.
Alright, mate.
Damo flatly says, half-heartedly holding out his hand. Alfie shakes it like slippery wet mackerel and sits down to an uncomfortable, eerie atmosphere among the table.
Hit the big time now, lad,
Justin says, with a cheeky probing grin. Alfie rolls his eyes as he frantically searches the inner depth of his faux leather $12.99 wallet.
As long as I keep winning.
He blandly says, drastically distracted by ripping out a cocaine baggie wedged in the netting of the wallet. It's empty, with the memory of licking its crumbs to settle his nerves late last night evading him.
Sucks dick for no money.
He reluctantly gets £40 out of his wallet and passes it to Justin under the table.
Do us a half, would you, wee wee?
45 this is,
Justin says with flared nostrils. Alfie exaggeratingly tears out another $5 and exchanges it with Justin for the cocaine under the table.
Easy day's work for you, no doubt,
Frankie says. Alfie carefully examines the half-gram bag under the table for quality and quantity.
Yeah, mate, yeah. Didn't make too much of a meal of it, actually.
He smirks and funnels out a small silver house key from his tiny inside pocket and sticks it deep inside the bag of cocaine.
That took a few frames off me, but made him cry, so well worth it.
Frankie bursts out laughing. Alfie chugs most of a pint and glares around the room disdainfully.
Can we snooker all or what?
Look at these thoroughly earned pints.
Alfie snatches one of Frankie's pints and slurps most of it down. Damo grits his teeth, desperate to confront him.
Place is slammed full of noobs. Trial period is effective immediately as well.
He winces. The tingle from the benzocaine cut into the gear catches him off guard. He shovels on an even chunkier key's worth and snorts it with the opposite nostril.
Won't look good when your month probation comes round. Sacking off your first shift to stay here chugging skippy piss.
Over at the bar, Jill glowers pitifully at Alfie.
Disgrace swagging that ugly thing on TV, eh? You give that much of a rat's ass? Go and sort him out. Yes, Scott Banno. Would have been queuing round the block in my day there.
Jill slams his pint glass down on the bar after chugging over half of it. Alfie waits, stood up by the table, anxiously tapping his foot as Frankie fist bumps Dustin and Damo.
In a bit, yeah, lads. Banging night. Have to do it again.
Frankie buoyantly says. Damo winks and Justin nods and smiles. Once Frankie and Alfie turn their backs, Damo shudders and wipes his hand and knuckles on the table. Guy stands up and cheers savagely as they leave, and Alfie waves half-heartedly and rushes outside.
Champions League won't know what hit them, boy.
Alfie hurries to the car and fires up the engine way before Frankie leisurely makes it over, visibly lethargic from the ketamine cramps just topped off by the swift consecutive pints of lager. Between the haze of his muddled state and rolling up an L-joint to have out on old-school Ken's balcony in between frames, Frankie barely notices they're heading down the windy A5 past Bethesda. He anxiously gazes up at Alfie, whose breathing is heavy, his head placed strangely forward towards the steering wheel, his nostrils are flares, and his face has turned pale. Frankie clocks the speedometer, which reads 72 miles per hour.
Trying a new club tonight, are we, mate?
Frankie quietly asks.
Just want to whiz about for a while. Bit of a drive.
Alfie throws Frankie a small, dried, snot and cocaine-caked key.
Chuck a bit of bugle on that and do us a rolly, will ya?
Look, if I'm not grafting tonight, I wouldn't mind sinking a few more down by the jar, be honest with you.
Frankie rolls his eyes and hands Alfie the skinny cigarette he's halfway through making.
Can you take us back?
Alfie scoffs and throws the fag out of the window.
You ain't got a fucking job, boy!
Alfie says, taking his eyes off the road while he pours cocaine onto the gap between the bottom of his index finger and thumb and snorts it.
What was all that 1 month probation shite then?
Frankie sinks drearily into his seat and turns away with a scrunched up, bitter face.
Didn't win at Q school.
Alfie looks down miserably.
I ain't a pro.
A tear trickles down his face and the sadness transforms into brittle envy.
Never wanted to see me flourish.
Me?
Sabotaging my training from day one.
Oh, you're not as shit hot as you might think.
Alright for you, isn't it? Not all of us had a rich mother croak leave us a house. Talent's the only chance for us less fortunate than you to get out of toxic, dead-end fucking shitholes like this.
Alfie's face sinks.
And you nullified my talent, which leaves me facing the grim reality of having to work those despicable strip club bogs once again. And for how long?
Still, after all these years, think I'm lucky.
Alfie slams on the brakes, fortunate that nobody's behind them to smash into his boot.
Nice little trek will teach you a bit about suffering. You fucking need it!
Frankie slams the car door open and gets out, leaving it dangling in the road. Alfie stretches over and pokes his head out of the passenger door as Frankie walks off.
Maybe we'll have this conversation again one day, with a bit more empathy involved, eh?
His car screeches and smoke fumes from the tyre as he whizzes off. 10 seconds later, a police car driven by Gavin hurtles past towards Alfie's car with its sirens blaring wildly. Alfie pulls a handbrake turn into the other lane and speeds past Frankie. His black wheels slide on the damp road and his car skids passenger side on into a lamppost. Frankie sprints the short distance towards Alfie. A light dribble of blood flows from a cut on his scalp. His starry eyes are dazed, but he remains awake.
Scuttle off, boy.
Alfie mutters as they share a brief, hostile stare down.
I'd rather die here than have you help me.
Gavin's whirling police car pulls up behind Alfie. Frankie shrugs and walks off.
If you don't get sent down, have a Brama one down the bogs.
As Frankie vanishes into the dimly lit back road's darkness, Gwyn and Gavin burst out of their car.
Frankie, you're our only witness!
Gwyn shouts.
Oi, get back here, now.
Gavin screams, incensed by his costly decision of opting against having a dashcam fitted after it stopped working days ago. A mistake that will cost him a formal warning at the very least.
Didn't see nothing, me.
Frankie says.
Don't expect our cooperation when you need it, lad.
Despite being at least a 7-mile trek from here, Frankie's bubbling manic energy helps it feel possible. A feat his wobbly ketamine-affected legs wouldn't have been able to fathom an hour ago. First village down as he powers through the windy run-down high street of Bethesda, chock-a-block with boarded-up old shops, the odd pub, and masses of criminally unkempt flats for housing heroin and crack cocaine addicts. Rambunctious Welsh-speaking drinkers fill up the pavement, struggling to keep themselves off the road. What Frankie would give for an extra quid in his pocket to add to his current GDP of £1.25 for a swift pint in a plastic glass for the walk. The establishment's firm policy of not selling half pints puts a stop to that. Next comes the rough part as the adrenaline starts wearing off. A 2-mile stretch of main road accompanied by a paper-thin pavement without streetlights. Only a waist-high dry stone wall obstructs a grisly steep drop down into a river via sharp mountain rocks sticking out of the ground. Piercing cold wind gusts him into the wall repeatedly and rattles the ancient trees stooping above the road. Alfie glares at Frankie from the back seat of Gavin's car that whizzes past at a far safer speed. After an incident-free last-mile stretch of darkness, he reaches the oasis of bright light lampposts surrounding the tacky petrol garage and little chef restaurant combo. A miserable woman, overweight from her sedentary lifestyle and chocolate binge eating sessions, slouches out on her phone behind the counter, paying no attention to the shop. With his measly budget not stretching to afford even the simplest snack available, a sausage roll priced at an extortionate £3, he heads hesitantly to the till with it in hand. Despite noticing him with a restless glance upwards, the shop worker continues to scroll on Facebook for an awkward 20 seconds before putting the iPhone 3 down.
Would you let me pay for this another day? Next time I come in?
Already done 4 statuses about your luck today.
The shop cashier emphatically responds.
Don't fucking tempt me into a 5th.
Frankie nods, resigned to his fate, and strolls nonchalantly away.
Food bank rat?
Frankie grits his teeth, notices the CCTV camera pointing slightly off-centre, and seizes the opportunity to pocket the sausage roll, revelling in the thought of the dismal woman coughing up out of her own wages for the missing item. Frankie wolfs down half of it in 2 bites, once safely out the shop's view, but hesitates before eating the rest. Knowing this was likely to be his only nourishment and stomach lining, he saves half for the last stretch of the walk, not wanting to have burnt the thing off before he reaches a mile from home. He struggles through the last few miles, the buzz from the beers and ketamine now replaced by a minor stitch. With the wind and rain clattering down, he's happy to finally reach home. He lobs the sausage roll wrapper in next door's wide-open green wheelie bin, but misses and heads back to pick it up, placing it in the bin before confidently squaring into the house. Because he's back early, He has 2 blissful hours or so of peace ahead before Guy is bound to be back from Pound a Pint. Dazzler's illegally streaming Liverpool's FA Cup 3rd round replay against Wigan Athletic in the living room, and with him being so intensely engrossed in the game, Frankie doesn't even bother trying to say hello. Suddenly Dazzler jumps up, effing and jaffing at images of Adrian, who's just made a howling error, allowing Wigan to equalise at 1-1.
Klopp, man. Get a keeper who can catch. Fuck's sakes. Get out of my club, Adrian. Wrexham are calling your name.
Frankie cracks open a stumpy bottle of Brassier beer, heads into the living room and shakes his head.
Don't tell me them wrong and bookies have served you in Acker again.
Nah, the sound lad got the sack. Bunch of miserable old Rudolphs in there now. All on their last warning for jarring on the job. Won't be taking chances, not anymore. Good days are done for. Johnny's been on the withdrawals, good and proper.
Frankie looks away with raised eyebrows as he swigs his beer.
Would you do us dinner, please, Frank?
It's well late and I've eaten.
Dazzler's face sinks.
Nothing left on the side when he pissed off out.
Was there fuck? Lucozade diet today.
Frankie grunts and storms into the kitchen. He opens the sticky, dishevelled fridge, with its contents consisting of a meagre, mouldy, cling film-covered half an onion and an unwrapped, half-empty packet of bacon. He carelessly squirts sunflower oil around the crusty communal frying pan without much due diligence.
Didn't think about making this earlier. Don't know how, no. Didn't watch that YouTube video I sent then. Piss easy it is, Daz. Come on, man. Beer can, man.
Dazzler shouts in a shoddy Jamaican accent. Frankie smiles, his guard broken as he swivels the pan around.
This bacon bap will go a long way towards my ambitions.
Dazzler declares.
Oh yeah, I've decided, right? All I want is to be Bangor 1876's all-time great. That's it now.
Frankie scoffs and takes a swig of beer.
300 bar a week you can get playing for them.
Frankie puts together a 3 Skinner spliff build before slapping together the sizzling bacon sandwich with Hovis thick sliced white bread. Borderline undercooked, just as Dazzler likes it. Preference his body can hack after years of poorly cooked food made with dirty pans and around filthy kitchen surfaces.
Daz, been sanctioned today I have.
Oh yeah?
Dazzler vacantly responds, knowing fully well what he means. Knowledge about the world that would elude your average 12-year-old.
Might have to bail on the broadband for a bit. I can't give you money for school no more.
Fuck it. Vendors, until they come out the 80s, are a free-for-all. As is old school's wallet, when he hasn't pissed its content up the wall.
Frankie chuckles while looking down.
Give us a burn on that, would you, bruv?
Dazzler probes.
You off your fucking head or what?
Hoping to be.
You're 12.
Pain relief for the foot, yeah? Not to mention that crushing announcement of yours.
Frankie looks away, refusing to be coerced in the slightest.
I can't be arsed smoking another dimp joint, man.
Frankie's eyes wildly whirl. He storms into the living room and tips the bustling ashtray's contents into a makeshift carrier bag bin in the corner.
Do not smoke a dimp joint out of this room again. Promise me now. Seen you do it down here. And in your room. Well, if he's been session down here, which he has been, then you never fucking know what's going to be in him. I can't afford baccy. Shit in there could fucking kill you if the wrong person's been here.
Frankie sighs. He throws a clump of 5 fags worth of tobacco on the table and heads back into the kitchen. A foot-high flame bellows up from the stove.
Shit!
Frankie rips the fire blanket off the wall by its mouldy dangling handle and smothers the flame, managing to quickly put it out. Bereft of ideas, and not up for robbing anything else tonight, Frankie heads half a mile down the road to Best Kebabyi, a place situated just out of the town centre that prides themselves on pleasing their regular loyal customers. Frankie hesitantly heads in. Its tiny, compact waiting area is surrounded by bright, vibrant Hindu decorations. A drunk couple with gothic, long black hair moider brashly while waiting for their food. A tall Indian man wearing a stylish white and black striped Yves Saint Laurent polo shirt turns around. Being a true one-man army, he doesn't trust anyone else to uphold his high standards in the food preparation department.
Aye, Frank.
He frantically drops baskets of chips into the deep fat fryer and shaves off lamb doner meat.
What are you having, boss?
Look, you know me. Have a situation at home, I have. Couldn't do us a couple of meals on tech, could you please? Literally anything.
Naboo looks down and leans on the counter.
I've always thought you're a good lad. I like you and your brother. Proper characters, yeah. But is any of it for... I apologise to say like this, but that scumbag prick old man of yours.
You have my word.
Naboo nods and gets to work, starting off by throwing a generous handful of chips into the fryer and sticking 4 large beef patties on the grill. Frankie sits down, overwhelmed by the relief flowing through his veins. He thoroughly looks forward to what will be his first takeaway for over 2 months, a luxury given that his dole payments go on weed, tobacco, Dazzler's school money and cheap supermarket food with whatever is left. A 20-minute wait flies by owing to the manic thoughts from his gargantuan day. For once, he feels proud of himself, proud of standing up to the overbearing demands of Alfie that he's long grown tired of. He picks up the 2 stacked, double-layered paper bags of takeaway food, not knowing what's in them, and thanks Naboo profusely. While taking a break from drinking to sell a bag of cocaine to a punter too anxious to be within eyesight of the pub, Damo and Justin sneak up behind Frankie, startling him enough to nearly drop the food.
Look who it is!
Money for takeaway, money for snooker.
Justin inspects the size of the bags.
Happy for us to buy you jars all night though, weren't you?
Damo tears the top off one of the bags and looks inside, beaming as he turns away.
Fucking feast and half he's got there!
All free.
Frankie mumbles. Justin and Damo gaze at each other with wry smirks and sarcastically nod.
Oh yeah. All right then, mate. I swear.
Damo snatches both bags off Frankie, who barely resists. Him and Justin strut off proudly. Frankie stands, rooted to the spot, stunned to the core. He sheds a single tear, and Damo swiftly returns, cackling cynically as he hands Frankie the bags back.
I'm not gonna take your food, lad.
Damo howls at Frankie's continued distress, who eventually side smiles half-heartedly.
Few jars again soon?
Frankie's eyes light up.
On me next time.
Damo winks and walks off chuckling. Frankie dumps the food bags on the table in front of a stunned Dazzler. They collectively unearth their family feast of 2.5-pound special doner meat burgers, 3 large chips, 2 chicken doner kebab wraps, a 10-inch meat feast pizza with onion, and 1.5-litre bottle of Pepsi Max, having no issue munching through the lot, bar a portion of chips and the last slice of pizza. After a few episodes of Family Guy repeats on BBC Three, Frankie drifts off in a comatose state, and Dazzler stealthily takes a pinch from his tobacco pouch before sneaking off upstairs. A few hours later, just when getting into a deep sleep, the front door slams shut. While this only partially awakens Frankie, Guy rushing in, gaining and shaking him completes the job.
Wake up, boy! Wake up!
Guy urgently says. Frankie flails his arms around wildly, trying to push Guy away. After failing in his attempt, he stuffs a cushion over his head.
Piss off!
Guy continues shaking him, progressively, vigorously, with steady determination.
Give me a fucking second!
Get up now!
Frankie begrudgingly sits up and lights a half-smoked joint propped up in the ashtray. Guy fiercely clenches his fists and grits his teeth.
You 2 little toe rags have some nerve!
Guy slaps Frankie across his chin, sending his joint flying across the room. A mini cut opens up on his lower lip.
Fucking takeaway in my house without me? I'm ashamed. Ashamed of the greed that gushes within you both. I really am.
Undeterred, Frankie gets up in Guy's face.
Best thing you can do is keep doing what you're doing, old man. Keep it up. Gives us every chance of being nothing like.
Guy leathers Frankie one on the mouth with a closed fist, and a front tooth of Frankie's cracks jaggedly without his head moving. As Guy lands a right hook flush on Frankie's temple, sending him staggering back into a loose pile of DVDs, only holding himself up with the corner of the walls. Guy pounces and grabs him by the scruff of the neck with his left hand, walloping him 6 times. Dazzler appears and jumps on Guy's neck from behind, locking his arms around Guy's flabby turkey neck and wrapping his legs around Guy's waist, utilising jiu-jitsu tips picked up from endless Saturday night streaming Las Vegas UFC cards. Guy waves his head around, unable to quite shake Dazzler off. With time to partially recover, Frankie staggers back up to his feet, with his left eye now totally swollen shut. He uppercuts Guy right in the balls. Guy pants as Frankie lands an identical shot on his testes, only this time twice as hard. Guy staggers to his knees, then to his side, with Dazzler managing to keep hold of Guy the entire time, despite cutting his forehead on the floor as they flop over sideways. He tightens his grip on the choke and holds it until Guy's unconscious, then gets straight up, gazes at Frankie's battered and bruised face and tightly hugs his brother. Frankie breaks off and stamps on Guy's head.
It's not worth it.
Dazzler tries to restrain Frankie.
He's had his fucking day. Get sent down and I really will be alone.
After a few seconds, the magnitude of Dazzler's statement dawns large, and he ceases to resist, opting instead to spit blood and a shard of his tooth at Guy's head. Frankie picks the joint up off the floor and staggers towards the garden door, slouching on the frame as he sparks up the joint. After quickly losing his footing, he falls headfirst onto the garden's gravel floor. Frankie wakes up to being strapped onto a stretcher firmly by Keith, a stressed-out paramedic in his 50s desperately awaiting retirement. He peeks around nervously.
You're alright, lad. Cops have had him. Just stay where you are.
Keith says, devoid of emotion from being institutionalised in his job out of fear of not being able to afford cocaine should he quit. Frankie looks up to see Twiggy on the other side of the stretcher, nicknamed as you'd expect because of his skinny stature, who's absolutely bricking himself. Being new to the medical field, this is the gnarliest situation his inaugural 2 months in the service has thrown his way.
Ready?
Keith sternly says, far from showing any belief in the rookie opposite him. They brace themselves to lift the stretcher, and as it's hoisted up, Twiggy lifts sideways at the wrong angle, leaving Frankie perilously off balance.
Stôn gach yn gwaith eto. Fucking knobhead. Fuck ti'n meddwl wt ti, hamro valleys yn gwaith. Fucking diawl o foi. Di o ddim ar amser I bregethu.
Chapter 7. Bryn and Neuadd. Frankie's following few months proved harrowing to say the least. Briefly, he blissfully had the house to himself following his father's horrific assault and subsequent 3-year prison sentence, 2 years for the assault and 1 for child negligence. However, given his traumatic head injuries and the nasty vertigo that lingered alongside, he was vulnerable and unable to always fully look after himself. With Dazzler sent immediately to Bryn and Neuadd care home following the assault, where he's languished ever since, Damo and Justin stepped in to help, a seemingly noble gesture at the time. They took his shopping list to Lidl, got him whatever was required, and kept him company with what started off as an innocent twice-weekly session on the gear and beers. Gradually, they would pop it over in the mornings for swift blitzes of weighing and packaging bags of cocaine and ketamine, claiming to be worried about leaving the traces of evidence at their own place. Frankie's unspoken reservations were nipped in the bud and numbed by the occasional weed handout, between half and a full gram on occasions to smoke as a reward. This progressed over the coming weeks, and the courtesy of checking with Frankie before turning up diminished, with them now rocking up at all times of the night, even going as far as stealthily breaking the back door's lock without Frankie noticing, as to further convenience their regular coming and going. Over time, this absolutely shattered the shed's tarpaulin roof, after having them hop over the wall onto it continuously. Their friendliness, as well as consent, drastically dwindled after a month or so. Progressively, they made Frankie increasingly uncomfortable and started banishing him to his room unless they wanted something. Then the party started, as well as the presence of the halfway house rogues. Lee and Ali, in particular, became regular fixtures, both favouring the spacious living room that they were making their own over the small rooms and shabby courtyard of the halfway house. Such was the hostility thrown his way when cooking food in the open-plan kitchen and living room. Frankie's weight plummeted, despite him already being dangerously skinny. After being dished out final warnings at the halfway house, it became Justin and Damo's dealing spot, even going as far as them placing a knife on a neighbour's throat to punish their audacity to complain about the rowdy customers shouting outside when turning up without prior appointment. Dazzler's room became the designated shagging room for when brave women that dared enter will have become even more of a shithole. What with the new thriving rat community making themselves at home in the yard's stray bin bags. What solidified the house's status as a trap house and brought order to proceedings was the release from prison of the fierce Wrexham dealer Kieran Clark after serving his 5-year sentence for cocaine dealing. A feared ex-drug enforcer turned dealer, he serves as Justin and Damo's line manager and identified the place as the new base of his county lines operation. Frankie's reward for keeping quiet progressed to a strip of Valium and a 20 bag of weed a week, feeding his ever-increasing drug addiction. Frankie lies belly down on a grubby, sheetless springy mattress under a coverless, musty duvet, now far paler and gaunt in appearance owing to his ever-increasing ketamine, Valium and alcohol abuse. After being rudely awoken by rumbling and shouting from downstairs, he looks up at his bare, furniture-shy room, containing only a telly and a small pile of clothing. Empty Valium packets, revolting ashtrays, and cans of value lager litter the dusty, sticky carpet and surfaces. A DVD case with skeletons of last night's bedtime ketamine lines and a rolled-up train ticket lies nearby. His vision sparkles from dehydration as he reaches over to grab a Valium strip and tobacco from the floor, necking a Valium in an instant and washing it down with dregs of a Galaric spear. After multiple spates of rage following consecutive significant drug losses owing to their incompetence, Frankie's now dishevelled living room walls plastered with punched-in holes. One of the culprits of such brute force, Kieran, is sat with Justin, weighing and bagging 1-gram bags of ketamine. His large frame and puffy Canada Goose jacket squashes Justin into the armrest of the torn and tattered two-seat sofa.
Don't be ticking flat out this time, wee lad.
Kieran warns, with this being Justin's first opportunity to prove himself as more than just a runner following consecutive, atrocious quarterly financial performances, owing to his tentative approach to the retrieval of debt.
I always get it back, me.
Justin lies, dismayed at having his incompetence called out in front of Damo, whose rivalry to be the highest earner with has intensified. Damo scoffs from the other side of the room, where he stirs ketamine in a saucepan with a spatula, wearing a clean beige apron.
First thing a crusty wreckhead round here thinks when they want a bit of free gear is get that drip 3-2-1, wee on the blower. That being the odds on the street of having to pay a wee tick.
Justin grunts and aggressively bags a gram of ketamine.
Prick,
he mutters as he grabs 2 NOS canisters out of a box. Kieran spots this, grabs 4.
Don't hammer them, no.
Kieran lobs 2 canisters at Damo. One hits him on the back of the head, and the other lands in the brewing ketamine. Damo turns around and smirks sarcastically.
Get him down, you bum boy!
Having booked up the courage to head downstairs and face the day, Frankie takes a pee in his bedroom sink while smoking a fag, wincing as the pain of his ketamine-induced bladder infection takes hold. As his light bulb flickers on and off, he throws in the plug and fills up the sink basin, grunting when realising he's done it in the wrong order and will now be washing his face out of the freshly pistoned sink. Knowing the bathroom sink is blocked with projectile vomit after last night, he bites the bullet and splashes his face in his own pissy sink, freshening up as sharply as the grim facilities and facial wash lotion rationing can make him. He ventures out into the hallway, flickering on the light, only to remember Kieran swinging on the light socket, imitating a chimpanzee and pulling it clean out of the roof the night before. This adds peril to the walk downstairs, giving the near-permanent scattering of broken glass occupying the floor. He tiptoes down the stairs, tripping towards the bottom, on a lifeless woman sprawled out on the floor. Kieran sucks a NOS balloon into his lungs with all the power his diaphragm can withstand.
Won't do NOS, 'cause he's a vegan.
Justin scrunches his face in disbelief. Damo shrugs and turns his attention back to the simmering ketamine on the stove.
Biggest fucking gimp going. You'll be right on the beak later, and I'm telling you now, that's not even in the same stratosphere as vegan, lad.
Justin adds. Frankie stumbles backwards through the door with his hands up defensively, cutting Justin off. A scatty woman in her 20s called Dolly, an occasional prostitute and the group's pass-around shag, slaps Frankie with open palms around the head repeatedly with sinister intent.
Fuck do you think you are, wasting my hit?
Dolly shrieks, distraught at having been woken up at the peak of her heroin trip. Kieran spits out his balloons, such is the ferocity of his chilling laughter. Frankie pins Dolly against the wall with his forearm, holding his free arm up as a clenched fist.
Fucking give me 10 bar now.
You passed out on the stairs and I didn't see you. That's all there is to it.
Frankie lets go of Dolly after a few tense seconds. She immediately phlegms in his face.
I'll get it off you.
Dolly passes by and takes a seat in the living room with a wry smirk.
Touch me again, bird or not.
Frankie fiercely wipes the spit off his face. Kieran's amusement abruptly ends.
Well, it's 30 bar off you every day she's a bit too knocked out to partake, my mate.
Frankie looks down powerlessly at his feet. Owing £30 a day that he simply doesn't have could lead to being forced into all sorts of favours, perhaps violent, or even having to take a hefty package of valleys into prison. All things he's been threatened with in the past, but through careful avoidance of debt has managed to avoid. He heads over to the fridge and takes out a fresh carton of eggs and a packet of bacon.
Who let him put them in there?
Kieran storms over to Frankie and snatches the eggs.
No fucking eggs in my office. I told you that. Didn't I tell him that?
Kieran pelts the eggs into the bin. Frankie hastily grabs a frying pan out.
And you're not frying fuck all. Not while that vegan nonce cooks our gear. Get it away now.
Get the grill on, lad. Plenty of space over here.
Damo creepily ushers him over. Frankie bends down, opens the oven door, and Damo bends down behind him.
Long as you don't mind me being nosy.
He whispers in Frankie's ear while tightly grabbing his buttock. Frankie jolts up and spends the bacon's cooking time out in the yard smoking, trying with all his might to withhold tears. Despite the less than favourable treatment of him by this motley crew, never has he felt as unsafe and violated by any of them. With the bacon only partly cooked, Frankie sticks it on a plate with shaky hands and rushes up the stairs to a chorus of chuckles. With his appetite well and truly scuppered, Frankie lets it all out and sobs profusely. Heading straight for his ketamine stash, he sits back on his bed and crushes a 3-inch sized line with a £5 note and credit card on his phone case before devouring the lot in one sitting. Lying back in his newfound peace, a trickle of blood drips out of his nose. Johnny leads the determined quartet of himself, Dazzler, Wilder, and the school's tag-along class clown Macaulay as they peg it towards Morrison's on push bikes, all having left school at lunchtime to dodge double French lessons. Johnny power slides across the final stretch, narrowly avoiding a few disgruntled pensioners. Macaulay lags behind and arrives later than the rest, his 100-kilo frame on a 12-year-old's body unable to keep up. Dazzler and Johnny grab a basket, neither bearing any intention of using them, but both take shoplifting seriously and understand that every step in appearing a legitimate customer matters. Dazzler and Wilder form one predetermined pairing, with Macaulay being a relative shoplifting novice. The vastly experienced Johnny will dig them out of any tight spots should they arise. Dazzler heads for the bakery section and crouches by the counter with a rucksack on his back, borrowing Wilder's on account of his comparative lightning speed, therefore being adequately equipped to escape with their haul. Wilder diligently checks their path right and left, unzips the rucksack and stuffs it chock-a-block full of white chocolate cookies, custard donuts and packs of steak pies. Over on the chocolate duty in the treats aisle, Macaulay brazenly grabs a handful of bars, stuffing them into Johnny's rucksack erratically, the pressure evidently proving tough for him to handle.
Composure,
Johnny sharply says while picking up multi-packs of Snickers dropped on the floor. Dazzler and Wilder sneak over to the usual escape pod of the lift down into the car park, where a pre-planned, pinpointed pathway through isn't covered by CCTV. A disaster. The lift won't respond, and Dazzler's bashing of the button catches the attention of the comically short security guard. So the boys dart off towards the exit, alerting Johnny and Macaulay on the way. Dazzler, Johnny and Wilder get away in enough time to fly off on their bikes and evade the hapless security guard. Macaulay, however, is let down once again by his brittle mobility as the larger security guard bashes his mountain bike away and restrains him with no issues.
Get off me, man!
Macaulay shouts. Out comes the smaller security guard, panting pitifully. He rips the bag out of Macaulay's hands after some savage rugby maul type resistance from the promising Bangor Rugby Club under-13's hooker. A rough night down the cop shop awaits poor Macaulay, and with this being his 4th misdemeanour of the year, so does an odds-on chance of a short stretch at Borstal. Not that he'll be overly bothered. Bryn in Neuadd care home isn't any more prosperous, and the food can't be worse in jail. Johnny, Wilder and Dazzler race back to the care home for what will be Wilder's introduction to the place's notoriously foul grub on his first day. Conrad Brick, his single-parent father, had somehow evaded social services all these years, despite his drug addiction-induced neglectful parenting, only reaching his respective final straw in losing custody after being sentenced to 2 years inside for selling just enough heroin to fund his own habit. Taking the blame bagged him an extra year inside, fearful of the repercussions should he mention Kieran as his supplier. They're joined at the table by the only other 2 of the home's residents, Felix and Brenda, both veterans of the care home circuit, 14 and nearing the magic age of 16 when they'll inevitably be cut off from the support afforded to them by the system. Small bits of bacon, runny mashed potato, and salad leaves bearing an off-putting shade of green shape up Paul Chef's choice of cuisine for the evening. A collective air of apprehension dominates the room as everyone other than Johnny struggles to swallow the dismal food. A bit of Wilder's half-frozen bacon proves tough to cut up. Johnny wolfs his food down with no issue, while Felix and Brenda have had enough. Despite burning hunger pains, they spit out their mouthfuls and Dazzler follows their lead by doing the same.
Don't half dish out turd when the new lads rock up,
Brenda bitterly says, glaring at Wilder as she pushes her plate away.
Johnny doesn't care though, no?
Felix says. Johnny shakes his head.
After many years of getting fuck all, 4, 5, 6 days on the trot.
His face lights up.
I'll scran anything, me. Frozen or not.
Johnny unapologetically stuffs a mouthful of food in his mouth.
Specs, lad. We're brimming with top-drawer consumables, and you're choosing to munch that shit?
Dazzler points out. Johnny spits out the food.
Spot on, our Dazzler. Save the runs and food poisoning for a rainy day. I like your style.
He shoves the plate away.
My baghead old man rustled up finer grub.
Wilder says, with a grimace. Felix, Johnny, Dazzler and Brenda gaze anxiously towards the door as the home's sinister, sadistic lead carer Ben sneaks in and rolls up his button-up shirt sleeves.
Tripping off his nutsack.
Wilder's cut off by Ben, grabbing his hair from behind and shoving his face downwards into the food.
Pity. All it feels like doing is smashing skag and chucking strongbow all day then, isn't it?
Ben says in Wilder's ear before letting go of him. Wilder pants for air and glowers at Ben. Dazzler puffs out his chest and gets out of his seat. Felix restrains him, fearing for the inevitable group consequences already coming their way for attempted violence.
So do yourself a favour and learn some fucking respect. Be grateful for what you're given. The lot of you!
Ben smirks as he heads out the room. Wilder furiously wipes the food off his face with an already dirtied napkin, lights a pre-rolled fag, and storms out into the yard. Felix storms off, dismayed by the new kid's descent that will cost them all dearly. Not only will they now be cooked the same drivel for the next few dinners, despite the catering company possessing far tastier options, but their measly £5 a week pocket money will no doubt be scaled down, or withheld entirely. Ben runs this place like a military camp, and it's known as the second worst care home in the area, with the worst, nicknamed Savile Block, being rife with sexual abuse. A lingering threat of being sent there is Ben's way of trying to keep everyone in line. Having seen swathes of his friends sent there over the years and never being the same after, Felix harbours a plan to punish Wilder. With the consent of Ben, who gladly complies, Felix and Brenda get themselves locked in the TV room alone with Wilder, hoping to dish him out a right kicking. However, this backfires, as the seemingly soft-looking Wilder flattens Felix with his first punch. Having been taught not to hit women, he holds his fist up at Brenda, but without the assistance of her trusty sidekick, she bricks it and slams on the locked door until Ben lets her out. Threatened by Wilder's defiance to these anarchic, military forms of control, Ben immediately books Wilder's place in Savile Block, with the plan being that he'll be transferred over in 4 days' time. Ben decides not to tell Wilder until an hour before he leaves. Gwyn and Gavin arrive at the door. They pelt the doorbell, and Ben races to answer, opening the door with a grisly, unwelcoming scowl.
Sorry to bother you, Ben, but two of your new lads, Dazzler and
Wilder. And John Specs. All of them been copped on CCTV grafting a whole load of stock down Morrison's.
Ben grimaces, looks down, and ushers the coppers in.
I'll lead you right to the thieving little fucks. Nothing but grief they've been giving me.
Given their recent collective bad luck,
no little terror here hides behind any of that.
Gavin looks on in awe, subtly nodding.
Okay, provided I can have chat with them, I'm willing to turn a blind eye. But for this to be treated as their final warning.
That's all you're here for? A half-ass dressing down from a pair of shitbag clowns? Be honest with you, I'll do a far fucking better job of that.
Okay, Ben, we'll leave you to it.
Dazzler lies on his mattress, barely elevated off the floor, his musty room's window frames covered in built-up condensation mould. He grinds up some weed acquired on a tick at school by a scrawny kid in the year above that Dazzler has no desire to pay for the following day as agreed. Suddenly the doorknob creaks. Dazzler panics, hides all of his smoking equipment under the pillow and stands up straight, ready for action.
So where is it then?
All of what?
Just had the coppers here for you. I think you know why.
Ben regimentally bashes everything off the shelves, including Dazzler's TV and Xbox 360, finishing off by tipping out the content of Dazzler's black bags. Distraught at not finding what he was after, Ben looks around guiltily, even for his own harsh standards, knowing he's gone a tad too far this time.
You and that trampy little fuckwader are gone. Out of here. Already packed him a spot in Colwyn Bay. Just you wait till they have a space for you.
Get the stumpies out then, why don't you?
Dazzler coldly says, masking his overwhelming inner fear. Ben goes viciously red in the face and throws Dazzler onto the bed, grimacing as he holds his head in his hands and looks around the trashed room and the cracked TV screen. Unable to take the sight any longer, he abruptly leaves. That was it for Wilder. Too tough for his own good and posing a threat to Ben's authority, he was duly shipped out to fend for himself. Most likely he'd be alright, given his ability to fight, but the threat of sexual abuse from caregivers will always loom large. Although it took 4 days instead of 1 to get him there, much to Ben's dismay. Chapter 8. Passing the Book. On a highly anticipated Wednesday night, Kieran, Justin and Damo enjoy a few pre-drinks in the living room while playing FIFA for £1 a game. Suffering from horrendous come-down, having smoked £30 worth of crack last night, Dolly flops in through the back door. This stuns Frankie, who's making toast, the first thing he's had the courage to get up and make all day. Dolly's in tears, partly due to her ravenous cravings, but also because of feeling sorry for herself after having just cancelled a £20 15-minute long booking to give one of her regulars on adult work a blowjob. A move that'll no doubt harm her reputation and give an advantage to Lily Lick, her fierce local competitor, who joins her in the category of having one of the county's cheapest rates on the site.
Nah, no more tick. Piss off.
Kieran says the second he spots her.
Come on, don't be sly for fucking once.
Dolly splutters, perching down distressingly on her knees, facing Kieran, much to Justin and Damo's amusement.
Get out there slagging, and you'll be back here in an hour.
Oh, I need a taste before I can face it.
Can't hack the come down without skag? Well, fucking don't get down a wanna with me.
Dolly lays her head on Kieran's lap, drenching his new maroon-red Adidas tracksuit bottoms with tears and chemical-ridden sweat.
I'll fuck you all night, Keys, you know I will.
Kieran shoves Dolly away deliberately in Damo's direction. Such is his shock, he drops the controller.
Don't you touch me!
He forcefully shoves her onto the floor and wrings his hands out. She lies there, flopped out and sniffling in defeat.
Shag for skag went out the window the moment you got a pseudo.
Justin celebrates a goal by Dominic Calvert-Lewin, despite having had the advantage of Damo dropping the controller.
Her fault that was. No chance you're getting a quid if I lose.
Frankie's white bread toast pops out of the toaster. He picks it up with his trembling hand and sticks it on a plate to leave, too nervous to stick around long enough to butter it. Dolly grabs Frankie's crotch from behind.
Ain't forgotten that tenner.
She whispers seductively in his ear, before kissing him repeatedly on the neck. With his free arm, Frankie backward elbows Dolly in the face, sending her clattering to the floor. He drops the plate of toast and looks nervously over at Kieran, awaiting his fate.
Long as she buys a bit of gear tomorrow,
Kieran says, without looking up from the chunky lines of cocaine he's racking up. With his conditional reprieve, Frankie darts upstairs, putting aside his lingering hunger for the time being, until the house is empty in a few hours at least. It proves to be a struggle, as the hours slither by, and it reaches 10 PM without them yet having trudged off for their weekly fill of borderline expired Carlsberg. So much so, that Frankie decides to doze off early to conquer the hunger, a tactic mastered in his early life, when having to cope on many occasions without dinner. After a mere haze of light sleep, made lighter by the rough, sheetless mattress, and in which time he's managed to wet the bed, he's rudely awakened by loud nicking and thumping of the front door. Small chippings off the house's wall are pelted up against Frankie's window like missiles. After a few seconds, he wakes up in a daze, gets up, and sneaks over to the window, hunched over awkwardly, pausing fearfully before looking over and seeing Kieran, Justin and Damo looking up at him.
Open it, you gooseneck prick. Fuck are you locking it for?
Frankie sprints over to the table, grabs the key, drops it out of the window and falls back into bed, covering himself up tightly. He shudders as the front door is thrust open, clearly audible with it being directly under his room. This is soon drowned out by a generic late 2010s trap beat. A piece of cutlery in a bowl shakes, such is the power of the speaker's bass from downstairs. Frankie checks his phone, which states 6 a.m. Knowing his chances of sleeping away the trembling hunger are done for, he sits up miserably, licks a Rizzler, and makes an L-shaped build for a morning hash spliff. Its nicotine hit does nothing to stifle his hunger, and he makes the tough decision to venture downstairs to try to eat, once his depleted body finds the energy to rise. Damo racks up half a gram line of ketamine, having been starved of anything but a few small keys while out. After smashing half of the line, he splutters before the end and can't finish it, sinking back into the sofa lifelessly with his eyes drooped open. Kieran holds his phone camera up, ready to record one of his lauded Snapchat videos. He's gaining, sweating, and his pupils are almost sunk back into his head.
Day fucking 3 of...
Kieran snorts a line of speed off a plate, the one drug guaranteed to send him loopy, sometimes while on it, almost always the day after. His head twitches erratically, the sting of his knackered right nostril hard to hide. He waves the camera in Damo's vacant face.
Well, not for Mr. I've never been in a K-hole me, Hayward.
He pans the camera over to the half-finished line and crusty rolled up £20 note alongside it, before picking up a stray can of beer and pouring a few swigs worth over Damo's face. There's no reaction.
Thought you benders had a bit of session, you man.
Kieran pours a larger amount directly down Damo's throat and chuckles as Damo gags, but still doesn't wake up. Bored by Damo's comatose state, Kieran sticks the camera in Justin's sweaty face, who stood up, raving on the spot.
Brama as a tune could ever be.
Justin passionately claims, with his beady eyes glued to the TV. Frankie, skulking into the kitchen lethargically, grabs Kieran's attention.
No way, boys. Goosenecks on the sesh.
Kieran stuffs the camera in Frankie's face until he's cowering in the corner of the kitchen. Back up the stairs Frankie goes, only once Kieran has had enough footage for his sesh montage, of course. With no chance of grabbing anything from the kitchen, he painstakingly waits it out for the 4-hour gap before his visit with Dazzler, a quit joint on Bangor Mountain before school. Frankie has no-showed to the last few after necking inordinate amounts of Valium and being unable to hear his alarm, so this one is crucial to uphold in order to maintain some sort of trust. With a collection of rusty small change, mostly coppers, Frankie treats himself to a 30p half-sized white baguette from Morrison's en route, wolfing half of it down before even reaching the shop's entrance. He attempts a no-look throw of the baguette's wrapper into a nearby bin, and despite noticing it miss, doesn't go and pick it up. He stumbles down the last stretch of the journey, a poorly maintained, nettle-infested downward mountain path, one of the premium heroin shooting and dealing spots in town. Dazzler's already at the bottom. Sat on a step, smoking a fag, he raises his hand lopsidedly at Frankie.
How are you, scrapper lad?
Frankie cautiously says, alarmed at the marks on Dazzler's face.
Should have seen the state he was in.
Frankie tries to conceal a grin.
Joss gave you worse anyway. Detached fucking retina, man.
Frankie points to his right eye. Dazzler puffs out his chest sarcastically.
Well, you robbed her 10 out of 10 Cali boy. 3 weeks to ship in more. Any mother would have done the same.
They both burst out laughing.
Worth it for the month off school alone.
Dazzler's lighter buckles while lighting his fag, and Frankie likes both his and his own.
Surprised you're out of bed, lad. Says the one. Looks like you're still in bed. Proper grim one at that.
Dazzler bitterly remarks. A brief awkward silence falls between them.
That Rudolph cunt down there had me and Wilder fucking weeding and scrubbing bogs 6:30.
Frankie grimaces and chucks a chunky bud in his grinder.
Still giving you grief. Much as I'd let him.
Dazzler turns away and sheds a tear out of Frankie's view, swiftly wiping it away and putting on a forced smile.
Be sweet if I could just come back home though, wouldn't it? Oh, any week now, mate.
Dazzler's eyes perk up.
1 or 2 things to sort out.
As soon as it's lifted, Dazzler's face sinks once again. A classic Frankie excuse of the last few months. A sure sign of absolutely zilch happening.
One of them being fibre optic for the Liverpool West Ham semi-final.
And the IPL doubleheader straight after.
Frankie struggles to roll the joint. Dazzler rolls his eyes and looks down miserably. Later that evening, Frankie's on his usual pre-party delivery services for the crew. While stood bashfully in front of them in the living room, Kieran, Damo and Justin throw money at him. Dolly lies with her legs up on the sofa, dissociating, having managed to overcome her earlier meltdown to get out and fulfill a quick 15-minute appointment. Ash from her lit fag flickers off at the end and burns holes in her black tights.
Get us 920 crates of skippies, aye? And, steak burgers.
Kieran throws an extra $5 at Frankie.
Pink gin with my 20. I ain't chipping in on no skippies, man.
Awkward cunt. 50 bar for 9 crates.
Damo shrugs with a sadistic grin.
Oh, you and your pink gin, man.
Kieran screeches and looks down, embarrassed by his mini meltdown. Frankie scrambles around, picking up the mixture of change and notes off the floor.
I'll get what I can.
Dolly snaps back into full consciousness, shakes Justin's shoulder, and asks in his ear,
"Is he gonna shop?"
Yeah.
Justin winces, pushes her away, and lobs a £1 coin that hits Frankie on the side of the head.
Get this one some fucking airwaves.
Dolly falls off the sofa. Such is her urgency to grab a small duffel bag behind it.
Change that for a score while you're at it.
She pulls out a filthy carrier bag, absolutely stacked with £20 worth of small value dirty coins. Frankie gags at the rusty whiff coming from the bag and chucks it on the table.
Piss right off.
Dolly erupts and aims a kick at Frankie's calf, which misses as he heads for the front door.
Oi!
Kieran shouts, just as Frankie has his hands on the door handle. His deep, angry voice ripples through the walls separating them that he thumps repeatedly.
Since when have I had to do favours for the weekly strip?
Panic stations set in. Given the predominant reason for being so willing to fulfill this errand is to secure something to help him sleep through the party. After getting no answer, Frankie storms back into the living room and takes the filthy bag with him. Muddy from the walk and treading filth up the Tesco Extra Stores floor, Frankie picks up the last 9 crates of Stumpies, avoiding what would have been a guaranteed night without the Valium had he come back empty-handed. Frankie loads the crates, gin and burgers onto checkout 3, as specified by Kieran, and tips the change from the carrier bag onto the counter.
Change this for me, please.
He asks the pale, ragged checkout server.
Kieran?
She grits her teeth, having been pulled this trick on by him on multiple occasions for being one day late on a £50 cocaine tick. She glares up at Frankie.
20 squids there.
Without doubt, her bags will be dipped by 0.2 of a gram at the very least. She checks the empty queue behind Frankie.
Never again, mate.
She pedantically slips on a pair of disposable gloves. Frankie rubs his hands on his face in relief and gets on the phone to Klaus's cabs, only to be told their rates have risen and will now cost him £4.50 to get home, which to his dismay leaves him short. With no security guard on the door tonight, Frankie's path is clear to nab the trolley and wheel it home, proving troublesome in the boggy pavementless main road en route. His only scare was an upcoming cop car, which Frankie dealt with by shoving the trolley in a nearby bush, leaving enough time to avoid detection as it hurtled past. From virtually the second he opens the door, the trolley's pulled ferociously into the living room. Frankie stuffs a £20 note into Dolly's chest, not giving her the chance to get any closer to him than is necessary. Justin and Damo gleefully grab their drinks, with Damo particularly enthralled. Not surprising, having barred himself from drinking for a week in an attempt to wean his dependents off of it. A landmark moment in his adult life, the first week since the age of 13 without drinking. Kieran, however, is more excited by the boastful spew he's chatting to Glesney and Delith, who arrived minutes earlier on the promise of free cocaine and drinks. On and on he goes about his new batch of cocaine's purity, catching Glesney, the more conventionally pretty of the two's attention, more than Delith, who's at her first party of the sort having been led astray from her strict, well-behaved upbringing by Glesney. Both started off their drug taking in the previous months, taking MDMA 2 to 3 times a week, which is how they met Justin, and grew curious of the wonders of other drugs out there. Delith's attention fixates on the sheer delight glittering on Damo's face as he pours his first glass of gin. Noticing this, he smirks and pours 3 other shots. Catching a glimpse of the trolley in his eye, Kieran cuts himself off mid-sentence, squares over, and picks up the packet of burgers.
The one thing I asked of you.
He holds up the split packet.
I'm so sorry, mate. Nightmare of a journey.
Kieran shakes his head, pops 2 10mg Valiums from a fresh strip in his mouth, cracks open a stumpy beer with his teeth and washes them down with it.
All you're good for is your fucking gaff.
He throws the Valium strip over to Frankie, deliberately inaccurately, and turns away to bag up a 1/4 ounce of weed. Frankie scrambles to pick it up off the greasy floor near Damo and Justin's feet. To his horror, he spots 2 missing and runs over to confront Kieran.
1 strip a week. All I ask for. I don't give you no shit. I keep to myself. I don't whinge when I can't get no kip.
Kieran callously ignores Frankie, not even turning to face him. Ali and Lee storm in energetically, both holding 2 carrier bags, each stuffed with 660ml bottles of Kronenberg.
You wanted a dirty sesh.
Lee shakes up a bottle, chips the kitchen service while cracking it open with it, and sprays it around the room. Part of it lands on Damo and Justin, who take it in good spirits, but most of it's on Frankie and Dolly, who don't share the same zest for his actions.
Well, you fucking got one.
Kieran glances back at Frankie with a subtle smirk and struts jovially over to Lee and Ali.
Dinglers.
He claps hands with both. Kieran hands Lee the newly bagged 1/4 ounce and he takes it away mirthfully to a nearby surface, euphorically examining it, taking a deep whiff of the inside bag.
Girl Scout cookies, man.
Lee proudly shows Ali, who shrugs neutrally and tears a bit off one of the buds to make a joint.
Get yourself a whiff of that.
Lee sticks the bag in Frankie's face in an attempt to garner the positive reaction he so desperately desires. Frankie sniffs it and nods unconvincingly.
Brama or what?
Having given up on his quest, Lee throws some tobacco into a king's skin.
How's the diet going, mate?
Frankie tentatively asks. Lee throws the tobacco down and bullishly gets in Frankie's face.
What you want about diet, you gimpy little fuck?
He rips the strip of Valium out of Frankie's hand, stuffs one in his mouth and holds them up.
Valleys are my diet, mate. So I'll have them all day.
Frankie reaches for the strip, but using his gangly height, Lee manoeuvres them out of his reach. Frankie's attempts at snatching them becomes progressively tenacious, to the amusement of all in the room, bar Glesney and Daleth, who look on in sympathy.
Let the lad have his dear jellies.
Kieran says.
No fucking way.
Lee insists.
He won't stop crying. Let him have them.
Kieran throws Lee 2 full strips of strong 30mg Valiums. Moderately satisfied with the compromise, Lee chucks Frankie's strip out of the window and into a shallow puddle in the yard. Frankie darts outside to get them, becoming drenched by thundering rain, and runs upstairs, guarding his dear soggy strip of Valium close to his chest. He chucks 3 in his mouth, a heavier dose than usual, and turns up Match of the Day on his screechy old telly to maximum volume, only partially blocking out the monsoon of noise from downstairs. For Daleth's first time at a party such as this, she's got the hang of sniffing lines down to a T. Despite the near enough certainty of being ostracised by her local politician and staunchly anti-drug father should he find out, she feels at home after sniffing her 6th deliberately chunky line made up by Dolly, with the last one having had a bit of speed thrown in on the sly.
Swift little learner, you.
Dolly proudly says. This line understandably hits Daleth differently. She fidgets and struggles to sit still. Her head twitches erratically towards the kitchen and back. Her breathing becomes noticeably heavier.
Never felt less judged my whole life.
Daleth intensely tells Dolly with a mammoth grin as she passes over the plate.
What happens when you find the right people?
Dolly dips her head down to take a line.
Spiritual alignment.
Over in the kitchen, Damo and Ali watch on as Lee acts out fighting scenarios.
What you do, eh?
Lee pretends to jab a finger in each of Ali's eyes. Catching him off guard, he flinches backwards.
Fucking straight in for the googles like that.
Lee takes advantage of Ali's disorientation by swivelling around and locking his arms under Ali's shoulders from behind. Ali fiercely tries to escape, to no avail. Damo pitifully scoffs and pulls 4 red boxing gloves out of the kitchen cupboard.
I'll ref.
He holds the gloves out to Lee and Ali.
Fuck am I sparring Looney the First, man.
Ali fearfully says, with the concussion suffered after he was stupid enough last New Year's Eve still ringing in his ears. Lee rips the gloves out of Damo's hand, puts them on, and adopts a gangly southpaw boxing stance.
I'll spark you both out 2-on-1. Guaranteed.
Damo and Ali look at each other. Ali shakes his head. Lee gets down on his knees.
You lot don't even have to wear gloves. Give me the chance, Al.
Not on that one bit.
Ali says.
Fucking peahead.
Lee gets up in a huff.
I'll spar vegan here, though.
Ali points at Damo, who nods.
No one ever spars me, man.
Lee slams the gloves down on the floor, chugs a beer, and rolls a joint within their makeshift boxing ring.
Not moving.
Ali grins and throws the gloves on. Damo sets a 3-minute timer on the microwave and throws on the other pair. Over on the sofa, Justin holds a plate with a chunky line and a mini mountain of a gram's worth of cocaine to Glesney, with whom he's been trying desperately, without reciprocation, to chat up all night. She swiftly vacuums it up with a note, rubbing her nose hard afterwards.
Absolute natural with the 5-bar note, I see.
Justin says, with seductive sleaze.
One of my many talents.
Glesney cuttingly responds, while racking up another line from the pile.
You know, it's just nice to have birds around here for once. Not many have the guzzler for this sordid sack of a hellhole.
Lee squeezes himself in between Justin and Glesney, pushes Justin off the sofa, and snogs Glesney without invitation. Although met with shock initially, she quickly reciprocates. Justin watches in bewilderment before scuttling off to watch the boxing unfold in the kitchen. Ali throws a sharp jab and body combination at Damo, whose slick head movement manoeuvres him around most of them, his hands boldly kept down, offering no head protection, with the ones landing only glancing his face. Damo comes back at him with a right cross, landing flush on Ali's jaw as he leans in. Despite a loud crack, the punch fails to move Ali's head whatsoever. He swivels his neck back and devilishly smiles, ready for more. After a mere minute and a half of foreplay, Lee leads Glesney out of the room by a hand and up the stairs into the house's now famous shagging room. Unluckily for Frankie, this is the room directly next to his. It being designated in this way makes no logical sense, giving guys far bigger room with an actual bed instead of bending the girls, or guys in Damo's occasional case, over a chest of drawers or doing it on the wall. Lee elects for the wall this time, as poor Frankie lies on his bed, miserably watching a B-horror movie on film 4, unwittingly lapping up every second of Glesney's muzzled theatrical moaning. As Frankie necks 2 more Valium out of the strip, a loud slam of Kieran's customers barging in through the front door alarms hit him, causing him to cough on the beer and Valium partly lodged in his throat, but he recovers quickly enough to regain his breath. Glesney ferociously orgasms, which brings an end to at least one of the sources of irritating noises firing Frankie close to a sensory overload.
Glad you didn't fuck Wee now, aren't you?
Lee says, quickly snorting 2 quick-fire keys of cocaine one after another.
Bit of that?
Not that bash gab that's flying around down there, no.
Glesney asks.
I'll fucking have it then.
Lee loudly guzzles another 2 keys worth of cocaine before his thudding footsteps head towards Frankie's door. He smashes into it repeatedly.
Slashing out the window, you don't let me in.
Lee barges in, bollock naked, with his trousers around his ankles. A heavy box with 2 5-kilo dumbbells used to block the door is blown away.
This ain't the bog, no.
Alfie suffered viscerally following his self-inflicted local humiliation, with insult to injury added through his 100-hour community service sentence, served stacking the local British Heart Foundation's charity shop shelves. One of the only things that made it better was that he only had to stack the bottom shelves he could reach from a sitting position. A broken leg from the crash, which he's still in a cast for now, meant he couldn't stand up. Taking pity on him, the manager often chalked off 5 hours at a time, despite him only doing 1. Such was the humiliation, he's not dared show his face at any of the local snooker clubs, where he remains a laughingstock for having lied so publicly about turning pro, essentially confirming his retirement from the game. His cushy life at home with his parents, not having to pay rent, was brought to an end that day as well. Not for the arrest and community order, but for the shame they felt due to his lies and the ridiculing behind his father's back at the boisterous factory where he works as a line manager. As such, Alfie's had to make do with a surprisingly expensive run-down studio flat that swallows his entire income. Never has the nosedive Alfie one visit Fenner's life took from the heights of being on the verge of securing a place on the Snooker Pro Tour been made more evident than on this particular grotty night. Down in the dimly lit Peep nightclub's toilet, his unspectacular display of lotions, aftershaves, deodorants and towels sits behind him. Having been a particularly poor night of takings, he leans against the display with his pink and black snooker gilet on, as it has been practically everywhere since his fateful day attempting to secure the big time. Sean, a regular in the club who comes in by himself to pull women, most of the time unsuccessfully, lies passed out on the floor in a recovery position that Alfie put him in 10 minutes earlier. Done out of pity, and in order to shield him from the bouncers, who'd have gladly lobbed him out the door hours ago. Jitto and Bryn stumble out of the same toilet cubicle sneezing, both almost identical in looks, with shaved sides and the same tracksuit bottoms. All that separates them is Bryn's slightly darker shade of maroon-red Moncler polo shirt.
Take it easy, boys,
Alfie says. Jitto flings water out of his palm into Alfie's face, sending Bryn into hysterics.
In a bit, mate,
he sarcastically says, imitating a Cornish accent. Alfie firmly wipes the water off his face. Seething inside, but without the courage to say anything, he sits down and lights a fag. Sean groans on the floor. A perfect opportunity to take his bitterness out on him.
Get up!
Alfie prods Sean with his crutch, sapping enough of a reaction from him to just about lift his head up and rest his chin on the urinal edge, which he projectile vomits into.
Lightweight dick.
That's it. All of his display is shoved brashly into his black holdall an hour early. He's had it. 3 months off the coke are over. Tonight is the night. His only issue being deciding on how much is enough. A decision quickly rounded up to an eighth, leaving a cheeky few bumps worth possibly left over to face the bogs tomorrow, enough to fuel the courage to take on Jitto. Freshly stung by his rejection, Justin wipes butane hash oil on a king-size Rizzler in the middle of a credit card pipe-shaped, intent on getting as stoned as possible. His razor-sharp focus is marred by his phone ringing. Alfie's calling. It shows up on his screen as Hollywood One Visit, as he's commonly referred to by swathes of the community as of late.
The lad of all lads. Alfie One Visit Fenner. How the fuck is Hollywood?
Justin mockingly asks.
Scrubbing away as per.
Are you, yeah? Last I heard you'd hit the big time.
All have our ups and downs, boy.
Sure it wasn't your fault, mate.
Any chance of an 8 ball on tick, mate?
Look, I don't know you, do I?
Didn't say that.
Yeah, so why would I start you off with a 3.5 gram tick?
Of course not. You're spot on. You shouldn't have asked. Sure, I can sort something out. Sorry for asking.
Justin nods sarcastically.
Nah, don't worry about it. At all. Swing by tonight. Come have a jar.
Be right there, mate.
Sound? But it's 500 this time.
Shit the bed, wee-wee.
Well, for the A grade in stock, that's a no-brainer, lad.
All right.
Sound? In a bit, yeah.
Justin pulls the phone away, relieved at having finished the call. Looking forward to his largest sale of the day, he tucks his black oil-covered Rizzler and lights the tingling spliff.
All right then, wee-wee. 500 for an 8 ball. It's that snooker prick. Absolute gimp of a bloke. 100 just to get through that door. Spends decent money though, doesn't he?
Kieran disapprovingly says, without looking up. Fearful Justin's tarnished any hope of repeat business.
He wants to bang on about being some big shot snooker cunt when he works down a filthy bog, shot in rare bear knockoff aftershave, and he can pay top whack, and the fucking rest.
Kieran turns away, thoroughly put in his place for once in his domineering life. His irritation is short-lived, as he claps eyes on Dolly initiating Deleth into the crack cocaine world, leaving a great chance of Kieran having gained an extra customer, although her utter uselessness with a lighter proves a stumbling block initially. Dolly impatiently grabs the lighter and lights the horizontal-shaped pipe held to Deleth's mouth with her first attempt. She rips a hefty toke on it, grimaces, but carries on like a trooper.
Don't you dare stop. Will not be happy if you waste any.
Kieran gazes on eagerly and winks at Dolly. She smirks back, knowing a finder's fee of at least the wiping off of a score from her debt is on the cards. Deleth's eyes flutter as she pulls the pipe away from her lips. She lays back on the sofa. Her head twitches towards the kitchen periodically. After half an hour of Justin pranging for Alfie's arrival, Determined to withhold getting fully spangled until after his business for the day is done, his moment arrives. He lets Alfie in, powering ahead without patience, to wait for him to hobble down the corridor, and waves his arms out theatrically to present Alfie to the room as he enters.
One visit, lad. How's it going?
He rushes over and carefully takes off his chunky bag.
Will fit into our cloakroom impeccably, I'd have thought.
Damo and Alfie tap their shot glasses full of pink gin together and chug them simultaneously.
Sweet as, mate. Divine, that is.
Alfie wrings his face out and snorts the key of cocaine.
None of these shit shows will be seen dead drinking it.
Damo pours another 2 shots.
Yeah, I'd rather you didn't tell any of the snook lads about it and all.
Alfie holds a key brimming with cocaine near Damo's nose. That's swiftly dealt with. Damo taps his glass against Alfie's and they neck down their shots, with Damo reacting the stronger of the two on this occasion.
Who's your main practice squeeze these days then? Still Dom Dale?
Nah, sack that peasant off donkeys ago, boy. Squirm didn't have it in him.
Damo struggles to restrain a chuckle and turns away to avoid detection, then pours another 2 shots from the now half-empty bottle.
Rick Walden these days, really? He just about competes.
Alfie looks around the room.
What about old Frank, boy? Where's he at? Handy, ain't he?
Oh, proper character round the gaff he is. Yeah, I do like Frankie.
Do you?
Hell of a lot, actually.
Alfie tokes on his fag and stares Damo in the eye.
Flaky cunt will let you down one day, Bert. Grasp that the hard way.
Top soldier is Frankie.
Damo turns away to pour another shot, but turns back before pouring it.
Think I have a chance?
A chance?
You know, what are my chances?
Alfie's eyebrows lift up, initially surprised at the mere concept of Frankie being gay. He ponders before nodding.
Got a few Zans, bit of bugle on you. More than a chance with him these days, mate.
Damo cups his mouth, mimicking concern.
You think? Tragic what a state it is some people get in.
Any sympathy for that dweeb I had shattered the day he got his old man sent down. What kind of horrible cunt does that? Not as if Gibbo killed him, did he? Prick deserves everything he gets. Snaky little thing. Guy's life's fucked.
Damo swigs out of the pink gin bottle while staring at Alfie.
Like your style.
Lee bursts into the room topless, singing the lyrics to Danny California, Red Hot Chili Peppers. Glesney follows shortly after and scurries into the living room, uncomfortable with the beady attention on her as she enters.
Quite the natter.
Damo winks at Alfie, struts over to Lee with the pink gin in hand and sings wildly to Danny California. Lee grabs the bottle off Damo and swigs some without his lips touching the bottle, spilling some on his chest. He spits it out and pours some on his head. Lee bursts into Frankie's room, obliterating the makeshift doorstop and chipping the bottom corner of the door frame. Frankie's just finishing a piss in his sink. He rushes to pull his trousers up and cowers on his bed.
Fuck off, Lee.
Lee walks over to the back of his bed.
Wish it were that simple. This is a socio-political matter that just can't be swerved.
He forcibly grabs Frankie's hands and handcuffs them to the bed frame.
Drastic action's the only way.
Frankie wildly flaps his legs as Damo enters, holding a roll of thick masking tape.
Not enough having the whole house for your game. Gotta fuck with me and all, have you?
Damo and Lee hold Frankie's legs and tape them together.
You're just too much competition for the birds downstairs, lad.
Lee says with a grin.
I don't fucking like any of your birds. Far from the issue in hand. Swear down. It's you they're after, I'm afraid. And numbers are shaky as it is.
And as per your exemplary cooperation in helping us create a fair and safe environment for all to flourish in.
Damo takes 3 Valium out of a strip and dangles them in front of Frankie with an unnerving smirk.
I'm already off my chops.
Damo drops all 3 pills in Frankie's mouth. He's struggling to swallow them and gasps for air. Damo holds his nose and pours half a can of Carling down his throat.
The fuck?
Lee shudders and turns pale, finding this sadistic even by his standards. Damo eventually lets go of Frankie's nose and he gasps harrowingly for air. After allowing him to take in a good few breaths, Damo tapes up his mouth.
Now, you're gonna be here until the birds leave. Okay, mate. Hope that's alright, yeah?
Damo grabs the TV remote and sticks on a Freeview porn channel, one with a naked lady prancing around that you can only hear audibly through paying 80p a minute. He nods his head towards the door. Lee takes a guilty look back at Frankie. and briskly walks out. They head downstairs to find everyone but Alfie chaotically raving to a roller's drum and bass tune, the party having well and truly kicked off. He unassertively hobbles his way through the crowd and walks out. Big Al steps in Deep We Trust mix, blares out of the speaker, and is met by a collective roar of enthrallment. Kieran and Ali snore chunky lines, and everyone goes mad for the tune. Lee joins in, far less enthusiastically than the rest. After what feels like a 10-hour doze, but is more like 2, Frankie wakes up, lying towards the door, to his pants being pulled down from behind. He screams. His mouth cover muffles the sound, and he thrusts his legs at the assailant, which shimmies him over to being lying flat on his back. Spotting it's Damo, he walks over to face him, grinning evilly, sweating buckets with his eyes bulging.
Flapping's only gonna make it worse.
Frankie weeps and flails every body part available to him as much as his restrictions allow. Growing frustrated by Frankie's lack of submission, Damo grabs hold of him.
Fuck this!
Damo lets go and smacks Frankie on the jaw with 2 consecutive downward hard hooks that daze Frankie and slow him down. Unsatisfied by the results, Damo shakes his head and lands another punch to Frankie's midriff. Frankie whimpers as blood trickles from a cut under his eye. Damo takes a 4-inch skin-coloured dildo out of his pocket.
Just gonna loosen you up a bit.
Damo throws Frankie over to face the door and rubs his chest. Frankie screams as Damo quickly thrusts the dildo up his arse. This goes on for a couple of minutes, with Frankie becoming mute after the first few. Damo then gets out his kit and masturbates violently, only taking 20 seconds to climax. He pulls up his trousers and heads towards the door, biting his lip, nodding and appearing thoroughly proud of himself.
Now, I'm just getting to know you at this point, not really sure where you've been, so be difficult for me to say when I'm ready to take the plunge. Move this forward a bit, but you're doing everything right so far,
Damo adds, leaving Frankie sprawled out on the bed. A few hours later, during which time Damo came up and unlocked the handcuffs, Frankie wakes up to Dolly shouting in his dry blood-covered face. He slowly gains consciousness as Dolly peels the tape off his mouth, only managing to do so partly before Frankie backs away.
Oh, get away! Get away now!
Frankie slays, the Valium still affecting his senses and ability to speak coherently all these hours later. Suddenly he realises his hands are free and scrambles to rip off the tape, first from his mouth and then his legs. Dolly reaches over tentatively to help him. Frankie backs off and holds his clenched fists up.
Get your fucking hands off me!
Frankie warns as he bulldozes past her, knocking her to the floor. Without his phone or any belongings but the clothes on his back, he limps down the stairs and stumbles out of the door. After reaching the town centre 5 minutes away, it dawns on him that he brought nothing along, including his tobacco. Beginning to feel dizzy and becoming increasingly disoriented, he's drawing peculiar looks from pedestrians, some worried for him, with others finding his plight hilarious, including a group of 4 young chav teenagers. Nobody steps in, with most assuming him to just be a heroin addict, including a mother with 4 kids who warns them not to stare. Frankie approaches a frail-looking pedestrian in a cheap dark suit.
Can I borrow your phone?
I'm out of credit, mate.
The pedestrian fearfully backs away and speeds off in the opposite direction. Frankie sticks his swollen head into his hands, which get covered in fresh blood stemming from his nose. He stumbles over to the open window of Clio Lounge restaurant and falls into the vacant window ledge, bouncing out onto the concrete via cracking his chest on an empty plastic table. On this occasion, people do scurry over to help in droves, ironically after it's too late. A community police officer takes him up to hospital in their cop car, having been quoted a 3-hour wait for an ambulance. Frankie's rectum leaks out blood en route, staining the seats, and leaving the officer secretly bewailing the decision to take him up, dreading the potential added hour of his shift to clean it up. They decide to keep him in overnight, to be assessed by a mental health team tomorrow. His retina is detached again, however, the same one previously damaged, and he sustained nasty internal bruising around his rectum, such was the force used by Damo. After being left alone for a couple of hours, Diffrig, A suave detective in his 50s with tidy hair in a brown leather jacket cautiously enters Frankie's cubicle, his jacket beaming under the hospital's bright lights. Closely behind him is his stern partner Johan, whose shaved buzzcut only adds to his unsavoury aura. Not someone you'd want to meet in a dark alley.
You're not in trouble, okay, Frankie?
Diffrig softly says. Frankie barely lifts his head up in acknowledgement.
I'm Detective Sergeant Duvrig Rowlands.
And I'm Detective Constable Johan Ellis.
You're not obliged to speak to us in any way. We know you had absolutely bugger all to do with the alleged operations commencing at your address. We just want to help punish who did this to you.
One of the trap house lads, was it?
Diffrig glares at Johan. Frankie lightly nods.
Damo.
Johan and Diffrig gaze at each other with a grave concern.
Are you referring to Damien Hayward?
Both are already highly familiar with Damo. Johan in particular, having found out he's been texting his 14-year-old daughter, a fortunate discovery before their planned meet went ahead. Although due to Damo cleverly making the text non-sexual, no charges prevailed for that incident. Frankie nods and collapses into the bed, tears streaming down his face.
Him and a bunch of his goons. They moved into my house, took it over. It was only supposed to be him and Justin Wily for a few days. Oh, didn't pan out like that. Had their boss living there, horrible cunt. People in and out for cat, valleys, skag, the fucking lot.
He has a break and takes deep breaths until he regains somewhat of his composure.
Look, I could just about cope with all that. Get on with my day. I mean, I didn't have a fucking choice, but Damo.
Frankie goes on to tell them every last detail of the horrendous event and everything that preceded it. Both Johan and Diffrig leave shocked to the core, which, especially for Johan, takes some doing. Never has a case been as important as this one in their careers. Glesley, Lee, Ali and Delith lie asleep on uncomfortable makeshift beds in the designated shagging room with thin blankets. Glesley's spooning Lee, while Ali and Delith face one another with their hands around each other. Lee jumps up, and overcome by paranoia, he looks out the window to see a black Mercedes parked outside, with a police van pulling up and another one behind it.
Shit the bed, man.
Lee sprints over to Ali and shakes him.
Ow, get up now.
With no luck getting a response, Lee shoves 2 sealed bags with 7 grams of cocaine into his pocket and slaps Ali on the back of the head. Still no response. Ali's body having been entirely depleted after sniffing at least 4 grams of bash the night before. Glesley and Delith wake up among the commotion. Delith peeks out of the window and frantically throws on her clothes.
Gwell bod nhw'n deitha ffocin dad fi de cont.
Tid flaen a Nathan oedd him. Ow, get your Kenny, now. Cops are going to be flying in here any second.
Ali stretches his arm out to push Lee away, but misses.
I'm shagging, mate.
He mumbles, still half asleep. Lee slaps Ali on the forehead again, this time with the desired effect.
NWP are coming for your gear, you dingler fuck.
Ali's eyes burst open. He jumps up, scrambles to collect his half-ounce bags of cocaine and ketamine, and sloppily throws his stripy t-shirt on the wrong way around. Lee grabs 2 half-drunk beers off the side, throws a bag of ketamine over to Ali and walks out.
Not waiting for you.
All 4 run out of the room. With Ali still putting on his trousers, he lags behind. At the top of the stairs, Lee sticks his finger on his mouth and chugs a beer as they all tiptoe down the stairs and sneak into the living room. Justin and Dolly lie sprawled out on a folded-out sofa bed. Justin spoons Dolly from a comically long distance away. Kieran and Damo both lie fast asleep, sat upright on the other sofa, with Damo's snoring mouth being wide open. Lee lobs his empty beer bottle at the wall. That, with the cutting loud knocks from the front door, wake Kieran, Damo, Dolly and Justin up.
Raid of the century outside, boys.
Lee warns them before sprinting out, followed by the others.
All the best,
Ali says to Kieran. Appearing by far the most anxious, Damo peeks out of the window. He shuts them in horror and crouches down out of sight. Having been in this situation on numerous occasions, Kieran urgently grabs 3 bags of disposable wipes and gets to work. First scrubbing off the residue covering trays and cases, then throwing all the smaller bags of cocaine down the sinkhole.
I'm done for you!
Damo punches the table at full pelt.
Fucking shut up, man. Get rid of all the residue, little bit, and we're sound.
Kieran pelts a bag of wipes at Justin, who's not possessing quite the level of urgency needed as he gathers his senses.
And you and all wee.
Justin belatedly gets going, with wiping down the table and dropping his personal stash of ketamine down the sink.
Cheers for the glorious opportunities you've afforded me, Keys.
Damo blubbers. Kieran gazes over at Dolly and Justin suspiciously, who are both blank.
They're not gonna find the big bits. Not where I stashed them. Be fucking sure of that.
Kieran's interrupted by the bashing open of the front door. He claps his ears, grimaces, and closes his eyes while enduring a flashback of a similar memory at the age of 9. Something he thought was long over. 2 kitted up riot officers march upstairs shouting, "Police, this is a raid," repeatedly, and tear apart the bedroom, chucking everything left off the shelves around. Another 2 head into the living room. Diffrig and Neuadd waltz in, cool, calm, collected, and full of hope. Damo's face sinks to new lows.
I'm Detective Sergeant Duvrig Rowlands, and this is Detective Constable Johan Ellis.
Doubt I really need to bore you with what's happening here.
Riot officers aggressively investigate the kitchen area.
North Wales Police Special. Tearing apart another perfectly civilised household for fuck all.
Diffrig sarcastically nods at Johan.
That's civilised, we just left sniffers in the car for their own safety.
Bastards! Not only do you take those dogs' lives away, their freedom to be your little slaves, but then you bring them places when you don't even need them. Cruel as they come, unforgivable misuse of our taxpayers' dough. The lot of this is.
Don't you worry, Darlington. They'll make a cameo if required.
Johan boots a bit of stray broken glass off the floor that hits Damo on the shoulder. Damo doesn't dare react and keeps his quivering gaze well away from Johan. Kieran gets up and puffs out his chest.
Pipe down, you meatball cunt, or I'll flatten you.
A riot officer clatters his heavy feet down the stairs and hands Diffrig a plastic-sealed bag with Damo's dildo inside.
Amateur hour,
he adds before rushing back upstairs.
It's not mine.
Damo blurts out, feeling the wrath of Diffrig and Johan's piercing glares.
The problem we have is that it matches the description of the very object used to carry out a seedy sexual assault.
To put it mildly.
At these very premises, this very morning.
Kieran grits his teeth and glares at Damo.
Fucked up you have, lad.
Come with us, will you? We can rule you out and find out whose this really is.
Diffrig bends down to face Damo.
Wouldn't even be here if it was just the gear.
He says while looking at Kieran at the same time.
Damien Hayward, you're under arrest on the suspicion of sexual assault by penetration and possession with the intent to supply Class A drugs.
He roughly throws the handcuffs on Damo. Kieran spits on the floor.
Dandraft isn't a Class A anymore, mate.
Dolly points out.
Yeah. How can you do him for A's?
Justin adds. Diffrig and Johan head towards the sofa.
Up!
Johan shouts at Kieran, who doesn't budge.
You were warned, lard arse.
Johan picks Kieran up by the shoulders and launches him into the kitchen, sending him stumbling into Damo. Kieran shoves him violently into the wall to cushion his fall. Diffrig uncompromisingly rips off the sofa cushions, sticks his hand deep under into the crevices, and proudly presents a loose gram-sized bud of weed.
Bit of that ground up on the steak and chips after.
He gratefully pockets it. Johan bends down onto the floor and pulls out a 1/4-ounce bag of ketamine from the tight gap under the sofa. Justin's vacant expression turns into one of despair.
Should just about do it, for now.
That's ketamine, actually, lads.
Only a bead if. Forgot ket was legal.
Johan pulls a sarcastically fearful face at Diffrig, interrupted by a snarling bark from a couple of dogs scuttling up the stairs. All are cuffed and taken by riot officers towards the van with little fuss made, all having resigned themselves to their immediate fate. This can't be said for Damo, who's taken away kicking and screaming separately to the Mercedes with Johan and Diffrig.
I want to go in the van with them.
Damo begs, fearing their suspicions that he may be grassing if taken in separately. Johan swivels Damo around to face Kieran, Justin and Dolly as they're loaded onto the police van.
Say bye-bye to the lads.
He holds Damo's arm and mimics a floppy wave with it before slamming him headfirst into the car, so hard that he's lodged into the gap between the seats. That's not where the day's brutality ends for Damo. After his no-comment interview, they leave him in the dark room for half an hour, and with the promise of a blind eye being turned, return with Gavin to batter the sexual deviant to within the brink of consciousness. They only stop when Neuadd brings in a pole and threatens to shove it up Damo's arse. They leave him in Gavin's capable hands, whose night shift it is that evening in the holding cells. Relishing this opportunity down to his respect for Frankie, he launches Damo into the cell once everyone's done with him. Damo clatters into the wall, head first, and collapses onto the bed, crying his eyes out, with his face cut around his eye and blood spewing out of his mouth. He attempts to sit up against the wall with great difficulty, and coughs up blood as the door slams shut. Chapter 9. In the Drink. Della's father had grown tired of her lies, a long time before the fateful night of the raid, and had long suspected her of drug use, way before it was ever a problem, given his tendency to think the worst of his eldest child, the scapegoat of the family. His connections with people high up in the policing service through his political work ensured he found out the minute Justin and Damo got taken in. As such, following a furious 48 hours of rampant sex and sniffing speed with Lee, Ali and Glesney in Ali's grotty halfway house bedroom, she stumbled home, shivering from the cold sweat of her horrific come-down, only to disastrously find her essentials sprawled out in bin bags outside their 4-bedroom detached family house in the Garth area. With little choice in the matter, she sought Dolly out, who'd been the only one released without charge, and ended up crashing on the floor of her council-owned studio flat. What was initially hoped to be a week turned into a month, with both enjoying each other's company despite the cramped surroundings. Other than having to leave the flat when Dolly got the occasional in-call from a bloke on adult work, something that her poor rating on the site meant was becoming increasingly infrequent. This worked out for Delith. She'd longed for this type of closeness and supposed understanding for a long time. What this did mean was that her drug use skyrocketed, and such was her abuse of crack, and that she was tempted into trying heroin a few weeks later by Dolly, on the promise it would help the unbearable come-downs. Part of Dolly's willingness to accommodate her stemmed from the $2,000 in savings Delith had accumulated that summer working in the Snowdon mountaintop cafe, only saved up because of her then sobriety. But as this inevitably dwindled, along with Dolly's income, tensions between the two began to intensify, and after a month, they both now spend their daytimes begging on Bangor High Street in between Dolly's occasional paid romp. On one of these dreary days, the rainiest of the winter so far, Delith spends the early morning tearing down every one of her father's campaign posters, titled Rhenast Parry MP Plaid Cymru, and with a headshot of his speckled, gawky face looking righteous and wearing an ill-fitting suit. She's doing Bangor a favour. Her motivations being to stifle his campaign to retain the Arfon seat in the upcoming general election. Proud of her morning's work, she struts over to Dolly, who's sitting miserably under the doorway of a derelict old shop, a dusty sleeping bag over her, as most pass by barely looking her way. Spotting a kind young man cruising past on a longboard, Dolly jumps up.
"Excuse me there, gent. Spare a lass of squiddy, would you?"
she confidently asks. He throws 2 Marlboro gold fags and 10 pence into the pouch set out for collecting change.
That's all I've got. Sorry.
He holds a peace sign up with his fingers as he cruises off. Dolly blows him a kiss and lights one of the fags up. After no time, she spots another potential target, a short, suited passerby.
"Couldn't spare 2 down and out of some Skrilla, could you, please, fine sir?"
Might as well jam a prick up your vein myself.
"Matey here needs bus fare. Final round of chemo, actually,"
Dolly shouts as the suited man speeds off. After a few miserable, unprofitable hours, and with the thundering rain forming puddles verging on reaching the slightly elevated level of their empty shop door, a ping on Dolly's phone delights her. She shows Delith the confirmation of a double female order, or FF as the site abbreviates it.
FF? The fuck you mean?
Delith folds her arms.
Never said nothing about that.
"Oh, come on, we've got to now."
"Oh, cunt you are."
Delith nods, not needing much time to think. Dolly jumps up, dances over to her sleeping bag, and stuffs it in a mountaineering rucksack.
"I won't fucking touch you, even if he begs."
Dolly gets in Delith's face, her eyes bulge out manically.
240 bar, mate. Sesh we're gonna have after.
They leg it off to the public toilets by the grubby bus station and lock themselves into separate grim cubicles with shit-stained toilets and overflowing needle bins attached to the wall. Dolly throws on her best makeup, save for orders above £80, and changes into a blouse, firmly revealing her C-cup cleavage.
Chuck us a Sid Del.
Yet to finish her makeup, Dallas lobs a fag into Dolly's cubicle, and it lands straight in the filthy toilet water.
In the fucking drink, you absolute drip. Chucking over another or what?
Dallas grunts, annoyed at being interrupted midway through applying eyeliner. She throws another over and drops the packet on the floor. In her attempt to bend down and pick it up, she knocks her hip into the needle bin, and a few fall out without pricking her. After taking 10 minutes to clear out all the dry bark blood from her nose with tissue, in which time 2 separate heroin addicts stand queuing for the cubicle to shoot up in, they're both prim and proper, ready to go, if they can get to Jewson's factory without the rain slithering off their makeup. After a sombre day in the cells, and having been warned he faces a minimum 5-year sentence, it's fair to say Damo's mental state is hanging on a knife's edge. Not least after the guarantee of being sent back to HMP Bryn should he be sentenced, where not only will Kieran and Justin end up, but where he also owes £100 for cocaine to a vicious dealer that's still locked up. A debt he never paid after boldly thinking he'd never be sent back down to face it. However, after a Facebook message promising to bum the living HIV into him should he ever clap eyes on him again, Damo's well and truly bricking it for one of the first times in his adult life. Using the only means available to him, he decides to try and end it all. One by one, he stuffs squares of tissue paper into his mouth until about the 5th, when he starts loudly gagging. Sat a mere 2 meters away from the cell, and fresh from chugging 3 Monster energy drinks in the first 5 hours of his night shift, Gavin beams a flashlight into the cell, storms in, and snatches the bog roll off Damo, holding it up in front of him with his other hand holding Damo's floundering chin.
Not leaving me that easily.
Gavin sticks a blue disposable glove on, jams his fingers down Damo's throat and holds his head over the bed until he vomits all over the thin bedding. Gavin repeats this, then throws Damo's head down, leaving him in the cell alone in his own pool of bile. Dolly and Delith restlessly wait by the derelict Jewson's factory, furious with their customer pulling up half an hour after the agreed meeting time. Delith trembles, not being as hardened to the cold as the hardy Dolly. Trudging slowly towards them, in a brand new saloon Mercedes with blank-tinted windows, is the grey-haired, well-spoken Bangor Golf Club stalwart known only to prostitutes as Sir. He lowers the window. Dolly rests her arms on its ledge.
How are you, sir? Back for more, I can't help but see.
Certainly not from you, thieving little toe rag.
Sir snaps back. He takes a look at Delith, who's hovering a few meters away from the car smoking, and sighs resentfully.
She'll have to do, by herself.
Sir whistles Delith over and turns to Dolly.
Bugger all like your profile. Joke shop.
Delith sticks her head in the car window.
Half hour, fuck all more, and it's 150.
Sir rolls his eyes and eventually agrees.
We'll soon see if you're worth the hype.
Delith jumps into the back seat.
Front.
Delith begrudgingly climbs through the middle of the front seats onto the passenger side, while Sir glares anxiously as her muddy trainers muck up the motor's interior. Dolly's eye makeup trickles down her cheek as she stares at them pulling off. Once back and shaken up by her first ever paid rim job, that netted her an extra £30 tip that she's not going to tell Dolly about, they head up the narrow Bangor mountain path, just in time for happy hour. Between 6 and 7, there's always a dealer waiting, being the only time of the day where an appointment isn't necessary, and so not followed by the inevitable extra 20 minutes of waiting. Good old reliable Ginger Dave is duly there, dishing Richie a dressing down about the £50 he owes for crack, an addiction that spiralled drastically despite only having started taking cocaine in his 30s. He tells Richie to fuck off as he spots the girls heading up towards him. Richie subtly brushes past the both of them, catching a quick feel of their asses. This doesn't faze Dolly, but Delith grimaces.
Only doing ganj on the gram, ladies.
Dave asserts, having grown sick of Dolly trying her luck to reduce the prices of his quarter ounces.
We'll have 2 brown, 4 white, and as many valleys as 30 bars will bag us.
Dave's incredibly swift hands assemble the order in no time. He holds it out to Dolly, who glares at Delith.
I'll have 2 brown, 2 white, and a cube of green, please.
As well?
If she's just shat a wanna out of her arse, then yeah, both. But that's what I'm having.
Delith holds out £80.
Oh, fucking frugies, man.
Dave hastily puts some of the bags away.
Come down with no valleys, though,
Dolly vulnerably says, skint having spent the only £3 she made from begging on a rare Tesco tuna and sweet corn sandwich meal deal, her first proper meal in 3 days.
Me that just rim job that shrimpy fucking cretin. I'll get what I want.
Deleth storms away up the mountain. Dolly follows her in a huff, while Dave enjoys the sight of their asses as they trudge up to a filthy shattered glass, empty beer can and NOS calendar-ridden benched area overlooking Bangor University. Frankie's already waiting up there ready for them, having clocked the two by Juicens, knowing exactly where their predictable selves would end up after. They kept in touch after the rape, mainly down to Frankie's spiralling heroin addiction, while he also conveniently allows her around to shoot up once in a while. He sat on a graffiti-drenched bench, swigging out of a 1-litre bottle of Jack Daniels. Dolly duly agrees to give him a hit, but one hit only, and not before she goes first, yanking the whiskey off of him for the first hefty swig of many in return. Deleth wraps a strap around Dolly's arm, holds the needle steady, and injects her. With her work for the day done, and determined to enjoy her own share after forking out for the entire feast of drugs, Deleth takes in a bustling pipe's worth of crack. Dolly lies sprawled out on the bench, passed out, while Frankie wraps his arm with a strap, holding it in his mouth. Two weeks into his 5-year sentence, Damo's already repaid his £100 debt with a series of sexual favours, including an evening of sucking off 4 of the dealer's associates. Not only because of this, his popularity is at an all-time low after Neuadd made a point of telling all the prisoners about his liking for young girls. With Justin, Kieran and Lee all now having been sentenced for their crimes and blanking him, a friendly smile by Brad, the lanky Scouse kitchen head chef who's serving a 10-year sentence for credit card fraud, gives Damo butterflies.
Christmas bonus for your graft, lad.
Brad takes Damo's empty tray and grabs another one from underneath the counter that has sausage mash and jelly on.
Cheers.
Damo walks off suspiciously. Damo spots Guy, Justin and Kieran on a table at the far end. None of them so much as peek his way. Not that he expected them to. So he heads over to a table where his cellmate Miriam, who was sentenced to 6 years for child porn offences, sits alone. His hostile, hateful gaze leaves no question as to why. Damo nods his head subtly at him, and doesn't get any more than a pitiful gaze in response. Damo plays around with his food, cuts off a small portion of sausage and winces as he chews it, hard as rubber.
Jelly, right up a corner, side nearest to you.
Miriam barks out without looking at Damo.
Fuck, are you having any of this?
Jelly, right up a corner, side nearest to you.
Damo grits his teeth.
4 days of hunger, lad. Going to have to be something pretty shit hot you want any of this.
Miriam impatiently sighs.
Have a look. Why on earth would I want that?
Damo spots semen on his jelly, gags and pushes the tray away.
They forget to do all that now and then, when the spice is flying about.
Miriam presents a bit of phlegm from his plate on a chunk of uneaten turkey breasts.
But those days, few and fucking far between.
Damo looks around the canteen and wearily sinks into his chair. Hungry to the point of delirium, Damo lies on his cell bed, pinching himself and tears little cuts into his arms. Miriam forcefully applies face wash lotion, spots Damo struggling to even break his skin and scoffs.
Mate, all you've got to do.
He snatches the nail clippers and cuts his nails into wonky sharp shapes.
Bit sharp and wonky.
He holds his hand up to Damo, who nods and tamely takes the clippers.
Going about that like the gimp you are.
Miriam returns to his focus to the mirror and sniggers. Damo clips his fingernails into unorthodox shapes as demonstrated. Justin and Kieran sneak past the cell, which Miriam spots in the mirror. Damo rolls up his sleeves, ready to open up the half-assed attempts at lacerations.
Bit of classic Freeview on the big screen for me.
Miriam walks backwards out of the room, adjusting his ear in view of the mirror until he gets to the doorway.
Miriam's the name and Jezekyl's my game.
Kieran subtly nods at Guy as him and Justin pass by his cell, where he's reading 442 magazine on his bed. He grins, gets up, grabs an already boiled kettle, whacks a whole bag of sugar into the water and carefully folds the empty sugar packet into a plastic bag. After a bit of a stare, he marches into Damo's cell, kettle in hand, and throws the content onto Damo's arms and chest.
Be a lot lower than that next, boy.
Guy warns, before leaving him in the cell screeching in agony. Guy rushes back to his cell, throws the kettle in the plastic bag and marches through the corridor. Many of the inmates, including Miriam, smile and nod in respect as he passes by, while others remain engrossed by the Jeremy Kyle repeat on telly, the episode that got the show banned, a favourite of this group that's watched at least weekly. Already waiting by the shower door is Kieran with a beaming smile while Guy strips down and hands his clothes over.
Kieran hands Guy a fresh grey jumpsuit, stacks the incriminating clothes in a bag with the kettle and sugar packet, then urgently leaves straight out to the back.
A pre-arranged delay of the dustbin lorry gives Kieran the chance to throw the bin bag on the back of it. He whistles, chucks his thumb up, and the lorry drives off. Guy scrubs himself down, a beaming sense of pride evident, as if all of his bad parenting was outdone in that one moment of clinical retribution, when in actual fact, he wouldn't have even considered doing it, but for the added anger of Damo using his house for gay sex. That was the step too far for him, not the raping of his son. Kieran and Justin's debt and fear of him after using his place unbeknown gives him every reason to believe the rest of this 2-year sentence will be a dawdle. Dazzler lies on his bed, dismayed at the lack of response from Frankie, who he sends the 9th unanswered text to in a period of 6 weeks.
After having his transfer to Colleen Bay care home delayed due to a lack of space, it has been beating after beating for Dazzler.
Without ever finding the right jiu-jitsu move to get Ben down, he remains in fear of what might happen, with Wilder and Johnny having both been shipped out without him. Ben answers the front door after the doorbell's hammered for 20 seconds.
Excuse me, mate. Sorry to bother you. Just we've had Barry, your lads, shot next to our gaff.
Dazzler scrambles over to the window.
A white jacket-wearing Scouser, one of Damo's dealer's associates, Jez, sporting a black shoulder-length side fringe hairstyle, is stood there.
Have they now?
Ben says.
Definitely green, but you never know what else. That's all we can smell like. Didn't want to have to come here, but it's like where the little ones fuck about it and that.
Jez keeps word to word to the script he'll be paid £40 in cocaine for delivering that evening.
Gone to the police, have you, lad?
No. I was hoping to see how avoidable that was.
Spot on. Won't happen again.
About time, mate. Much appreciated.
Jez slams the front door, throws his hood up, gets on his BMX and glares up viciously at Dazzler as he cycles off. With no messing about, Ben comes thundering up the stairs. Dazzler closes his eyes, shaking and weeping, distraught that this cruel world's got the better of him. Ben smashes on the door, a drawer blocks it. Dazzler grits his teeth, takes in some deep breaths, and grabs a cloth from the side. Under the cloth lies a sharp, shiny kitchen knife. Dazzler grips it confidently, gathering his senses and composure, ready for battle. The end.
What on earth are you on? Fucking fry up?
Didn't have a chance to scram my bastard cereal, did I?
Frankie responds, hiding his paralysing fear of Alfie's disapproval.
What kind of freak has a beer with a fry-up?
Frankie shrugs and takes a decent chug of beer.
Take another swig of that and I ain't paying for the order.
Frankie continues to swig his beer.
At least a 5-mile trek down to 55 from here, Bert. Not like you've got any dough on you, is it?
Alfie's focus quickly returns to the bottle of Hobgoblin.
I just can't hack this monstrosity.
Alfie grabs the bottle out of Frankie's outstretched hand and pulls it out of the back door, much to the shock of the surrounding tables, other than a couple of fat, hairy bikers purely absorbed in the entertainment unfolding in front of them.